Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. A horde of monsters is flying into attack. Humanity is on the verge of extinction. The monster has red eyes. The apocalypse is happening because of the evil god Vindrake. An army of mutants is attacking. There are a lot of them. Evil monsters are killing people, causing chaos on the planet. Thousands of mutants are rioting. A strong explosion occurs in the middle of them. Vindrake sees this. 5 heroes with different weapons are standing in front of him. Humanity still has one last hope. The guy calmly casts a spell. They are the most powerful magicians of humanity who are fighting the evil god. Shocked mutants see him. Hordes of monsters go on the attack. The guys activate magic signs. The commander orders to prepare their spells. Streams of fire burst out of these magic seals. The protagonist with a stern look turns to the evil god. Putting his hand in front of him, he sees a monster. He moves his fingers and uses magic. While telling the others to combine spells, combine all 6 attributes to shoot at the same time. A fireball flies towards Vindrake after using elemental explosion. The other guys are watching with gritted teeth. One of them asks Setsuna for help. Several streams of energy connect and attack the enemy. The mage in glasses exclaims with a smile, "What about it?" Smoke dissipates across the battlefield. The evil god looks at them calmly. He remained unharmed. The shocked fighters discuss that this is impossible. Another offers to hit him even harder. The squad leader seriously demands to stop and look there. Streams of energy of different colors fly towards the monster. A bright light forms around the evil god. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist thinks that the magic is cancelled. Vindrake with green tentacles all over his body remained unharmed. He asks if it is true that the best mages of humanity are in front of him. Hanging over them, he claims that they are just insects that crawl and rot in his garden, stupid and pathetic creatures. The girl with the green crystal on her head states that it is impossible, that their magic does not work against him. The red-haired guy asks Setsuna what they should do. The mage nervously thinks that there must be something they can do. Suddenly one of them is attacked. The guy flies to the side leaving bloody traces. They turn around and see that they are surrounded. The green stone is in the staff. The frightened heroine states that her mana is depleted. The guy sees how his friends are grabbed. They ask to save them. One of them is absorbed by the monster. The protagonist looks at this in horror. In rage, he forms charges of magic and screams for the bastard to stop. Suddenly feels the approach of the evil god behind him. In shock, he looks back. The bloody protagonist lies on the ground. Holding on to deep wounds, he rises. Blood flows from his mouth, looks forward. He sees dead people in front of him. Everything around is burning. Clenches his fist, assuming that this is the end and humanity has been defeated. Vindrake hovers behind him, saying that it was a futile struggle. The protagonist, with wild eyes, realizes that this is not the end. Smoke forms in his hand. He hits the evil god on the torso. A bright light appears. The monster looks at this in surprise. He blocked the blow by crossing his arms, but he has a visible wound. The boy wonders if this really worked. He jumps back from the monster, wondering how such a low-level magic can harm him. Clenching his fist, the protagonist realizes that he can defeat the evil god with this. His hand sparkles, thinking about how he only realized this now. The evil god begins to glow with purple light, screaming in rage that this is the limit that this bug can reach. The boy feels a light in his chest in shock. Blue energy bursts out of his pendant, realizing that this is what he received from the school principal. The boy stands near the principal, holding a pendant, asks about the necklace of reincarnation. He agrees. In his hand is an attribute. It is said that this necklace contains the power of spirit and time. He will have enough strength to at least once correct his past regrets. The protagonist looks at the teacher and talks about regret about the past, specifying that he has never felt this before, and does he think that it will be useful. The principal laughs, saying that this is what was expected from the best graduate of the Magic Academy. Putting his hand on the student's shoulder, he expresses confidence that the necklace will be useful to him in the future. The protagonist squeezes the pendant from which streams of energy burst out, thinking about regret. The brightest flash occurs. He promises that this time he will definitely win it. The student sits in the hall with his head down. He opens his eyes, squinting from the light. The blonde behind him lightly hits him on the back, saying that he should not dream too much, because he is next. Astonished, Setsuna turns around and notices Leo. He only smiles, and the protagonist realizes that he should have disappeared before the evil god appeared. Raising his head, the protagonist thinks that he really went back 10 years. With a grin, he clenches his fist and thinks that he will not allow their defeat to happen again. He will definitely defeat Vindrake. A friend puts his hand on his shoulder and says that they are at a blessing ceremony and he is next. He understands. He goes forward, approaches the teachers. The guys talk about how he is now the greatest genius in the history of the academy. The other replies that there are rumors that he has an affinity for each of the magical paths. The bearded man opens the book. Setsuna closes himself from the wind flow. There are different paths in magic. Sorcerers and cloaks stand on signs. It is explained that various techniques are needed to activate magic, which is why you should choose a magical path. This makes it difficult to study the magic of different paths. The protagonist stands in the middle of these signs. It is said that this is similar to believing in two gods at the same time. The man smiles and addresses him, saying that he needs to choose the path of magic that he likes. The guy points his finger. The question sounds that the choice will be like this. Setsuna seriously thinks about long-range magic, because this is usually the right choice. A fireball flies, destroying everything around. Elements are created from mana and then directed at the enemy. With a low risk of being attacked, a long-range attack is usually enough to win. Drake stands in front of multicolored energies. It is said that with long-range magic, the protagonist became the most powerful wizard in the world, but it is useless against an evil god. The guy turns around, silently stands, turns his legs, stands in front of another sign. The surprised man thinks about what he is doing. The guys are talking in shock. Leo is amazed and asks what Setsuna is doing, because in the morning he said that he would choose long-range magic. A golden sign shines in front of him. The question sounds that instead he preferred close-range magic to everything else, because this is the worst of the worst. The teacher explains with a displeased look that this path is aimed at improving the body. He will only be able to attack enemies that he can get close to. This path of magic has been abandoned. The bearded man says that this is the same as going into battle under a hail of arrows with only a stone axe, asking if he really is going to ruin his future. Lowering his head, Setsuna thinks that he knows about this. It is almost impossible to become a mage with this path. The evil god stands on a mountain of corpses. His eyes are completely red. The guy realizes that fighting him is the only way to win. The protagonist stands in front of the sign and thinks that he will achieve this. The teacher looks in shock. All the students are discouraged. The director frowns and watches. The protagonist puts out a magical hand. The sign is imprinted on his hand. With a determined look, he realizes that he chooses this to destroy the evil god. He looks at how his hand smokes. The sign is imprinted on it. With a grin, he squeezes his hand. The students watch in amazement, their mouths open. The book closes. The head of the long-range magic corps, Cyrus, furiously declares that he intended to entrust him with his knowledge if he had chosen what was needed. In anger, he shouts that he would have become the strongest mage and this glory would not have passed even him, the mentor. By MC, with a displeased face, turns around and walks away, thinking that such things will lose all meaning in 10 years. The evil god incinerates everything around. It is said that there are only 10 years left until the complete defeat of humanity, and 5 years until the appearance of Drake. Setsuna goes down the stairs and thinks that although he has knowledge from his previous life, he has almost no experience in using close combat magic. The only question is how he can develop this magic before the evil god invades the world. The teacher clenches his teeth in rage. The protagonist turns around, standing among the students. They tell the second-year students to go to the classrooms. He wonders where the close combat magic corps is. Setsuna looks back at the guys and realizes that Leo is not around. He touches a passerby and asks who can tell him the way. They ignore him with displeasure, discussing that classes will start soon and they need to hurry. The protagonist looks back in the corridor. The guys nearby are grinning and discussing that now it's the end for him. Because he decided to choose this direction only to stand out, now he'll learn his lesson. There are crowds of girls and guys around MC. He realizes that this is too different from what was in his past life. With sadness, he realizes that he will have to find it himself. In the yard there should be a map of the entire campus. He walks down the street. Someone uses a fireball. The protagonist is surprised to think about a duel in such a place. He sees a red-haired girl who uses fire. He stands opposite the hooligans and demands that she give it back. In a rage, he puts out his hand and shouts that her mother bought her this brooch. In her hand is a gold brooch with green inserts. 3 scoundrels are smiling opposite. One of them says that this is a magic tool for accumulating mana. The other notes that this is too good because for a commoner like her, and they will find a more worthy use. The protagonist with a serious face realizes that she is clearly also a melee mage, and the 3 are from a long-range one. The blonde with a grin holds fire in his hand and offers her to return the thing by force. Throws a fireball and screams that her melee magic is useless. The girl dodges the attack. Her body is on fire. The basis of any melee magic has always been physical enhancement, which increases physical abilities. The heroine stands in front of the offenders. Even if she manages to avoid a direct attack, she still won't be able to break the distance. In anger, she attacks with magic, screaming that her mother saved money for years for this brooch. She will never give it to such freaks. A cloud of energy forms in her hand. Setsuna watches with a serious face, thinking that this is a mana sword. The red-haired girl stands in front. The offender declares that even this will not help her. With a smile, he prepares to attack with fire, screaming that this blade will not reach him. The heroine tries to block the blows. She falls on her back and screams. The bully with a grin declares that she is pathetic. No matter how hard she tries, she will still not be able to reach the ranged mage. A ball of flame flies forward. He claims that she will spend the rest of her life without receiving anything like that. The shocked student sees his attack. The protagonist prepares to run. In an instant, he flies past the bullies. The poor girl's eyes reflect the savior. He grabs her in his arms, dodging the fireballs. The villains are shocked. The protagonist looks at her smiling and asks if she knows where the melee mage corps is, because it would be nice if it were carried out. She is discouraged and silent. The bullies opposite shout that it is Setsuna. There is a sign on his hand. They notice that in front of them is a melee mage. The villain with a sly smile asks if he is serious. In his hand is fire. he declares that since he is a melee mage, you can punch him in the face with all your heart. Setsuna stands next to the girl and says that melee magic is really weak, however. With a serious look, he realizes that it depends on how you use it, because he noticed that some things can be improved. A sign is visible on the palm, stating that the chosen path does not necessarily determine the outcome of the battle. The student desperately asks to wait, because they are high school students, and they will beat him. The enemy releases many fireballs, shouting that it is too late. The protagonist's legs are burning blue, focused on magic that can be strengthened. Instantly dodges this attack. With a grin, he runs forward, realizing that with such speed he can easily dodge attacks. He looks ahead and thinks that since he can move so freely, he can do more. Runs away from fiery explosions, saying that he only does what he shoots balls. Is he really not capable of anything else? The enemy in a rage demands to shut up, not understanding what kind of movements these are. Setsuna deftly jumps back while he is nervous about not being able to hit. The bully forms a cloud of flame, declaring that he is not going to joke. He releases fire at the protagonist. He decisively forms a weapon in his hand, cuts fire. Standing opposite the bullies, he looks at them. The enemy is shocked, wondering if he really cut it. The amazed girl stands behind and asks that fire can be cut. The partner replies that when magic hits magic, the one with the higher mastery skills wins. Setsuna raises the energy sword. It is said that the reason why he does not have high power and became the strongest is that he controlled it very much. With a smile, he realizes that this ability turned out to be more useful than expected, and if he combines this power with speed. The enemy brushes off his friends and says that since everything has come to this, he will create a huge one. They ask to stop because it is too dangerous. If they go too far, the instructors will come running. With a mad look, he demands to shut up. His eyes are full of hatred. He sees a blue stream of energy in front of him. In shock, he opens his eyes, realizing that this is simply impossible. The protagonist swings his fist while the bully thinks how he got so close. It means he is much faster than him. The protagonist with flaming eyes begins to attack using a fist of mana. The enemy receives a powerful blow to the body and flies back. In shock, he endures such damage. Friends open their mouths in surprise. A student nearby watches in amazement. The protagonist stands in front of the defeated opponent. Clenching his fist, he realizes that while the enemy is within reach, he can fight without problems and even use close combat magic. The frightened bully does not understand what is happening, because such magic is the weakest, so where did he get such strength from? Setsuna, holding out his hand, asks if they forgot anything. The big guy gives her the brooch, realizing that he will have to obey. They drag the beaten high school student. The protagonist turns to his partner and shows her the object. He puts it in her hands and asks if this is a particularly important thing for her. Her eyes are full of gratitude. Sincerely smiling, she says thank you. The girl stands opposite and says that she completely forgot to introduce herself. She extends her hand and happily calls herself Layla. MC extends her palm in response and calls herself by name. She happily shakes his hand and exclaims that she has heard about him because he is the guy who has an affinity with all magical paths, specifying why such a person decided to choose close combat. The main character seriously thinks that this is in order to defeat the evil god, but if he tells, they will not believe him. He asks if she could show him the way to the building of the faculty of close combat magic. His partner is surprised that now is the introductory hour, which should have already begun. The interlocutor advises to hurry. The guys are walking along the path. He sees her in front of him and thinks that the building is on the outskirts of the entire campus. No wonder magic is not popular. His friend happily declares that he should teach her how to create such a magic blade, which he showed earlier. He replies that there was nothing wrong with that. Everything depends only on her level of mana control. With a serious look, the protagonist thinks that close combat magic can be used in different ways depending on the circumstances. Vendrake crossed his arms and got injured. Setsuna thinks that if he can master close combat, he can fully resist the dispersal of the evil god. Sitting opposite the director, he understands that in order to gain another advantage, the director sitting opposite takes off his glove, puts them next to each other. Setsuna looks at him, amazed. He has marks of two completely different paths on his palms. The stunned protagonist realizes that usually a person can choose only one path. There is a mark on his hand. He notices that he has summoning magic in his right hand, but he has never seen such a thing on his left hand. The student, perplexed, asks what kind of mark it is. He replies that he will tell when the time comes. The director calmly states that he told about it only because it was him. Blood is spilled on the floor. It is said that in the end he did not explain anything, was killed almost immediately after the appearance of the evil god, understands that he also felt the danger coming from the second magical path of the director, must definitely find out this secret to change fate. The red-haired girl raised her finger and said that it was over there. They approach the building. The protagonist hurries while thinking that the problem is that he does not even imagine how to get the director's recognition in his current state. The guys approach the gate. The man clenches his teeth and remains silent. The bald teacher with a dissatisfied face says that it is nice to see that he is late for classes because he is walking with girls. Layla, holding out her hand, assures that it was because of that. He in turn shouts that he does not even want to hear excuses. An adult man calmly says that regardless of his previous merits, he is worth nothing in this place. He points his finger at the protagonist and declares that now that he came to the faculty of melee magicians, he has become trash. Setsuna removes his hand and claims that these are rude words, clarifying that he became a professor and is not at all proud of the melee magic that he teaches. He grits his teeth and thinks about what was said. In rage, he shouts at the brat that he does not dare to talk to a professor like that. Setsuna calmly states that there are still untapped possibilities in melee magic. He believes in it. The enraged man realizes that he really wants to break his cocky nose. He turns around discontentedly and calls him a chatterbox. The students are doing exercises with energy swords. The teacher offers to show him in action. The guy with glasses swings in rage. He pierces the stone. He frowns and looks at it, and notices that there is no reaction at all. The man goes to the students and talks about the first test necessary to determine the rank in the class. The stone contains a purple crystal. It is said that inside the steel rock there is a crystal and it is necessary to extract it as quickly as possible. With a sly grin, he says that losers will receive punishment. He points at the student and shouts that an hour has passed, but no one has achieved anything yet. The disgruntled guy touches the rock and declares that the stone is really hard. A girl nearby asks how she can even destroy it with the magic she currently has. Another student wipes his face and says that he is so angry only because he was not given a promotion, while his friend asks him to be quiet. The bald teacher points and says that they have another free stone. He touches it and says that it's time to show what melee magic is capable of, because he only has 10 minutes. Layla asks in shock, claiming that it is impossible to break a steel stone in just 10 minutes, besides, it is larger than the others. The teacher smirks and asks so what, because while they are arguing, there are only 9 minutes left. The protagonist puts his hand on his partner's shoulder. He approaches the steel stone, silently touches it. The bald teacher asks him if he has lost the power of speech, hinting that if he bows down and apologizes to him, then perhaps he will be given a little extra time. The protagonist calmly assures that 10 seconds will be enough for him. The teacher asks again in anger. Layla exclaims behind him that Setsuna is acting recklessly. The man smirks and thinks that this block of black steel is not only big, but also has the highest density, and even he himself could not break it in less than 30 minutes. With wide eyes, he assures that there will be no second chance, so let him do it in 10 seconds. MC forms energy in his hand, declaring that he will show him. With a serious look, he thinks that he will earn the director's recognition, but he needs to at least become the best in the class. An energy blade appears in his hand. He swings it, realizing that he will not let such a trifle prevent him from achieving his goal. The tip touches the stone, leaves a small mark. The teacher laughs loudly, shouting that he is only good at talking, discussing what kind of punishment to come up with for his disobedience. Suddenly, the steel rock begins to crack, completely collapses. The bald teacher looks at this in shock. The student hands him a purple crystal. With a confident look, he declares that only 10 seconds have passed. He asks again in amazement. Layla is shocked to see that he actually did it. A student standing next to her friend claims that he broke such a huge boulder, and that it simply can't be. The teacher's eyes are wild. Everyone is discussing that the guy is stronger than the professor. He throws his arms out and shouts that he will never admit it because he definitely cheated. He points his finger and says that the boulder was so hard that no one would have destroyed it even in 10 minutes, and he did it in 10 seconds. It's obvious that something is fishy. Setsuna with a stern look says that if so, then maybe he should change his profession and become a student again. A man stands behind the bald teacher and calls Zachary. He grabs his head. The man with a cigarette in his mouth asks if he's really bullying the students again. He scratches his head. The guys exclaim about the main Professor Lionel. Yawning, he says that they went and woke him up. He notes that the guy actually didn't cheat. A stone cracks in front of him. It is said that he simply read the flow of mana inside the stone. The tip touches the boulder. The professor explains that he simply hit the weakest spot. A man with a cigarette asks why he is trying to seem like a teacher although he does not even understand such obvious things. The frightened teacher swallows saliva. The head professor stands in the middle of the students and shouts at them, asking for attention. A brutal man declares that Zachary is going to demonstrate to them how to defend themselves with mana. He begins to glow with blue fire, saying that if he regularly trained, he will definitely not die from something like this. The bald teacher puts out his hands and shouts that he is guilty, and this will not happen again. He punches him with all his might. He flies back dozens of meters. The protagonist watches and thinks that even after he broke through the barrier, his level of strength is good. It is not clear who he is because he is not at all like the others. The professor stands opposite the protagonist, smiling, pats him on the back and declares that he is also not bad. With a cigarette in his mouth, he claims that this is not bad for a beginner in close combat magic. Let him try hard and continue to do so. Holds his shoulder. Setsuna with a serious look says that he is a close combat mage, and this does not mean that he loses to the others. He will become the strongest using this to his advantage. The professor smirks, points his finger and calls this the right attitude, because if he wants to learn something, then let him say it, and he will tell you everything. He leaves the guys, thinking that there is another dumbass in the world who thinks the same way. Lionel smilingly thinks that the others have already made their choice to participate in the competition, but it seems that now an unexpected dark horse has appeared. In the middle of the building, a request is heard to allow him to introduce himself properly. The tattooed brutal professor introduces himself by name, says that he is pleased to see them at the Faculty of Magic. Standing in front of the students, he declares that they need to soon choose a representative to participate in the exchange competition. The mages stand in the middle of the crown. It is said that this is a major event where 8 magic faculties compete for honor and prestige. The director crowns the mage, 1 representative is chosen from each faculty, and the winner is determined in a tournament format. Before his regression, MC won the exchange competition as a ranged representative. Setsuna calmly thinks that he cannot miss such an opportunity. He stands near a fragment of a black stone and notices it. The guys look at Lionel, who claims that the protagonist is not the only one who passed the test, because someone before them has already extracted the crystal. The big guy holds a fighting stance. It is explained that he did it only with his fists. The protagonist with a serious look thinks that these fragments are at their feet. A fighter is sitting nearby. MC thinks that they flew from there. Drago with a stern look looks forward. He is asked to come closer. The bully approaches the protagonist and asks what this is. Setsuna. A big guy with a serious face asks why he chose the path of melee magic, having the opportunity to choose any. He calmly replies that there are things that he can achieve only with melee magic. Putting his hands in his pockets, he hears that he needs to shut up, because his body is weak. Drago, blazing with fire, declares that for many generations his family has succeeded exclusively in this. He also spent 17 years training his body for this purpose. His gaze is stern. His hand instantly flies past the protagonist. The guys barely fall from such a wind. He holds his fist near the protagonist's head, offering to fight him, because he will not allow a person who only became a melee mage for fun to become their representative. With a serious look, Setsuna looks at him, thinking that he heard this name during the competition in his past life, the only famous person from the entire faculty. He smiles, declaring that they will do it. Lionel stands between them and says that he is glad that they came to an understanding, because in this case the fight will take place in a week. The bully leaves, warning him not to think about running away during this time. If he really is a melee mage, then let him fight for his own to the death. The surprised guys talk about who will win. The girl notes that no matter how talented he is, he still will not be able to defeat Drago. Layla, smiling, asks if he can win. The protagonist, closing his eyes, denies it. He imagines the pumped-up body of his opponent, and realizes that due to his trained physique, he will not be able to compete with him in his current state. His partner catches up with him, while he assures him that there is a secret plan. The guys are walking along a forest road. The surprised girl opens her mouth and looks ahead. In front of them is a huge tree. She wonders what kind of place it is. Green fire appears near Setsuna, assures that this is a secret training place that only he knows about. Blazing with fire, he declares that it is here that he will become 3 times stronger. The giant tree spread its branches. She says that it is probably sacred and more than 1,000 years old. The whole tree glows green. The main character thinks with a grin that this time he will probably get recognition. Layla, seeing this, asks what kind of light this is. The friend answers about the blessing of the sacred tree. He looks at it, and explains that it is given only to those who have been recognized by the tree itself. Thanks to this sacred attribute he will be able to restore his own mana, thinking that he found it before his regression. His hand is burning. He declares that while he is here he will not need to worry about his mana running out. He happily clenches his fist and claims that he can train until he reaches the limit. Layla is fascinated by surprise, thinking that Drago is a natural-born melee mage. The girl is delighted to realize that her friend helped her return the brooch. Now it is her turn to help. Raising her hand, she goes forward thinking that she will do reconnaissance. The fighters are training in the gym of the Faculty of Melee Magic. Layla and her friend go inside. She looks forward in shock. The bully is pushing a barbell with weights. She notices that he is simply crazy. She puts it back, noticing Lionel nearby. Drago, sweating, asks if there are black steel stones in the yard. He asks again if he is really going to destroy everything. Drago leaves and asks not to worry because he will not destroy them. He does push-ups with them on his back, stating that he will just borrow them. Layla looks on in horror, realizing that he is able to kill a person with one blow. He runs forward, worriedly wondering if everything will be okay with Setsuna. A bird flies in the sky. The protagonist is sitting near a tree. With a serious face, he is reading a book. He is holding a book about martial arts. The girl desperately calls him, asking if he has time to relax. Touching the tree, she fearfully says that Drago was doing push-ups using 5 black stones as a weight. He replies that this was expected because he knew that the enemy would train like this. His pupil glows blue, asking not to worry because this is part of the plan. He looks through the book with magic. A friend standing next to him asks what he means. He replies that physical enhancement is essentially strengthening and controlling the nervous system with mana. An arm and a leg are shown. It is said that if you want to strengthen your legs, you just need to concentrate your mana in them, and if your arms, then in them. With glowing eyes, he says that if you want to improve your memory, you just need to focus on your head. Another book flies into the stack of read ones. Setsuna gets up and walks, claiming that after learning all the techniques, you will need to apply them in practice. A green leaf falls down. The protagonist notices this. Suddenly, he performs a technique with his leg. He cuts the air with an energy blade. Layla is shocked to see this. She enthusiastically screams that this is incredible because she has never heard of such a method. He replies that this is not all. A purple aura appears in front of his face. Suddenly he falls to the ground. His friend screams his name in fear. His hand turns blue. She screams that he has a terrible wound. The protagonist, glowing green, says that everything is fine. He just overloads his body to the limit with such physical exertion. He looks at his injured hand and says that now he only needs to focus on the accelerated healing of his body. He clenches his fist, claiming that this way he can become stronger in the shortest possible time. The worried girl asks that he should not exhaust himself like that, and perhaps there are other ways. He denies. With a stern look, the guy says that he will not be able to keep up with Drago using only half measures, because he has been training for years. The frightened girlfriend hears that over the next week he will need to repeat the process of destruction and healing at least 1,000 times. She is shocked and asks because even one time led to such terrible wounds. The protagonist smiles, thinking that this is not entirely true. The events take place in an orphanage. Setsuna reflects on the fact that these events reminded him of this. A little boy reading a book tries to cast a spell, remembering that at that time he could not use any magic, so he spent all his time training every day. The small stone burns. The energy dissipates. The boy looks on angrily, remembering that he failed many times, but still kept trying. The stone flies up. The little protagonist watches smiling, thinking that even despite the slow progress, he still became better step by step. Setsuna smiles and says that it's okay, as long as it allows him to become stronger. They train together. They stand on one hand. They cut stones with the help of a phantom sword. The tired girl wipes herself off, thinking that she was told that the protagonist only has talent. The protagonist with stones on his back does push-ups for the 9th time. With difficulty performing the exercise, he counts down the 10th. The happy girlfriend watches and thinks that in reality he tries much harder than any of them. The opponents stand in the arena on the day of the battle. Drago, gritting his teeth, declares that he did not run away after all. Setsuna happily replies that he did not plan to. After all, he wants to become a faculty representative. Lionel raises his hand and asks if they are ready. The opponents look at each other calmly. The main character in the suit rushes to attack after shouting that they are starting. The main character delivered a quick kick, but the opponent put out his hands to block. The brunette turned on his toes. Then he attacked again. His classmate was thrown back a little. Setsuna frowned, noticing that the opponent blocked all his attacks with his mana. Drago frowned and clenched his fists, concentrating his energy. The opponent shuddered and widened his eyes. The next second, the red-haired man was right in front of the hero. He gritted his teeth and swung. A powerful blow aimed right at the head. The spectators of the fight covered themselves from the gust of wind. Layla squinted and called out to her comrade. Drago's blow raised dust. The silhouette of the main character appeared from the cloud. The classmates leaned forward, discussing that this was too much, and it was hard to believe that they had only recently chosen their path. Setsuna frowned and muttered that if he missed even one direct hit, he would lose immediately. The opponent lunged with his other hand, but the brunette dodged. Then the redhead attacked again, but again missed. Drago aimed for the guy's head, and he put out his hands to block. The next blow landed in the same place. The fighter frowned and asked with displeasure why he was only defending himself. Instead of answering, the hero dodged, parrying the blow. Drago gritted his teeth and said that, in the end, the young man remained a weakling, and this was all he could do. Layla looked at the arena with alarm, surprised that even after all this training, Setsuna was still weaker. The fight continued. Lionel looked at the brunette, and thought that at first glance it might seem like he was being pushed. Drago turned around and swung his leg. The opponent swung his hand, activating mana. Then the protagonist blocked the attack. The opponent grimaced in displeasure. The teacher chuckled and noted that the guy perfectly parried every blow thanks to his mana control. The redhead unleashed a series of attacks on the opponent. He frowned and exclaimed that they, the elite, always look down on the wielders of melee magic. The brunette narrowed his eyes, but remained silent. Drago assumed a fighting stance and continued to say that he and his father were born into a family that excelled only in melee magic, and he could not imagine how much humiliation they had suffered until now. The student released more energy. A blade appeared in his hands, and he declared that he would definitely change this attitude with his own efforts. The protagonist also armed himself in response. The opponents rushed to attack. They crossed blades. Then Drago swung his sword, but the brunette deftly dodged. After that, Setsuna jumped. The young man landed on the other side. He swung his blade, but his opponent also took off. The brunette looked up. Drago brought down a blow, and it landed on the floor, as his opponent jumped back. The red-haired man gritted his teeth and rushed forward. The protagonist took a fighting stance. The opponent delivered a powerful slash. Setsuna frowned and sweated. He remembered walking down the corridor, and the students whispering that now he was finished, and it was his own fault that he decided to choose this direction just to stand out. The brunette closed his eyes and said that he understood him a little. The hero frowned, looking at his opponent. The young man swung his blade sharply, parrying the enemy's attack. Then he redirected mana to his legs and turned around. Setsuna swung and exclaimed that they both strive to get much more than they have now. The opponent widened his eyes and asked again. A flash flashed in the air. Drago's blade was cut. The redhead gritted his teeth, thinking about what he heard. He smirked. Then he leaned on his feet, using the boost. The student lunged forward, but the brunette dodged. The hero bent down and ran to the side of his opponent. Setsuna went around him and came from the side. The guy gritted his teeth and, using the boost, attacked his opponent. The redhead put his hands out to block. Layla smiled, hoping that it worked. Liano smirked and thought that despite Drago's outstanding data, the brunette's mana control and potential were clearly beyond competition, and it even became interesting to find out which of them would win. The protagonist frowned and noted that the opponent had high defense, so something else needed to be added. The young man pushed his opponent back. He stopped and created a sword in his hand again. Then he immediately struck, and the hero dodged. Drago took a step forward and swung with a cry. He attacked with all his might, pushing the protagonist back. The brunette narrowed his eyes, thinking that the student had decided to pour all his mana into this blow. The opponent clenched his teeth and tensed up. Setsuna ran back to avoid being attacked. He stopped, noticing that the end of the area was already under him. Drago looked at the young man and mentally rejoiced that he had finally managed to drive him into a corner, and now he couldn't escape from there. The guy tensed his muscles, and the veins on his body bulged. The red-haired man clenched his fists, releasing mana. The girl sweated and frowned, not understanding what it was. The protagonist took a fighting stance, preparing to take a blow. Drago swung, concentrating his energy. The brunette narrowed his eyes. Suddenly, a fist passed through his body. The opponent froze, surprised that it was an afterimage. The hero appeared above the opponent, explaining that if you pour mana into the same place for long enough, you can leave an image behind for a short time. He quickly appeared behind the opponent. Drago turned around. Setsuna frowned and declared that this was the end. The young man quickly swung his blade and stopped behind his opponent. The red-haired man froze and opened his mouth. Layla and the others stared at the arena in shock. The teacher chuckled and thought that the young man decided to counterattack, using the furious onslaught of his opponent to his advantage. Lionel raised his hand and declared that the battle was over. Drago fell backwards, and Setsuna became the winner. The girl jumped up happily, and the others goggled, not believing what they saw. The student dug his fingers into the floor. The brunette turned to his opponent. The spectators looked down, discussing that the redhead was very stubborn, since he decided to get up after that. Drago sweated from the strain and grimaced. The guy sat up, thinking that it did not look like a blow from a mana blade, and the opponent changed its structure so as not to inflict fatal wounds. Setsuna raised his opponent's hand. The redhead looked up at him and asked what he was fighting for. The protagonist frowned and hesitated with an answer. Drago narrowed his eyes when he said that it was so that he would not lose to anyone, and so that no one would take anything away from him. The brunette looked at his interlocutor with determination and explained that this was why he was going to become stronger than anyone. The fighter's eyes widened in surprise. Then he smirked and admitted that his opponent was indeed strong. He stood up, accepting the help, and said that he had suffered a complete defeat, and the hero fully lived up to his reputation. Drago straightened up, and Setsuna thought that this strength could be of great help to him in the battle against the evil god. The teacher approached them and said that the brunette himself should have noticed that he was losing to Drago in close combat. Leono raised the student's hand and announced that Setsuna had been chosen as their representative. A few days later, the academy building. The protagonist and the teacher stopped in front of the entrance to the room, and the man muttered that it was time for representatives of the different faculties to meet face to face before the competition. Leono scratched his cheek and added that it would sound strange coming from his lips, but he should behave decently. The young man entered and closed the door behind him. He moved forward, glancing to the side. The other students stared at him. One of the guys adjusted his glasses and smirked that a representative had come from the loser fighting faculty. He raised his chin and added that the young man had decided to voluntarily show his shame, which was even impressive, and the hero noticed a mark of enchantment magic on his hand. The student stood up, turning to the newcomer, and asked if the representative of the pathetic faculty understood him. The bespectacled man suddenly stepped on Setsuna's foot. He bared his teeth and declared that he would be his first opponent in the first round. The student arched an eyebrow and said that everyone knew that in the last 100 years there had not been a single case of victory by the faculty of Close Combat Mages, because they were pathetic nobodies who could continue to remain on the very edge of the academy territory and continue to pump up their muscles until they died. Suddenly his face distorted. The protagonist pressed his foot in response. The brunette frowned and noticed that the guys from the Charms faculty had a very peculiar way of greeting other people. The young man ran his hand over his interlocutor's fingers. The bespectacled man frowned and cursed. Setsuna glared menacingly and said that he didn't care whether they had won in the last 100 years or not, because this year the faculty of Close Combat Magic would win. The fair-haired man jumped back. He frowned and demanded that they stop talking nonsense. Suddenly, someone approached them. The man with long hair walked behind the bespectacled man and said that there was nothing wrong with such passion, but they still had to wait until the competition began to find out the name of the winner. All the students looked at him with a smile and admiration. The main character narrowed his eyes and thought that everything was happening exactly the same as in his previous life. The director walked past them. He stood in front of the representatives of the faculties. The pink-haired girl smiled and said that it was an honor to meet the principal, and she would do her best to show what she was capable of during the competition. The hero glanced sideways at the student and thought that Carol from the summoner faculty was still as friendly as ever. He remembered the girl on the beast and noted that she was a formidable opponent with whom he had a very fierce fight during the last competition, but this time he should be wary, even though he had emerged victorious. The old man grinned and congratulated those present on receiving representative rights from each faculty, and added that he was sincerely glad that 8 talented people had gathered here today. He frowned and said that the competition would be held in a one-on-one battle format. The man pointed to a poster with a diagram of the fights and added that all the opponents were randomly selected. The protagonist frowned, exchanging glances with the bespectacled man, because the first fight was between melee magic, specializing in hand-to-hand combat, and enchantment magic, which makes it possible to pour mana into objects and thus grant them life. The second fight was between a green-haired girl with healing magic and a student of the Faculty of Long-Range Magic. The opponents of the third fight were a young man with formation magic, filling magical arrays with various powers, and Carol, who commands mythical beasts from other worlds. And finally, the fourth fight will be held between a red-haired student with special magic and a girl alchemist. The director looked at the students and said that this competition can be considered a practical lesson in studying the magic of various faculties, which will begin in 10 days. So until then they need to decide whether to study new magic to defeat their opponents, or focus on resting in order to go into battle with all their might. The old man folded his arms and exclaimed that he was looking forward to seeing their fighting spirit. Carol and the others smiled happily. All the students bowed and the principal headed for the exit. The protagonist frowned and thought that this was the only place where he could freely talk to him. The man walked down the corridor. The brunette caught up with him and called out to him. The old man turned around and remembered the representative of the Faculty of Close Combat Magic. Setsuna came closer and introduced himself, adding that he wanted to ask something. The young man looked at the interlocutor and asked to teach him his magic if he won, to which the latter noted that it was unlikely that the student would be able to open up in summoning magic. The brunette narrowed his eyes and said that he meant another power. The principal's eyes widened in surprise. Then he frowned. The protagonist felt a strong pressure in the air. The old man looked closely at the young man, releasing mana, and asked how he knew about it. Setsuna sat down slightly, noticing that this was simply a terrifying force, and the interlocutor was clearly on guard. The guy remembered the mark on the director's hand and reminded himself that this second magic was hope in the fight against the evil god. The brunette frowned and decided that he could not return here again. He opened his mouth and said that he could not name the reason. The protagonist looked resolutely at the old man and added that the victory of a candidate from the Faculty of Close Combat Magic for the first time in the last 100 years would definitely turn his understanding of the common sense of this world upside down, because he himself hoped for this. The man stood silently opposite the student. The brunette confidently narrowed his eyes. The old man studied him. The director, continuing to release mana, asked what he was planning. Then he removed the pressure and promised that on the day Setsuna became the winner of the competition, he would tell him about the second magic mark. The hero bowed and thanked him. The man frowned and warned that it wouldn't be that easy. The student put his hand on his chest and said that he was still confident that he could do it. The other man turned around and noted that this was the right attitude. Some time later, Setsuna sat and ate a bun, thinking about how strange it was to feel school life and peacetime 10 years later. He looked at the pastry and thought that the dessert was really delicious, and he would have to thank Layla for that. The brunette leaned his elbows on his knees and muttered that there were 10 days left until the competition, and he should do everything to prepare for it, when suddenly someone nearby said that there was no need for that. The hero flinched, noticing a fist. He put out his hands, blocking the blow. The guy jumped away from the stone golem. The bespectacled man peeked out from around the corner, and said that he was going to hit him from his blind spot. Setsuna frowned and asked what he was doing. The guy bit his lip and muttered that they would continue what they had not finished last time, and there was no need to wait for the competition. The blonde raised his hand, activating mana. He raised the stones in the air and was indignant that he put him in such an awkward position. The brunette took a fighting stance and replied that the guy himself was to blame. Golems lined up behind the bespectacled man. The student ruffled his hair and muttered that it would be unpleasant if others found out that he was bullying a pathetic fellow. The blonde waved his hand, dispelling the spell. Then he turned around and advised the young man to prepare properly for their fight. Setsuna looked after him and thought that he was truly talented, since he could supply so much matter with mana and even managed to control them. He noticed the fallen bun, upset that his opponent simply left, depriving him of a tasty snack. The next day, the students stood in front of Lionel, who said that today they would begin preparing for the competition, and first they would analyze the fight between Drago and Setsuna. The man turned to the students and asked if they understood what they were missing, to which he answered affirmatively. The redhead furrowed his brows and said that he had lost control of his mana and emotions. The protagonist looked up and noted that he lacked basic power and was losing to his opponent in pure strength. The teacher smiled and said that admitting one's weaknesses was the first step to growth, and now one should start improving their skills with a small fight. Layla raised her hand and asked if this fight would be training for the competition. The protagonist remembered the bespectacled man, and the teacher said that his opponent would be Noel from the enchantment department, who was able to create multiple golems for both attack and defense. The man presented a silhouette and explained that since these robots had physical bodies, their fighting style would be very similar to melee mages. Lionel stood in front of the boys and said that he was going to give each of them a task, and Drago would focus on speed, acting as several golems and attacking from all sides. The brunette nodded when he was told that he would need to reflect his attacks and try to counterattack. The redhead assumed a fighting stance and warned that this time would be different from last time. The hero smirked and said that he was looking forward to it. The opponent rushed forward. He swung and the young man tensed, then Setsuna dodged. The opponent immediately turned around. The redhead stood sideways and the brunette decided that everything was fine. Drago smirked. The guy flinched and realized that he missed something. The student struck with his other hand. The protagonist frowned and thought that his reaction was too slow. Lionel smiled and praised the big guy for how well he balanced speed and strength. Drago raised his fists and quickly maneuvered. He lunged forward. Then he turned on his toes, and then pretended to hit with his left. The brunette frowned and guessed that it would be a fake. The redhead attacked sharply with his right, but his opponent managed to dodge. The man grinned and noted that this was the right decision, and now Setsuna needed to counterattack. Drago turned around. He struck again, deciding that the young man was caught, but he jumped back. The brunette frowned and swung. After a while, Setsuna stretched out on the ground. The redhead leaned back and muttered that it was a good fight. Lionel brought them water, noting that the guys moved well, and at this rate in a few days the hero will be able to fight 4 to 5 golems at the same time. The young man took the bottle and said that it did not matter how much he trained, because everything would be in vain if he weakened his defense. The teacher smirked and thought that the student was a fast learner and had exceptional instincts. A few days passed, and now there was a huge arena in front of us. There were many spectators in the stands, and the host announced the beginning of the 781st competition between the faculties of the Archmage Academy of Magic. The director was sitting closest to everyone else in the place of honor. The protagonist and Noel entered the arena, and a voice asked who would be the strongest. The man showed a poster, offering to make a bet, but it showed that almost all the votes were for the enchantment faculty. One of the students clutched the papers in his hand, muttering that he had bet on the dark horse Setsuna, and he was bound to win. The students turned around, noticing actor from the ranged magic faculty with his mentor at the door, and he looked very relaxed before the match. The long-haired man looked ahead, and someone remembered that if everything went smoothly, he would have to face the winner of this fight. The host smiled and said that the conditions of the battle changed every time at these competitions. The opponents were standing in the middle of an artificially created desert. The four-eyed man grinned and exclaimed that for him it was just great. The main character looked at him silently. The spectators raised their hands, supporting Noel and happy that he was fighting against an outsider. Layla frowned and shouted at them, unhappy with the noise. Setsuna watched with a smile as Liano restrained the irritated student from fighting in the stands as well. The host raised his hand. Then he abruptly lowered it and announced the beginning of the first battle. The opponents were standing in the sand. The four-eyed man picked up a shard and asked if Setsuna knew what it was. The brunette frowned and replied that it was a copper stone. He threw it on the ground and said that it was what his golems were made of. A mound began to rise from the sand. Stone paws were already visible. A golem towered over the student, and Noel exclaimed that he did not need another weapon, and these would be enough. The bespectacled man opened the bag with stones. Then he scattered them around. Several more golems immediately crawled out of the sand, and the opponent declared that the young man had no chance of winning. The girl raised her eyebrows and asked how he was able to create so many creatures. Noel adjusted his glasses and boasted that he could make these robots endlessly in this area, and the opponent would not even come close to him. The students chuckled, discussing that the outcome of this fight was already predetermined before it began, and the brunette should not have chosen close combat. The blonde narrowed his eyes and advised Setsuna to say something now, while he had the opportunity and strength. The hero stood opposite, muttering something. The bespectacled man raised his chin and asked again. The brunette looked at him indifferently, and said that it was just boredom, and he did not even think that this would become his trump card. The interlocutor grimaced and was indignant at such impudence. He put out his hand and ordered the golems to crush the enemy. The monsters rushed towards the protagonist. Sand rose below, blocking the view. Noel grinned, shouting that now the student would learn his lesson. The spectators peered into the cloud of dust, but could not see anything. The golems pounded the ground. A clean cut appeared on one of them. Setsuna swung his blade, and several monsters immediately crumbled. He stood in the middle of the stones, saying that he could cut even black steel stone. The opponent's eyes widened and exclaimed that these golems were especially durable. The blonde collected 2 more robots and reminded him that he could create as many as he wanted. The protagonist straightened up, looking at the impending threat, and said that his magic was the strongest in close combat, so it did not matter how many monsters he created if that was all they could do. The student pushed off the ground. The brunette quickly cut down his opponents, saying that he would not lose to someone like that. He jumped up and raised his blade above his head. the blade easily entered the stone. The opponent nervously opened his bag, muttering that the next golem would be different. However, at that moment, Setsuna was already in front of him. The brunette swung and noted that the bespectacled man was unlucky with his opponent. The blonde received a powerful blow to the face. The student was thrown back. The spectators squinted, trying to see what was happening there. Everyone pointed at the arena until the cloud of dust cleared. The protagonist stood in front of his defeated opponent, and the host, dumbfounded, declared him the winner. Setsuna smiled, happy that he won the first fight. Lionel jumped up and exclaimed that the young man did it. The other students stared ahead and dumbfounded, not believing that the close combat faculty had won. One of the guys rubbed his chin and muttered that maybe the more golems you created, the faster you got tired. The others looked at each other, saying that the brunette was just lucky, and Noel was just tired, otherwise he would have won in a normal situation. The mustachioed man gritted his teeth. The professor frowned and said that the blonde was not tired at all, and that damn Setsuna was driving him crazy. Actor smirked and muttered that the hero had caught his attention. He looked greedily at the arena and decided that he should take precautions. A forest appeared on the site, and the host announced the start of the second fight. Setsuna climbed up to Layla in the stands, and the girl pointed to the place next to her, offering to watch the next fight. The brunette sat down and agreed, because maybe he could spy on something like that. Below, the summoning and formation departments were fighting, and the voice commented that Carol was gaining the upper hand for now. The girl riding the beast extended her hand, concentrating her mana. She shot at her opponent, who was trying to get closer. The guy pushed off the magic circles, rising higher and higher. The protagonist touched his chin and thought that, despite the predicament, the mage's movements were incredible, and perhaps even he could do something like that. Layla looked down and said that the movements of other magical directions were also quite impressive, but she still wanted to become stronger in close combat magic. The brunette turned to her and asked why the student chose this faculty. The interlocutor smiled and answered that a long time ago she was saved by a close combat mage. She remembered how she ran away from a grizzly with her younger brother, playing in the forest, and thought that they were finished. A man rushed to their aid. He attacked the beast, protecting the children. The girl then looked at the savior with admiration, deciding that she would also save other people, and for this she would become stronger. Layla blushed and muttered that it sounded childish. The guy looked at her seriously and objected. Setsuna put his hand on his chest and said that as long as she followed the call of her heart, she would be able to become stronger. The girl shyly folded her hands and smiled. Leo appeared next to them and happily called out to the protagonist, exclaiming that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The blonde waved his hand, and the hero remembered that he was the second strongest in the long-range combat department. The guy put his hand on the brunette's shoulder and said that he saw the first fight, and the young man is strong even in close combat magic, after which he clarified whether it was his girlfriend next to him. Layla blushed and hastened to object. She jumped up and headed for the exit, saying that she would leave them alone. Leo sat down next to his comrade, and Setsuna noted that he did not expect that he did not become a representative of his department, because he had to defeat Actor. The interlocutor leaned on his hands and warned that the hero should be wary of his dirty tricks. The blonde frowned and said that the guy fooled him and became a representative. Setsuna narrowed his eyes and thought that the next opponent was the kind of person who would do anything to win, so he couldn't let his guard down. There were children standing in the hallway, talking animatedly about something. Actor opened the chest of flowers. He grinned ominously, looking at the contents. The sun was shining over the arena, and the announcer said that it was time for the first fight of the second round, which would be between representatives of the melee and range departments. Rocks and lava appeared in the arena. The ground was melting, and the voice noted that the terrain would be a real hell, where falling would mean the end. Drago crossed his arms and said that even just getting close to the opponent would be incredibly difficult here, and the mentor agreed that this was too advantageous terrain for the opponent. Actor stood at the entrance with the teacher, noting that for the head of the range department, such a thing was a mere trifle, and the man replied that he just really wanted to teach this kid a lesson. The professor grimaced and muttered that he would make the brunette regret his choice. The long-haired man leaned over and said that now the opponent only needed to come to the fight. The host sweated and muttered that the fight should have already started, and the representative of the neighbor needed to enter the arena, otherwise in 5 minutes he would be awarded a technical defeat. The spectators looked down in confusion, and even Liano was surprised. Actor bared his teeth. 10 minutes ago, the girl approached the restroom and called the main character. She opened the door and reminded that the fight would begin soon. Setsuna raised his head and said that everything was fine. The guy was sitting at a table with books, but suddenly advised his interlocutor not to touch the vase nearby. Layla recoiled when the hero explained that it was a magical item that was triggered upon contact, and would most likely completely suck out mana. The student looked at her friend in surprise and asked why he had put it there, to which the brunette explained that this was already the 7th trap for him. The redhead raised her eyebrows in alarm and asked if he was sure he was okay. The young man turned around and replied that he had managed to avoid all of this, and he thought that this was definitely Actor's trick, and that he was quite smart since he had not left any evidence. The interlocutors turned around when there was a knock on the door. 3 children appeared on the threshold, and the girl held out a bouquet, saying that it was for the guy. Layla leaned over and asked if it was from them, but the boy said that the man had asked her to give it to him. However, there was no one in the direction indicated. The girl bowed her head and muttered that if it was an admirer, he could have given it to her himself. Suddenly, the bouquet fell from the girl's hands. She grabbed her head, breathing heavily, and babbled that she felt unwell. There was a dark rash on her neck. The protagonist frowned and remembered that he had seen similar spots many times during the war. He kicked the flowers aside sharply. Layla supported the girl and asked what was going on, to which the brunette said that it was a poisonous plant called venenum. The boy immediately began to tremble and cough. A moment later, all the children fell down, writhing in pain. The protagonist gritted his teeth, amazed that actor was ready to go so far as to involve even children. Setsuna frowned and said that if he did not start treatment immediately, the damage to the body would be irreversible. But now it would be difficult to find a healer who could cope with this poison. The red-haired girl looked at him and asked if this was serious, receiving an affirmative answer. Setsuna frowned and advised the girl to stay away, since there was a chance that this poison could be contracted simply by being near the source of infection. The interlocutor thought, squinting. She reached into her pocket and replied that everything was fine. Layla pulled out an amulet and said that the hero could provide her with children. The guy remembered how the girl was teased, taking away that very brooch that could accumulate mana. The student closed her eyes and explained that her mother put healing magic into this decoration for her. The redhead squeezed the amulet, and green light appeared around. The spots began to disappear from the children's bodies. The protagonist watched what was happening intently. Layla frowned and said that right now this power was more needed than her. The brunette smiled and thanked her friend for this. He grabbed the bouquet using mana, after which he quickly ran away, promising to take care of it. The flowers emitted energy, and Setsuna thought that he needed to get rid of them as soon as possible, since the plant becomes most toxic during flowering. The student quickly ran outside, realizing that the poison could infect others if he ended up in a crowded place. The bouquet emitted dark energy. Spots began to appear on the hero's neck. He ran to a tall tree, realizing that this was where he needed to go to get rid of this problem. Smoke began to rise from the berries. Setsuna threw the bouquet up with force. The student immediately created a blade of mana. The brunette frowned and cut the air. Several cuts destroyed the plant. A green glow began to emanate from the tree. The poisonous vapors dissolved in the air, and the hero crawled closer. At this time, there was a hum in the arena. Two spectators looked at each other, discussing that the representative of the close combat faculty was still missing, and that he must have escaped. The host looked at the form and said that since the student did not come within the allotted time, he was considered a loser, but then he was shouted to wait. Liano and Drago turned their heads. Actor shuddered in surprise. The protagonist appeared at the entrance with spots on his hand and breathing heavily. He looked at his opponent furiously and declared that he had not given up and was ready to fight. The long-haired man raised an eyebrow and asked if he really decided to do that in such a state. The opponent stands in front of the protagonist. Actor, looking mad, declares that it was MC's gift for passing the first round, clarifying that he actually accepted it. The protagonist in the suit understands how the enemy does business, declaring that innocent children suffered because of his poison. The opponent, smiling, asks what he is even talking about. MC clenches his fist, hearing that he is some kind of hot-tempered. The opponent, with a sarcastic smile, declares that these brats should be happy that they helped the real elite. The protagonist, in anger, shouts the enemy's name. The host with a microphone loudly announces the start of the duel. Actor forms a magic seal, uses a storm dance. Setsuna deftly dodges the explosion. Drago stands next to Liano and asks what happened to him, because his mana is completely ugly. The protagonist holds his shoulder, thinking that under the protection of the sacred tree the poison was purified, but there was no time to cleanse his body of it. He sees another attack in front of him, flies away from the explosions. The enemy, with a mad look, declares that this is not all. The protagonist jumps from one cliff to another, holds a fighting stance. The host declares that the melee fighter is now completely on the defensive. Cyrus, with a grin, says that the preparation was worth it. Standing behind, actor assures that Setsuna should prepare for humiliation. The protagonist turns to the spectators in the stands and realizes that Layla has not returned yet, while he hopes that everything is okay with the children. The mad enemy attacks, asking what is bothering him so much. MC watches silently, sighing heavily. The guys sit on the couch and discuss the fact that the melee fighter is just running back and forth and probably has no chance against a ranged mage. Actor releases beams of energy, suggesting that he stop and just give up. The protagonist covers himself with his hands, realizing that he will hold back the attack with defensive mana. He looks at what is happening in front of him in amazement. A loud explosion is heard in front of him. Blood falls to the floor. The wounded protagonist holds a fighting stance, his body slowly smoking. The opponent begins to laugh loudly, shouting that he is really already falling apart. MC's eyes are focused. He stands in front of the enemy, suggesting that he just finished this. There are scratches and abrasions on his hands. He says that the opponent should have simply not allowed close combat, and just continued to attack from a distance. He sternly shouts that everything actor does is provoke, after which he clarifies what he has planned. The fighter with purple hair says that he did not expect that it was the protagonist who would lecture on long-range tactics, noting that nevertheless this is a very good observation and clearly should not be underestimated. The protagonist stands on a lonely rock surrounded by lava. The opponent offers him to look around. The blonde screams in anger as the guy did it. Actor smirks and claims that he simply adheres to the principle of avoiding unnecessary risks. This was his goal from the very beginning. He raises a vortex of air around himself using a storm cannon. Drago stands next to the professor and sighs nervously. Generating a stream of air, the opponent declares that this is all. Layla stands in the stands and calls Setsuna. Showing her brooch, she shouts that the children are fine. The protagonist smiles. His body shines with blue fire, saying that now he does not need to worry about it. Clenching his fist, MC decisively declares that it is his turn. Actor opens his eyes in shock, asking how he was able to recover. MC forms an energy sword in his hand, saying that there is nothing special in it, explaining about physical strengthening, because he activated his cells the whole time the fight was going on to break down the poison. Pointing his sword at the enemy, he says that while he was busy destroying one layer of land after another, he in turn did everything as he expected. Actor angrily shouts that Setsuna does not need to be so self-confident, simultaneously asking what he can do in such a situation. The bearded teacher points his finger and shouts that the student is saying everything correctly. A whirlwind of strong energy flies towards the protagonist. The protagonist prepares his sword, thinking that there is nowhere to run, and there is little mana left, shouting that this will be the end for him. He hits the energy storm with his sword. His face is focused. He cuts the attack of the fighter with purple hair with his blade. He screams in shock what is happening. Drago is surprised to see that the attack is reflected. Shining with energy, the opponent begins to scream. He releases an even more furious stream of energy in front of himself. With a mad face, he asks if he really thinks that he will not be able to nullify his own magic, because MC has exhausted his strategies. He sees Setsuna flying in front of him, not having time to say that it's all over. The protagonist with the sword calmly asks if he really thought that he wouldn't be able to jump to him. Actor in horror says that it's impossible. He gets a serious cut with a blade from the protagonist. Setsuna stands in front of the defeated opponent, declaring that if he wants to apologize, then let him ask those children for forgiveness. The host announces that MC is the winner. Drago, sitting next to Lionel, exclaims that this is good. He looks forward in surprise, not understanding what is happening. The rock under the protagonist begins to crack. The guys in shock point their fingers, declaring that they are falling. The protagonist and actor begin to fall along with pieces of rock. There is lava around them. Stones begin to fall into the lava. The protagonist flies down and realizes that his opponent is unconscious, and this is bad. His body shines with blue fire, pushes off from a piece of rock, throws himself down, and grabs his opponent by the leg. Gritting his teeth, he does not understand how this could have happened. The girl opens her mouth and screams about Fenrir. A fierce beast appears under them. The protagonist turns around and realizes that this is Carol's summoning magic. The enthusiastic spectators watch what is happening. The beast steps onto the arena floor. The owner sits next to him and praises him. Setsuna turns around and looks at her. The girl says that he is actually one of them now. Smiling, Carol says that that is why she thought that he could cope without her help. The protagonist happily declares that she really saved him. The girl hugs her pet. The protagonist thinks about the fact that she is from the summoning faculty, is a contender for victory, and she also has talent and even her own fighting style. The guy glances at them and thinks that if she continues to win, then a very difficult battle awaits him. The amazed student claims that the representative of the melee has won again. Another hero with money in hand asks if last time was not an accident. The girl, biting her legs, says that if everything continues in the same spirit, it will be an unprecedented event. The director, sitting on a stone chair, silently watches. Cyrus discontentedly calls him a useless bastard. He goes forward and raises a finger, saying that he will not forget this. Layla sits on the podium and shouts that her friend tried hard. Drago says that she told him about what happened. It was not easy for him. He approaches his friend and asks what is happening with the children. She replies that they are resting in the infirmary. Smiling sheepishly, she claims that the doctor said that they will soon recover. Setsuna, smiling, says that it is a relief. Suddenly opens her eyes in surprise. She feels a piercing purple aura. She turns around and sees an enthusiastic audience. Layla, sitting behind, asks what is wrong. He says nothing. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist thinks about what just happened, as if a cold blue, so dark is the magic filled with a thirst for murder. Dark coils of energy hover around the arena. He thinks what it could be. A beautiful orange sky is visible. The protagonist stands in front of the smoke. Clenching his fist, he realizes that the final will be in a week, and there is also this mysterious presence. He needs to come up with something new to resist it. He steps onto the grass and thinks about the power he is looking for. Lionel stands behind him with a cigarette and asks what happened and why the student called him here. The protagonist with a serious look says that he wants to ask for advice again. Surprised, Lionel hears the address of the Comet Fist. Smiling, he says that this name brings back memories, specifying where he found out. The protagonist clenches his fist and thinks that it really was him. A fighter in a cloak stands in the middle of the field. Setsuna realizes that he heard this name when he once got into the magic battalion before the regression. The warrior delivers a hard blow to the monster. It is said that according to rumors he is a melee mage who is capable of killing the most ferocious dragons with one blow. By the time he joined the service, the professor had already left the army, so they did not have a chance to fight together. The protagonist smiles and thinks that he noticed this when they met. He bows and loudly asks to teach him his magic. Lionel grins awkwardly and says that it has been so long since he was last called that. The protagonist with a serious look assures that it does not matter. Among all the melee mages he had a chance to meet, he is the strongest. Lionel smokes a cigarette and asks why the student is so obsessed with strength, because now he can be called strong. MC with a determined look assures that this is not enough, he does not want to lose. With a stern face he says that even if the opponent is a god, the professor silently looks at him. His grin is visible. Holding a cigarette, he begins to laugh loudly, declaring that the guy is very interesting. While warming up, he says that in that case, in a normal situation, he would not want to teach this technique to someone who is still growing. His fist absorbs energy, he swings. The surprised protagonist sees this and thinks that he has collected an incredible amount of mana in it. Blue streams of energy destroy the stones around. The professor claims that it is thanks to this technique that he was nicknamed the Comet Fist. It consumes too much mana, so it will not be possible to use it so often. A man with a stern look says that one hit will be enough, so Setsuna should watch more carefully. The protagonist covers himself from the flying stones. A strong stream of energy crashes into the forest. Ash falls from a burning cigarette. Professor Lionel stands in the middle of the plowed land. The stunned protagonist notices this power. The big guy stands opposite and states that this technique requires constant mana collection, not very suitable for one-on-one tournament fights. The protagonist smiles and says that he is pleased and counts on it in the future. They stand in the middle of the technique's traces. The man offers to start training right now, offering to follow him. A light building is visible. Carol sits outside the window with a cup of tea. She sits opposite the interlocutor who congratulates her on reaching the finals. The girl thanks him. The man puts an empty cup on the table and states that her opponent will be a melee mage, but he would like to know how confident she is in her victory. Carol with a wide smile says that victory or defeat depends on luck, but will do everything in her power. Sitting on a chair asks if the interlocutor wants to drink another cup of tea. He thanks. She takes the tray away. The man takes the card. Shows the card to her back. She is in shock. Her eyes are full of fear. On her neck is visible sign. The girl falls to the floor. The villain realizes that if she wins, then so be it. His eyes are burning with fire. He thinks that if the situation suddenly changes, then smoke is visible in the middle of the forest. Steam escapes from the fist. The tired protagonist asks the professor how he did it. Lionel with a cigarette in his teeth says that he could not even think that he would master it in a week, realizing that it took him 2 years. The protagonist stands in front of the plowed land, hearing that he learned to make a comet fist. Now it is a deadly bullet. Setsuna smiles. In the middle of the huge arena, sounds are heard. The host holding the microphone declares that the final of the 781 competition has come. Carol smiles. She is introduced as the crowd favorite from the summoning department. Setsuna looks forward with confidence. He is called the dark horse of the melee. A student sits with his friends and asks who will win. The fat man exclaims with a grin that she definitely will not lose. The girl with purple hair says that the melee representative is also strong. She has become his fan. The little children happily ask Setsuna to give it her all. The opponents stand among the ruins. It is said that the final battle will take place in the ruins of the temple. A dome is formed around the battlefield. The host states that in order to prevent any damage that may occur during the battle, the formation mages have erected a strong barrier. Layla sits next to Lionel and exclaims that finally a landscape that will not put him at a disadvantage. The professor also hopes for this. The protagonist turns his head. He looks at the director behind the barrier and thinks that if he wins, he will have to keep his promise. He must teach him his second magic. The old man watches carefully. Carol standing opposite shouts that apparently he is in a great mood. The pink-haired girl waves her hand and suggests trying his best. The opponents stand opposite each other. The host announces the finale, which is already beginning, which is expected by many. A huge beast appears after Carol's call. The predator's gaze is aimed at the victim. The protagonist looks in shock, dodges a strong stream of energy escaping from Fenrir's mouth. The protagonist covers himself with his hands, thinking that this is a frost attack, which is more like a snowstorm. The enthusiastic girl exclaims that, as she thought, he works his legs perfectly. Several beams rush at MC. She shouts that she will not give him a chance to rest. The protagonist begins to shine blue, using a tenfold physical enhancement. Using his speed, he deftly dodges the energy streams, jumps up and swings his blade, runs it over the furry beast. Layla happily exclaims that he did it. Lionel with a cigarette says that summoned beasts are basically just clots of mana. The cut on Fenrir's face heals instantly. The protagonist jumps back, while Carol calls her pet a very strong boy. The opponent, smiling, says that MC is doing well so far, and if she does so, raising his hand, he forms a stream of energy above himself. The protagonist is standing on the ground, standing in the middle of the ice. The beast gets closer to him. Everything around is frozen. A barrier stands in the middle of the arena. The protagonist realizes that the ice mana does not go beyond the barrier. The mysterious stranger says that now that everything is frozen, Fenrir's attacks will be much more powerful. There is fire in his eyes, asking what Setsuna will do now. The protagonist, with a serious look, thinks that in addition to long-range attacks, the very thought of a battle of attrition is not beneficial to him. Dodges the hard energy beams, thinking that in this case he decided the outcome of this battle with his deadly bullet. Decisively swings the energy sword, jumps back from another attack by Carol. The guys are sitting on the couch. One of them says that the melee representative went on the defensive. The other notes that, as expected, he will not be able to defeat the summoner. Small children are watching the battle and worrying about Setsuna. Liano watches in shock with a cigarette. Layla, sitting next to him, asks what is wrong with him. He replies that nothing special. Fenrir, climbing the column, attacks. The protagonist understands that in order to use the bullet, he needs time to prepare. It is very difficult to use it in a one-on-one battle. MC forms a cloud of energy in his fist. The professor realizes that with his outstanding mana control he will be able to charge his hand even during the fight. Lionel, smiling, declares that this is not so easy to do. Carol watches with a serious look. The protagonist understands that she cannot be allowed. A fierce bird appears above the girl. Drago asks in shock that she summoned another pet. Lionel with a smirk notes that she is really talented because she performs simultaneous summoning. Two pets attack the protagonist together. A strong explosion occurs. Layla screams out her friend's name in fear. The protagonist fights them with his hands. The pets fly away. The protagonist holds a fighting stance. With a serious face, he declares that she really is an outstanding mage, which is why he expected that she had a trump card hidden. Carol in shock notices that he reflected the attack. Forming an energy sphere, the protagonist declares that it is his turn now. The mysterious stranger radiating a dark aura says that the end has come. He snaps his fingers. The sign on the girl's neck is activated. Holding her neck, she screams in pain, purple energy around her. The protagonist looks at her and screams her name. In shock, he remembers the same magic. Vindrake's silhouette is visible. Setsuna wonders if it's really him. The pets frown from this impact. The protagonist is amazed to see that this sinister magic is the same as that of a god. Carol looks on in fear. Tears are visible in her eyes. She raises her hand up and forms magic, screaming in pain. Giant monsters appear in the arena. The surprised students exclaim that she has summoned many. Liano grabs his head and realizes that this mana is definitely not coming from the girl. Holding a cigarette, he loudly shouts to stop the fight right now and lower the barrier, clarifying what the formation mages are doing. A mysterious stranger stands by the dead man and says that only the one who created it can lower this barrier. With a grin, he declares that that's why everyone has already searched for him. A mark is visible on his neck. He asks the formation mage. The protagonist dodges his opponents. The pet's attack. Setsuna jumps back from the blows. Gritting his teeth, he thinks that the owner of this mana is definitely somewhere nearby. He just needs to track the path. The stranger puts out his finger, wondering if he will have time to look around in such a situation. A giant bird appears in front of him. The pet breaks the column. The protagonist falls on the stones. Blood splashes to the sides. Flies away several dozen meters. Layla sees this in fear. The fighter holds his wounds. The stranger grins. With an ominous look, he says that even a person like him will have a hard time tracking mana while fighting off a flock of summoned beasts. It is only a matter of time until everything is over. Lionel is shocked to realize that things are bad. Setsuna does not have enough time to use a deadly bullet. Carol painfully holds her neck. The professor notes that she is at her limit. If she does not stop soon, she may die from losing control of her mana. The girl riding Fenrir painfully asks him to run. The guy with a bloody face screams his name, realizing that she has fallen under someone's control. A drop falls on the fur. Through tears, the warrior begs him to run before he is killed. Several monsters at once attack the main character. He deftly dodges. The fighter flies to the side with concentration. He strikes the enemy with a strong blow with his blade. He sees a giant bull monster in front of him. Its horns are approaching the guy. He grabs them. He lifts the huge animal above himself, sees other advancing pets, screams in rage, throws the bull at them. The director watches this silently. The man climbs the steps thinking that the student has most likely already spent more than half of his mana. The situation is worse than ever. He runs up the stairs realizing that he needs to find the mage who erected this barrier as soon as possible. Lionel, with a cigarette in his teeth, looks ahead asking not to die in front of him. The protagonist, with a bloody face, sighs tiredly. The monster behind him attacks. He turns around. The monster pierces his leg through and through. Setsuna, grimacing, watches. Layla screams in horror about his leg. The surprised guys in the stands ask if this is too much. The protagonist falls to the ground. The stranger, with a grin, declares that now he will not be able to use technology. Controls the purple aura, ordering the animals to finish him off. The monsters run to attack the wounded guy. The huge mouth of the beast opens in front of him. It bites his hand. Blood spurts out. Sharp teeth bite through the flesh. The protagonist screams in horror from pain. Lionel stands near the students and asks what is the most important thing for a melee mage during a fight. Drago calmly answers that you need to knock down the enemy with one powerful blow. The protagonist says that you need to take as little damage as possible while trying to reduce the distance as much as possible. The professor with a cigarette says that there are things much more important. Clenching his fist, Lionel talks about the fighting spirit that will allow you to strike the enemy no matter what. Setsuna hears with a serious face that they will begin training called Withstand Any Blow. Fenrir bites through the protagonist's hand. The protagonist says in a quiet voice, "Finally it worked." He clenched his fist. Blue energy is visible. He swings a powerful fist. The stranger is shocked, thinking that he should have used his other hand. Did he really try to hide the fact that he was charging mana into his other hand? Setsuna is furiously preparing an attack. The villain thinks that the summoned beasts are out of control. Several pets are growling furiously. He thinks that if he makes them gather at a certain angle, he can finish them all off in one blow. Layla and Drago are shocked to see this. The protagonist swings in anger, shouting that he put all his mana into this blow. Everything around him is filled with blue lightning. He uses a destructive bullet. The monster's head is torn apart. The girl flies away. A powerful beam of energy pierces all the beasts at once. The bloody protagonist holds a fist from which smoke bursts out. Carol is rapidly falling down. He breaks away from his place and runs to help. At the last moment, he stretches out his hands. He catches her, thereby saving her from hitting the ground. The girl is unconscious. The protagonist looks at her and is glad that she is okay. He puts her near the battle site. The amazed spectators are shocked to realize that she has lost. The host with a microphone loudly announces the winner. The protagonist walks across the battlefield. They announce that he is the winner. The director watches smiling, while the host says that about 100 years have passed since their last victory and finally the winner was a student of the Close Combat faculty. Setsuna, with serious injuries, raises his fist. All the students shout joyfully. The guys, seeing this battle, discuss that they have never seen such a technique, because it was simply a crushing blow. Layla enthusiastically wonders if her friend really won. Drago, smiling, says that this is just wonderful. The blonde with money exclaims that he believed that he could do it. The fat man asks what the coefficient was. The man is standing on the floor. The stranger near the dead magician says that he still managed to survive even in such a situation. As expected, he should not have underestimated him. A fire appears in his palm. He states that now he needs a corpse. He has red eyes. Raising his hand, he states that most likely they have already determined the exact location of this formation mage. He touches the poor guy's neck. Lionel quickly runs forward, asking if he is here. He turns around and sees the guy lying down. He picks him up and says that the situation has become worse than ever. A barrier is visible in the middle of the arena. The protagonist stands inside and notices that it has been removed. Suddenly, the director appears in front of the fighter. She goes to him and states that she received a strong blow after all the animals disappeared. He replies that most likely someone is controlling her pets. He leans towards her and uses magic, stating that this may be the result of some kind of magical device, claiming that he can provide the rest to the academy. The director, closing his eyes, turns to Setsuna. With a smirk, he states that he has shown his true strength and therefore he will keep his promise. MC, smiling, thanks him. The headmaster leaves, telling him to come see him tomorrow. A sign for a medical office is visible. A nurse heals the protagonist with magic. She bandages his arm and says that the external wounds are finished, but his internal ones haven't healed yet, so he should go and rest. Setsuna puts on a robe with bandages. She sits on the bed. The guys go inside. Layla asks if he's okay. The protagonist smiles and waves and says that he's fine. The girl enthusiastically declares that she is very happy, and also congratulates him on his victory. Drago pats him on the shoulder and congratulates him, claiming that he's the real pride of the faculty. A little boy standing next to the kids exclaims that his brother is really cool. Setsuna smiles widely. They leave the room. Lionel sits down opposite and claims that the formation mage is alive. Someone attacked him and knocked him out. The professor calmly explains that Carol needs to rest a little more, but she's okay. She'll most likely be interrogated after she wakes up. Points a finger and states that during this incident they were both targeted by someone unknown. The protagonist with a serious face hears the question if he has any ideas what happened. A silhouette of a man is visible on the door. A stranger in a cloak stands in front of it. Using purple magic, he tries to open it. He stares intently, thinking that there is a barrier that protects against uninvited guests. Particles form in his hand. He states that it is useless. He opens the door and sees Carol lying down. The girl is unconscious. He realizes that first he needs to eliminate her, and then deal with the protagonist. With a magic hand, he goes to the bed and says that all the tails need to be torn off. A dark aura emanates from the stranger, talking about tails that can somehow be connected to him. A magic ball approaches the heroine. Suddenly, the fighter hurries, blazing with blue flames. The protagonist with an energy blade runs forward. His eyes shine. He states that he knew that he would go to the girl first. Holding a sword stands opposite and says it is a pity that they had to meet at such a moment. Leo is hidden under the hood. The protagonist covers the girl with himself. His look is serious. The guy in the cloak smiles. Leo with a grin notes that he was exposed after all, and he is sure that he did not leave any traces. The protagonist frowns and says that there was no evidence, but after he personally witnessed his actions, he was personally convinced of this. The guy in the hood looks silently. Setsuna is standing next to Carol. The villain points and asks that they can talk outside, because this place is filled with the smells of all kinds of medicines. Bright moon shines in the sky. The guys went outside. The protagonist goes forward. Grimacing, he notices that his internal injuries have not yet healed, and he did not think that they would meet him when he is in such a state. Leo turns around smiling and says that he has a frightening appearance, specifying that he began to suspect him a long time ago. Memories from the blessing ceremony arise. MC notices that he disappeared then, and when he thought about it, an ominous premonition immediately arose. Leo, grimacing, looks forward. It is said that he lost the opportunity to become a faculty representative because he would not have lost to actor even if he had used his dirty methods. The villain holds his face and says that he did not think that he would be able to put all this together. The protagonist with a serious look states that now his suspicions have been confirmed. With a stern look, he talks about the final battle at the competition, saying that his mana merged with the attack. He asks again in amazement. His body emits a dark aura, clarifying who he means. A dark aura hovers around the guy. His face is covered with red lines. He wonders if his friend knows this great person. The protagonist sees this in shock. His hand caught fire. He thinks about the changes in the form of his mana, which leaves no doubt that he has become a subordinate of the evil god, in which case he must stop him immediately. The villain goes forward, stating that unfortunately he can no longer allow him to do what he wants, but he wanted to play a little more. With an arrogant look, he says goodbye to him. The protagonist holds an energy blade in his hand. In rage, he goes to attack. He draws it, but the villain blocks it. The discouraged guy realizes that the situation is the same as this time. In the memories, the silhouette of Vindrake appears. Leo arrogantly says that this great person gave him the authority to nullify mana. No matter what he does, it will not work. MC swings his blade. He draws the sword again, but does not cause any damage. The protagonist makes a face and understands that it is not time yet. Leo puts his magic hand in front of him. The protagonist prepares to strike, thinking that the mana nullification is activated only when he comes into contact with his attack, but if you hit from a blind spot. Desperately rushes forward. An invisible force around the villain breaks his energy sword. The enemy calmly states that it is useless because mana detection is faster than the protagonist. The guy is horrified. The opponent makes him fly back a few meters with a fireball. The blonde with a purple hand says that he would like to fight him when he fully recovers. The melee fighter slides along the ground. The villain goes forward and says that he is truly incredible. Usually melee mages would never reach such a level. If he had only chosen ranged magic, they would have been able to play a little longer. Leo with a stern face says that it does not matter anymore, because the main character will die here and now anyway. A bright lightning pierces MC's leg. He falls to the ground, blood splashes out of his leg. He understands that the opponent attacked the same place where he was wounded in the final. Frowning, he looks forward. In a calm voice he says the enemy's name. Kneeling, he asks why he is doing this. Leo with a crazy face says that he is simply tired of this world. The feeling is comparable to the desire to break someone else's sand castle. Setsuna, lowering his head, talks about the reasons. Seeing a bright flash, he notices that the villain is quickly casting a spell, wondering if this is really the power of an evil god. Suddenly, a third force intervenes in the conflict. A bright beam blocks Leo's attack. They are shocked to notice this, thinking about the white flame. A bright energy clot flies towards the villain. He deftly dodges. Setsuna looks at the roof where a dragon is visible. The school principal stands calmly next to him. In the memories, monsters killed his friends. The protagonist furiously asks him to stop pretending to be a fool. A friend's silhouette is visible. The protagonist asks if this is really that Leo. The villain forms a purple aura with his palm and demands that he shut up. MC sees how he begins to attack. The protagonist has a blue flame in his palm. He realizes that he is too far away to use the mana blade. He will need to create it as quickly as possible when he is at point-blank range. He remembers the attack on Vindrake. Clenching his fist, he collects mana, mentally recalling the feelings of that battle, because he still has a chance. The protagonist furiously draws his blade. The opponent releases a bright purple beam, shouting that it is too slow. The principal, Leo and Setsuna exchange glances. The headmaster and the dragon land near the student. They look at the opponent. The old man apologizes for being late. The guy objects saying that he was saved. The principal with a serious face asks if it is his fault that happened at the competition. Leo with red marks on his face smirks. The guy notices that the headmaster knows it too. The mage with a gray beard felt the remnants of mana and followed her. The villain standing opposite scoffs, saying that it was expected. He in turn explains that he did not really want to suspect his students. A bright flash forms around the director. Lightning flies in different directions. The protagonist squints and covers his eyes with his hands. The headmaster, raising his hand, declares that he must detain him. The white dragon opens his mouth. Streams of energy burst out of it. Breathes fire directly at the opponent. Everything flies apart. Surprised MC sees this and notices the incredible fire power. The magician holds his hand. Leo blocked his attack and remained unharmed. His eyes glow blue, saying that this is a white dragon, the strongest ghostly beast that everyone talks about. If not for the gift of a great man, he would be in danger. The director standing next to his pet talks about the nullification of magic, realizing that it really exists. The protagonist turns around and asks if he knows about it. The red eyes of the monster are visible. He explains that he read records about it in the family archives. It is written that when the dark forces awaken and the world begins to embrace chaos, people stand near the monsters. It is said that it is the nullification of magic that will be their main strength. Lightning flashes in front of the fighter. Leo arrogantly claims that his magic will no longer work on him. Raising his hand, he collects energies of different colors in himself, stating that the same applies to Danan. A powerful cloud of mana appears. The protagonist watches in amazement, realizing that this is the magic of 3 elements. The principal closes his eyes while gathering mana. Suddenly, his pupils glow bright orange. The villain raises a multicolored sphere above himself. It splits into several segments. The headmaster calmly looks forward with such eyes and orders Setsuna to take 2 steps to the right. The protagonist is amazed by his changed gaze. Purple arrows are directed from the villain to the heroes. The protagonist sees that magical projectiles are landing next to him. The principal in a white cloak skillfully dodges each enemy attack. Leo with a serious face notices that the old man dodged, which means it is time to stop doubting and end this already. The old man goes forward wondering why he is so surprised, and whether he really thinks that only his magic is capable of doing something in such a situation. The villain frowns and says that his power is similar to something. With wild eyes, Leo wonders how he likes what is about to happen. A purple aura is released around the villain. The protagonist, grimacing, notices the power of the evil god. The villain, with a terrifying look, raises his hand and assures that there will be no trace left of them now. The director watches closely and assumes that the fight will not be easy. They stand opposite each other. Setsuna thinks that if they fight with all their might, the place will be completely destroyed. The head of the school, with a serious look, addresses the guy. The protagonist, gritting his teeth, declares that he understands him. The old man begins to conjure butterflies, asking to grant him his wings. Suddenly, he flies up with his dragon. The white dragon, flapping its wings, attacks the villain, who is trying to close himself off. Blocks the damage with a dark aura, thinking that he wants to minimize the damage to the academy. Leo puts out his hand and says that they will start the fight, because this is their destiny. The white dragon spews flames at the enemy. The enemy sends a purple beam of energy in response. Powerful magics collide. Yellow and purple mana begin to mix. The dragon hanging in the air sees that the dark energy is breaking through. Opening his mouth, he is preparing to take heavy damage. The villain puts out his palm and sees a strong explosion in the air. Leo enthusiastically asks if they really decided to give up and give the victory to their student. The director with a serious face says that judging by everything, this old man should retire. Suddenly, the protagonist appears next to him. Leo smilingly notices that he unexpectedly decided to hide behind the dragon. Forms a red barrier in front of himself, shouting that this is too bad. MC swinging his fist flies down and declares that his former friend relies too much on this power. He accelerates, realizing that choosing close combat magic was the right decision. The protagonist in a rage declares that he will prove it with one blow. The villain with a grin sees this and urges not to underestimate his power. The protagonist, loudly screaming, approaches the enemy's barrier. Leo smiles. Suddenly his smile changed to a sad expression. The main character crushes his magic barrier with one blow and slams the villain into the ground. A strong stream of magic began to appear out of nowhere. Confidently looking forward, the guy shouted to himself to concentrate mana to become faster. The body rushed into the mana at high speed. A fist with a strong sound broke the mana layer. Gritting his teeth, the hero quickly flew towards his partner. Cracks appeared all over the ground. Suddenly, the enormous power of mana began to glow brightly. The hero's hand was clenched into a fist. The guy confidently stood at the breach of power. With a smile, the man stretched out his hands, saying that even at zeroing they have time to activate. Setsuna stood by the hero's body, looking at him in surprise. Clenching his hand into a fist, the guy confidently told himself that, as expected, the speed of such a direct attack exceeded his reactions, so he was not mistaken in choosing this path. With quick movements, the hero approached the director. Looking confidently at Danan, the hero began to tell him that the problem was solved. He replied that they needed to take care of his wounds, but he was interrupted by a voice saying that he had learned a lot. From the sounds heard to the side, the heroes looked at each other in fear. To the side. Slowly standing up, the smiling boy told Setsuna that he always exceeded his expectations. The boy looked at his opponent in fear, not understanding how he could stand after such an attack. His hands wiped away the bloody smile. Squeezing out the strength, the guy began to shout loudly with a smile that it was his turn. A huge ball of magic was heading straight for the guy. Setsuna confidently stood in a stance. The sword in his hands quickly hit the guy's magic. A few seconds later, all of the main character's weapons were already destroyed. Fear appeared in his eyes. Power immediately passed through the guy's body. A huge cloud of magic hit the wall, creating a crack. A few seconds later, Setsuna was already falling away from the wall. Turning to the side, the director began to shout in fear to his student. Lying on the ground, the hero tiredly talked to himself about magic. The main character's eyes looked dimly at his opponent. Setsuna, closing his eyes, understood that his opponent had combined long-range magic and magic nullification. Sky. 2 guys were training. Bullets hit the targets at high speed. One of the heroes was happy that he hit the very center. With a smile on his face, the guy understood that he shouldn't sit idly by, and now such a master makes all his guys tense up. Putting his hand forward, one of the heroes asked to shoot and threatened that his target would be someone's head. The partner, gritting his teeth, asked Leo what he was talking about. The guy's eyes looked away. Setsuna heard in fear how they told him that he lost. With quick and dexterous movements, one of the demons ate all those who were dear to the guy. Opening his eyes wide in fear, Setsuna could not believe it all. The girl immediately ran up to the guy worriedly. Looking at him attentively, the girl was happy that he woke up. Turning to the side, the hero heard that he was now in the infirmary of the academy. Looking at Layla, the hero heard that he had been unconscious for 3 days. Setsuna, widening his eyes in fear, could not believe it all. His hands were tightly clutching the blanket. The hero lowered his head in displeasure, thinking that he had already lost for the second time. Layla calmly watched the guy, saying nothing. Interest was shown in the hero's gaze. Confidently looking at the girl, the guy asked her where the director was now. Setsuna tried to slowly get out of bed. Putting on a robe, the hero calmly answered that he wanted to talk to the director to find out something. The hero's hand was on Layla's shoulder. Looking attentively at the girl, the main character began to say that he had to go. A few seconds later, the guy slowly left the ward office. Donan was sitting at a meeting of the main people. Clapping his hands, the man calmly answered that he was counting on them. After a while, the guys started to leave the office, realizing that they needed to get down to business. Suddenly, Setsuna's hands quickly opened the doors. Looking away in fear, the hero began to call the director. Donan was happy with a smile that his student was healthy. One of the heroes looked at the guy with displeasure. Lionel touched his shoulder, saying that he heard that he lost. Looking away, the Geo answered that the other guys were very worried about him. Setsuna looked back at the boy with confusion. A few seconds later, the hero began to bow to the director. Standing to the side, the guy began to apologize for letting Donan down. Putting his hand forward, Setsuna asked the teacher to tell him what happened after his fight. Standing next to the guy, Donan asked him to stop doing this, because his wounds had not yet healed. Looking forward, the director worriedly began to remember what happened after the hero lost consciousness. Donan stood next to the student. The enemy's head rose up. With a smile on his face, the hero calmly answered that he would like to kill them all, but now he spent too much mana. Leo laughed loudly and said to himself that it was fun. Bowing to the teacher, the hero went to his world, saying that now they will meet him in the future. Donan looked at the enemy with displeasure, realizing that he cannot just let him go. Seeing someone's face in the portal, the man understood that he had never seen anything like it, and now he had to become stronger. Sitting on the couch, the main character replied that everything had become clear to him now. Thoughtfully looking to the side, Setsuna thought about that very magical creature. The teacher looked at the guy with interest, asking him if he knew anything about this creature. The hero's gaze confidently looked to the side. Setsuna, sitting on the couch, continued to look at the teacher, who asked him to tell him everything. Donan's confident gaze tried to find out all the information. The guy continued to confidently look forward. One of the teacher's hands was removing a glove. Showing a mark on his hand, Donan asked the hero how he knew about it. Anger was visible in the teacher's gaze. Looking carefully ahead, Setsuna began to think about whether he should tell him about the future. A memory of a monster arose in his head. Imagining a destroyed world, the hero understood that he would not believe it. His hands were tightly holding onto his pants. Looking to the side with incomprehension, the teacher understood that there was some reason. Setsuna's gaze hid from the teacher's gaze. After a few seconds, the protagonist began to remember something. Looking at Donan, the guy asked him to check the necklace of rebirth. The teacher's gaze immediately changed to surprise. Looking at the necklace, it was clear that the blessing of the spirit of time had disappeared. Looking at the student, Donan could not believe that someone had already used it in another timeline. Gritting his teeth, the hero realized that he had used it 10 years later, since he had his own regrets. After a few seconds, the hero slowly approached the teacher. Sitting on the couch, the teacher reflected on what had been said. Thoughtfully looking to the side, Donan understood that it was really hard to talk about this without evidence. Looking closely at the guy, the teacher understood that they needed strong regrets to go back 10 years. The teacher slowly got up from the couch. Holding Setsuna's shoulder, the hero calmly replied that he suffered a tragic fate alone. The hero, raising his eyes, looked at the teacher. Donan looked at his student attentively, saying that from now on he would also try to become his support. The hero stood there with joy in his eyes. Clenching his hand into a fist, the hero understood that now they would confront evil at the same time as the director, and now they would be able to save the world from destruction. Standing next to the guy, the teacher asked him to allow him to teach the second type of magic so that he could confront the evil god. His hand reached up, showing his power to the student. Donan replied that this is a unique power that does not belong to any magical path. The guy's gaze confidently looked forward. With a gentle look, the teacher looked at the student, offering him a change of scenery. Standing in the forest, the guy was glad that in the past he trained here. Imagining a magical silhouette, the teacher began to talk about how spiritual magic is magic in which a person merges with the spirit, using his mana as a catalyst, allowing him to accumulate enormous power in his body. Introducing two different magics, it was clear that it differs from other magical paths because it can be combined with others, which is its main feature. The guy's gaze looked away in fear. Pointing his hand to the side, the teacher offered the hero to show him something. There was fire in the teacher's gaze. Looking closely, the main character realized that the teacher's eyes were exactly the same as they were during the fight with Leo. Putting his hands forward, Danan offered to play rock, paper, scissors. Setsuna looked at the man in surprise. Standing with the student, the teacher calmly replied that it would be wrong to fight a person who had not yet fully recovered. Someone's hand showed paper, and someone else's stone. Smiling, the teacher replied that he had won, so they should play again. The next time, the hands showed paper and scissors. A few seconds later, rock and scissors were shown. The hero began to understand with surprise that he could not defeat anyone. Looking carefully ahead, Danan explained that this was one of the abilities of the Spirit of Time, since the prescient eye is the ability to look into the future for several seconds. Various silhouettes of spirits appeared in his head, while Danan began to explain to the hero that in their world there are many different spirits, and if you make a contract with the wind spirit, everything will be able to fly, and with the water spirit, one will completely absorb a physical attack. With a smile, Setsuna began to understand that if he learns such magic, then he will be able to use close combat magic better. Standing in front of the guy, a man calmly explained that this magic required the hero to make a contract with the spirit, despite the fact that he would have to do something before that. Smiling, Danan suggested trying it right away. The teacher's eyes were closed. The hero's entire body was surrounded by a glow. The protagonist watched the teacher with interest. Waving his hand, the hero suggested the guy to become one with nature, to clear his mind, since spirits exist everywhere, and you just need to feel their presence. Closing his eyes, the hero tried to cleanse himself of everything. Squeezing his eyes, Setsuna asked the spirits to lend him their strength so that he could confront the evil god. The teacher looked at the student in surprise. Danan looked at the hero with interest. Frightened, looking forward, the guy realized that he could not feel anything. The teacher, looking at the hero, calmly explained that this was due to his irritability. Standing next to the hero, the teacher calmly explained that in order to become one with nature, it would be necessary to achieve a state of inner peace. The guy's eyes were closed again. A lot of questions began to appear in his head. Danan worriedly held the guy by the shoulder. Lowering his thoughtfully head, the man answered that it all took him 3 long years and therefore it would be necessary to comprehend such a thing only after the evil god came. Gritting his teeth, the guy understood that he had to master all of this as quickly as possible. Thinking about Leo, Setsuna understood that they all came from the same dimension as the evil god, since each of them had special abilities that were different from magic. Closing his eyes, the guy understood that Leo was the one who used decay magic. Thinking about the battle, Setsuna understood that he had already fought with one of the apostles before he returned back in time, and despite the fact that he had the advantage of possessing ranged magic, it still seemed very difficult. Standing confidently next to the teacher, Setsuna said that the same as Leo could appear in their world. Calmly looking at the student, the teacher replied that he should not rush, because the disorder in his head could seriously undermine the hero. Looking away, the teacher calmly explained that perhaps he would learn everything during their joint training. Standing with the hero, Danan replied that their assistant would tell him about everything later. With a smile, the guy heard that all this would allow him to overcome his limits. Slowly leaving, the teacher explained that this would also be a severe test for all of them, for which they first needed to rest. Imagining all this, it was clear that a very big surprise was waiting for them all there, which they would be surprised by. Leo opened the door. Putting his hand behind his head, he greeted everyone and said that he was a little late. The guy headed down the corridor. Footsteps were heard towards him, with the words that he had enough courage to make them wait. Zagan showed him his claws, asking if he decided to die. Footsteps were heard again. Pucker walked along the ceiling, asking Leo about how he never managed to kill at least one student, although he was allowed to act independently. Covering his grin, he noted that on top of that, the guy was injured and ran away scared, asking how he was going to take responsibility. He looked up, asking for forgiveness. He moved his hand to the side, saying that he couldn't keep his cool in front of his best friend. Zagan stood in front of him, demanding that he remove the smirk from his face, because it was annoying. Leo looked at him. The other man also looked into his eyes. He spread his claws wide. Then he pointed his paw at his partner, but heard someone's voice saying to stop. Both froze in place. At the end of the corridor, a man stood, saying that they were apostles and should behave appropriately, and that it was all for a greater good. Satanakia looked at them, outraged that they still could not understand this. His energy spread everywhere. Leo looked at him, mesmerized. Satanakia approached them, saying that now they will begin. Zagan put his paw in front of him when the man said that they needed to report first, and stopped him. Pointing at Leo, he said that he made a mistake by not understanding how they could do business with him now, and noted that if the guy got in their way, he was ready to deal with him personally. Pointing at himself, Puka said that he could leave it to him, and it would be much more interesting that way. Satanakia folded his arms and said that there was no need for that, and he had already agreed on everything. Looking closely, he added that the guy would definitely complete the task assigned to him. The sponge lay near the board. Several days had passed. Layla entered the classroom, turning to Setsuna. The girl came closer to him, asking if his wounds had healed since he came to the classroom. The guy replied that they were, and theoretically, if necessary, he could visit. She brought her hand to her face, saying that he was injured again after the finals, asking about what happened. The hero looked down. He remembered standing in front of Danan, who said that they should not divulge information about the evil god and his apostles to the people for now, and for now, he can only provide some information to trustworthy professors. The hero nodded, hearing that the man would go look for Leo and take care of the academy's security. Frowning slightly, the director added that they would postpone their joint training in spiritual magic for now. Now Setsuna smiled, apologizing for the trouble he caused, and said that everything was fine now. Putting his hands on the table, he thought about how he should recover as quickly as possible and become stronger. The boy slammed the table. Lionel went up to the podium, telling everyone to take their seats. Putting his hands on the table, he said that he was going to talk about the joint training with the other houses. The hero smiled, hearing about it. Seeing the students, the man spoke about how the training would be held together with the other houses. After introducing the various students, he spoke about how the previous competitions were mainly for the students to learn each house's fighting style, and this time they would have to learn their limits together in order to overcome them. Folding his arms, the man thought about how their goal was to improve the teamwork of the mages of different paths. Pointing to the board, Lionel said that the place where this would take place was a one-star dungeon, and since it was a very dangerous place, they would have to choose the candidates for this. Pointing to the students, the man added that the event would start in 2 weeks, so they should prepare well before then. Clenching his fist, Setsuna decided that this was what the principal had told him, and he needed to heal his wounds as soon as possible. Later, he walked down the street with Layla, who suggested that they have dinner together. The girl looked at him happily, saying that they needed to eat a lot to be ready for training, which he agreed with. A group of students walked past them, saying that this was the guy who won the competition, and he was great even though he used close combat magic. The girls looked at him with admiration, one of them saying that she had become his fan. Layla leaned towards him, saying that people were gossiping about him, even though they were bullying him just a few days ago. Someone blocked their path. The blonde guy pointed at the hero, saying that it was him, the one who won using close combat magic. Looking at him, Setsuna replied that it was true. Carl smiled contentedly when they said that he was from the Salon of Nobles, and that there were rumors that after graduation he would join the army. The guy stepped forward, telling the hero that he wanted to invite him to his salon. Adjusting his hair, the interlocutor explained that only high-level noble mages entered there, and they usually did not invite melee mages, but they were ready to make an exception for him. Looking at him intently, Carl thought that if Setsuna joined them, then no one else would dare to stand in their way. The hero turned his attention to the students who were admiring what was happening. The interlocutor raised his hand to his face, adding that the guy, as the winner of the competition, definitely needed this kind of communication. Carl then pointed at Leo, saying that if he continued to waste time on her, he would be able to bury his future. Setsuna refused, closing his eyes. He turned away, saying that bloodline did not matter at all, and that he was the one wasting his time. Leo angrily clenched his teeth. Someone was surprised to hear such words from the winner of the competition. He grabbed the chain, outraged that the hero dared to insult the aristocrats. Swinging it, he used the blade forge. In his hand was a sword. He swung it, cursing at Setsuna. The hero looked behind him. Someone stopped his hand. Layla grabbed his hand, saying that such fights were forbidden in the academy. Frowning, she asked him about the fact that he did not even know about this. Lowering his hand down, she heard in response that she should know her place. Carl's comrades rushed towards him. They left, hearing after them that they should remember this. Walking surrounded by his comrades, the guy said that he would tell his father about this. The girl only sighed. She looked at Setsuna with a smile, who thought that she had become much stronger. Someone's footsteps were heard. Someone appeared behind them, addressing the hero. Carol waved her hand at him. The girl came closer. The guy was glad that she had recovered. She replied that it was all thanks to him. With her hands folded, Carol said that she really wanted to express her gratitude to him. The girl looked away, asking him to go with her to her room. Layla was indignant at what she heard. In front of them was a door leading to Carol's room. The girl spread her arms, saying that as gratitude for saving her, she wanted to treat him to home-cooked food. Setsuna and the others went inside, thanking for the hospitality, and the girl said that everything would be ready soon, asking to wait a little. Layla approached her, offering her help, because it would probably be difficult for her to manage on her own. Taking the apron in her hands, she thought that this would really be a regular cooking, and they had already come up with all sorts of obscenities. Drago pointed at himself, not understanding why he was there. Carol replied that it was just like that, and that the more the merrier. The girls found themselves in the kitchen. Layla was surprised by the presence of healing herbs, to which the other replied that they would cook healing food. Setsuna looked at the door. He frowned, thinking about how the director said Carol didn't remember anything about the incident with Leo. He thought about her lying in bed, wondering if it was because of the shock or maybe her memory was erased. He didn't know, but he was still glad that nothing serious happened to her, However, there was a chance that other people could become a target like that. Drago sat down next to him, asking what he was thinking about again. The other man smiled, saying that the hero always does everything alone, suggesting that he should at least relax a little. Setsuna folded his arms, agreeing with him. Both looked away, hearing shouts about how this was too much. Looking towards the kitchen, the hero thought about how they had a fight there, and was worried if everything was okay, to which his comrades said that it was nothing. Carol looked out, asking Drago for help. He was wearing an apron. He didn't understand why he was wearing it too, to which the girl replied that there were only those. Setsuna smiled, hearing that they were starting. There was a lot of food on the table, and the girl wished him a pleasant appetite. Layla folded her hands, saying that they had overdone it a bit, to which the hero replied that it was not so. Setsuna folded his hands in prayer, thinking that since this was prepared for him, he should at least eat it all without leaving anything behind, and wished him a pleasant appetite. A glow appeared in the area of his stomach. He decided to use his physical enhancement to improve his digestion. A plate of food appeared in his hand. After a moment, he bit into a piece of meat. Layla collected the plates, asking if he was okay. The hero took another portion, answering that the egg soup was simply incredible and had a rich, deep taste. Drago held the pot in his hands, saying that he made it and that there was still more. Carol looked at him with fear, saying that she had lost. Setsuna just smiled widely. Everyone gathered at the table. He thought that this was not so bad. He remembered his past life, realizing that something like this was destroyed by an evil god. Now, clenching his fist, the hero decided that he would not let this happen again, and would not lose a second time. The students gathered at the entrance of the dungeon on the day of joint training, 2 weeks later. Some were discussing something. Others gathered in a small group. Drago put his hand on the hero's shoulder, asking if he was ready. He smiled, answering that he was, and that it was all thanks to the healing food they had prepared for the past couple of days, and thanked him for it. The comrade waved it off, saying that it was nothing special, and that it was all for the sake of the faculty of Close Combat Magic, and if the hero had not eaten healing food during this time, the effect would have diminished over time. Setsuna smiled lightly, thinking that this time he was on the same team as Drago. Seeing his friendly appearance, he knew that he could easily trust him with his back. A couple of students approached them. One of them apologized for the wait. Drago realized that they were upperclassmen. The guy pointed to himself, saying that his name was Mifune, and he was a third year in the faculty of pharmacy. The girl took off her hood, saying that her name was Yuzaha. Setsuna smiled back and introduced himself. Mifune placed his hands on their shoulders and, realizing that the hero was the winner, noted that he looked reliable, offering to try together with him. Drago turned to Setsuna, noting that the upperclassman was a cheerful guy. Yuzaha smiled, quietly saying that he had managed to lull them into a false sense of security. His eyes began to glow, and he said that they would begin. Later, everyone gathered around one person. Looking over the students, the professor introduced himself as Giovani, saying that he was in charge of this joint training and explained that it would be between the pharmacy and melee departments. Introducing the dungeon, he talked about how it was called a ruin sealed in mana water, and that they would encounter ancient monsters and the undead in it, reminding them that it was a 1-star dungeon. The professor touched the bracelet, saying that during the joint training, they would have to defeat these monsters in real combat. Holding this bracelet in his hand, he said that their exploits would be recorded on it. Imagining a student defeating a monster, he said that the loot they dropped would count as bonus points, and those who scored the most points would be awarded medals from the academy. The students looked at him, hearing that whoever got more than 100 points would get the chance to join the training of the mages of the Royal Battalion. Setsuna smiled, thinking that he missed them very much. As he imagined several mages, he thought that only the strongest mages from all over the kingdom entered there, and that was where he met many of his comrades in his past life, and if he could join them, then perhaps he would be able to meet them again. After handing him the bracelet, the professor said that they had not gone deep, so they might encounter monsters that were too strong. Some of the students looked scared, hearing the words about not going too far. The professor, imagining such a situation, said that if that happened, they could increase the mana in their bracelet a little, so it would teleport them to that place. After fastening the bracelet, Setsuna decided that he needed to get 100 points. Drago frowned and decided that it wasn't. He and Drago smiled confidently, saying that they needed 200. Both looked at each other. The comrade pointed to the bracelet, saying that he was looking forward to the hero doing it. The hero showed his own, agreeing with him. Giovanni stood in front of him, asking if everyone was ready. Layla clenched her fists. Yuzaha looked completely calm. The hero and his comrade were surrounded by a bright aura. The wind blew the cloaks of the other students. Yuzaha held her cloak. The professor looked at them. Setsuna and Drago rushed inside, hearing that the training was starting. The two of them ran along the corridor. Both looked focused. The hero thought about how this was a dungeon with 1 star. Seeing the torches on the walls, he thought about how these were the ruins of an ancient civilization and an unknown place. He introduced the monsters, realizing that there were many of them here and that they would be hostile to intruders. Setsuna glanced at his comrade and said that even with my deportation, this training was still a very dangerous undertaking. Noticing the passage ahead, Drago replied that there was no one there. They went down the stairs. Finding themselves in a spacious corridor, Drago was surprised that something like this could be underground. The hero touched the plant, reasoning that there was once an entire civilization in these ruins. Looking at his comrade, he thought about the glory of the director, and that this training could be necessary for future tasks. Setsuna clenched his fist and decided that now he needed to figure out the spiritual magic as quickly as possible, putting all his efforts into it. The others caught up with them. Mifune noted that they were very fast. Yuzaha glanced to the side and attracted the attention of the others. The students broke up into small groups. Some of them continued on, some of them doubted that this was the right path, but heard the answer that the other one would definitely be a trap. Mifune smiled, saying that in a joint training they obviously needed to choose the most dangerous paths. Pointing to the passage, he said that they would go from there. Looking in that direction, the hero thought that, considering that they needed to get as many points as possible, his words were not without meaning. The boy asked what was bothering him. Setsuna headed towards the passage. Knocking on the wall, he said that it was a trick. Drago pulled his hand away, asking if he was sure about that. The hero pointed to the wall in front of him, saying that this vegetation seemed out of place here, meaning they were in a large room. Folding his arms over his chest, Mifune assumed that it was just a coincidence. Drago struck, when the hero responded that he could hear the howling of the wind from the other side. The wall in front of them collapsed. Winking at the others, Setsuna asked if they agreed with him. The boy and his comrade rushed forward, noting his strength. Mifune and the girl followed them, saying that thanks to this, they could earn as many points as possible. Footsteps were heard in the corridor. The two quickly descended the stairs. A large stone appeared behind them. Turning around, Drago said to leave it to him. The swing cut the stone. Its fragments scattered to the sides. The boy clenched his fist in victory when the hero noted that he was very inspired and replied that if they showed everyone their strength, then people would recognize close combat magic. Smiling, he added that he did not want to lose to him again. Setsuna smiled back. At that moment, he felt something behind him. He managed to dodge the arrow. Several more were heading his way. The hero's swings left bright traces. Drago looked at him confidently, realizing that not only their reaction speed, but also their insight were on a completely different level. Approaching the hero, he said that now they should focus on traps, so that their third years would have an easier time. The boy pointed to the chest. A magic blade flew past him. The magic touched the chest. Mifune held the loot above his head, saying that it was his. The system showed that he was assigned 15 points. He thanked Drago with a smile for leaving it to him. The boy opened his mouth in confusion. He gritted his teeth, saying that if this was a battle of speed, then he would not lose. A torch was burning brightly on the wall. Together with Setsuna, they continued on their way. Part of the wall collapsed on them. Drago smashed it with a blow. A chest appeared in front of him. The boy extended his hand towards it. The magic blade touched it again. Mifune put his foot on it and said that it was his, and now he had 30 points. Drago looked at this with annoyance. Several torches illuminated the corridor. The boy smashed the armor into several pieces. A magic blade appeared near him. Mifune rushed forward, finishing off the enemy. His swing left a bright trace. He looked at the defeated enemy with satisfaction, having 40 points. The students fought monsters. There were reports that Drago had 10 points, and Yuzaha had 30 points. Mifune grabbed the chest faster again, and he had 55 points. He smiled at him and Setsuna, saying that they were strong but short-sighted, and at this rate they would definitely not catch up. Drago glared at him. The wizard spread his arms, and a message appeared saying that he had 10 points, while Setsuna had 25. The white man said that it was very important for them to properly distribute the points they had gained. Frowning, the boy noted that they kept stealing points from their juniors, accusing them of such methods. Yuzaha looked at her comrade with a smile, surprised that he actually said that, and he replied that he did. Looking sinister, the third year said that he was not as stupid as those who only did what they did, pumping up their muscles, and they were talking about some rules. Drago lowered his head, hearing that people were known for using others to achieve their goals, and if the hero really was that crazy, he could do the same. Throwing up his hands, he added that if only they could do that. Setsuna thought that he was very cunning. Imagining his ability, he knew that he could easily teleport since he had 2 different formation circles, and it was very convenient since he could catch people off guard, but it still had a drawback. Looking at the girl, he noted that she had the same thing, and it seemed that while they were suffering one defeat after another, she did not care about the points at all. Staring at them intently, the hero thought that perhaps they had their own hidden intentions. The light of the torches illuminated the corridor. Mifune walked ahead, saying that just a little more and they would be done. He had 80 points, Yuzaha had 50. An angry Setsuna and Drago walked behind, having 35 and 10 points. Something caught his attention. Looking at the room, he thought that it was different from the rest. The comrade teleported forward, saying that he would gladly take the chest. The chest was surrounded by a dark aura. The upperclassman noticed it. Still, he moved forward, and when the hero tried to stop him, he replied that only a fool would wait. The beam hit him against the wall. Setsuna looked to the side tensely. Someone's hand appeared from the chest. Frowning, he thought that this dungeon should be a 1-star. Seeing the monster in front of him, he realized that it was a completely different level. A strong aura spread from the enemy. Setsuna raised his hand in front of him. Seeing how a snake crawled out of the monster's mouth, he did not understand what the King of Death was doing here. Mifune was seated unconscious. The hero thought that this dark fire that the enemy emitted caused terrible nightmares. The eyes of the King of Death began to glow brightly, and he said that since people disturbed his sleep, they will die. Drago looked a little confused, surprised that it was talking. Setsuna moved his hand to the side, saying that he was dangerous, so his comrade should take Mifune while he held him off. But Drago flexed his fists, only asking how many points he would be worth. The hero looked at him with a smile. The Death King created a magic circle. Dark flames were heading towards them. The hero managed to block them with a wave. Drago rushed to attack. The monster extended his hand in front of him. A magic circle appeared in front of the student. He gritted his teeth, realizing that he had placed them everywhere. Dark flames flared up in front of him. Drago was thrown back, and he thought that if he had not protected himself with mana, everything could have ended badly. The Death King created several more magic circles near Setsuna. Looking at them in shock, he had no doubt that the enemy's intelligence and magic power proved that he was at the level of 4 stars. Flames were heading towards him from all sides. With a few swings, the hero repelled the attack. One of the circles appeared near Mifune. Setsuna turned towards him, telling him to stand up. A magical weapon appeared in someone's hands. Drago cut through the circle. The upperclassman opened his eyes. The boy extended his hand, telling him to help too. Mifune accepted his help. Circles had already appeared above Yuzaha. Dark flames rushed towards her. Setsuna rushed forward. He managed to save the girl. Holding his hand on her shoulder, the hero asked if she was okay. Smiling, Yuzaha answered that she was, and thanked him. Looking at her, the hero thought that something was wrong here. Drago's swing left a bright mark. He saw the hero put his hand on the bracelet, saying that they would do it. Smiling, the boy replied that he had waited too long for this moment. Mifune smiled ominously, not understanding what they were talking about, but decided that it didn't matter. He needed to steal the glasses and then leave here. Drago turned to him, asking if he was planning something. The upperclassman folded his hands in prayer and answering, said that he would never do that to his saviors. But the ominous smile appeared on his face again, and he thought about the fact that he was joking. Touching the bracelet, Drago said that he would not allow these glasses to be taken. Setsuna dropped to one knee. Remembering his fight, he thought about how he couldn't kill Leo last time because the bullet that hit him wasn't powerful enough, and that's why he needed to hone his basics again. The mug was on the table. Someone said that they were done with training, asking if there was another way to become stronger. The instructor placed the bracelet on the table, saying that there was nothing to be done about it, and that he knew that the time would come sooner or later. The hero looked at it in surprise. Looking at the rest, the janitor said that it was imbued with weight magic, and if they got used to it, they would feel progress when they took it off. Leona lit a cigarette, saying that he would not recommend it until the hero was completely cured, because it was an old and dangerous method. Looking at the students, he added that they could use it at their own risk. Drago clenched his fist, and both thanked the instructor. Now Setsuna was taking off the bracelet, thinking that he had been wearing it since then, but now he would finally take off the weights from his arms and legs. The hoop fell to the ground. Mifune looked at it in surprise, not understanding what it was. The monster surrounded itself with magic circles. Dark flames burst out from them. The guy dodged the attack. Together with Drago, they rushed forward, using physical reinforcement. A bright light surrounded his hand. Dark flames flew next to him. Several streams of flame hit the ground. Drago smashed them with his bare hands. He raised his leg to attack. With a blow, he broke the crown of the King of Death. The monster grabbed his leg. Another magic circle appeared under them. The guy opened his mouth wide and said that he should have focused on defense. Setsuna appeared next to them. Flames began to gather near the circle. The hero managed to deliver a powerful blow. Opening his mouth, Mifune thought that this was some kind of joke. A powerful explosion sounded. The two students stepped back. The enemy's head fell to the ground. The hero looked at his hand. The system reported that he and his comrade were added 50 points each. Drago assumed that since they won at the same time, the points were divided. Gritting his teeth, Mifune thought about how they hadn't gone all out before, and he had never seen so many strong melee mages here. The hero turned around, asking to see his wound, but he was surprised. Yuzaha wasn't there. Rocks rained down from the ceiling. Both felt a tremor, thinking it was an earthquake. Cracks appeared under Mifune's feet. He had to jump to keep from falling. Setsuna managed to grab his hand. They noticed monsters below. Drago frowned, asking what they were. The skeletons' eyes glowed brightly. They opened their mouths wide and screamed. The monsters ran towards them. Setsuna took the magic blade, not understanding what was happening in this dungeon. The monsters rushed to attack. Setsuna cut them with his swings. Mifune also fought them. Drago's swing left a bright mark. Opening his mouth wide, the hero told the others to aim for the head. The upperclassman struck. Frowning, he noticed that no matter how many times they killed, they did not get points. He looked back at the hero, hoping that he himself understood everything, because now was not the time to bring up old grudges. Setsuna struck the enemy in front of him. A dark aura surrounded the monsters. Setsuna, sighing, understood why they did not get points. Seeing how the monsters stood up again, he realized that the dark magic was resurrecting them back. Looking at this, Drago said that there was no end to them. Holding his weapon in his hand, Mifune said that this was too strange and that monsters like this shouldn't appear in a one-star dungeon. The hero sensed something, noting that it seemed like a source of magic that was located on the lower floors. Turning around, he told the others that he felt magic from below. The upperclassman turned to him, asking what it meant and if he was sure that not mistaken, to which Setsuna replied that he was sure, but he did not know who was emitting it, and perhaps it was Yuzaha. Drago rushed forward, saying that they needed to go there, and offered to go down. Mifune clarified whether it was necessary to go with them. The hero looked at him, answering that there was no other way, and if he stayed here, he would condemn himself to a slow death. But he was outraged that he was underestimated. Looking at him, the hero explained that this was how it would be, clarifying that he could not do anything and therefore stole points. Setsuna went down, hearing the answer that this is called strategy. Looking at the monsters, Mifune said that he hated them, this team and this dungeon. He used his skill, clarifying that he just needed to follow the others. The three of them walked down the hallway. The upperclassman was surprised by their calmness in such a situation, asking about the two of them training together before, to which Drago said that he had become very talkative. Setsuna pointed to the side. When Mifune replied that it was better than listening to the groans of the dead, the hero said that he felt strong magic. He walked ahead. The boy looked up. In front of them was a monster, which was probably the source of the magic. A huge eye looked at them. Setsuna frowned, thinking that this was the first time he saw such a monster, and usually in such situations the source of magic is a magic circle. The upperclassman covered his face with his hand, thinking that the others did not yet know how to navigate the dungeon, and then he would do it. Drago struck him, saying that he could finally warm up. At that moment, Setsuna struck the monster, receiving 10 points. They turned around and the comrades said that the dead were rising again, to which the hero replied that perhaps they realized that their source of magic was being destroyed. Drago was warming up his hands for battle when Setsuna said that they could now continue to gain points to complete the task and offered to discharge on them. Mifune, noticing the trembling in his hand, thought that the others were very confident in themselves, but now he had nothing to fear. They could calmly gain 100 points to exit the dungeon. The hero approached him, asking if they could find out where Yuzaha went before the undead arrived. He, looking at him, replied that he himself did not know, assuming that she got scared and ran away. Remembering the girl's smile, the guy thought that she did not look scared even when the king of the dead attacked them, and decided that something was wrong with her. Looking at the dark flames, he also thought that these monsters shouldn't be found in a dungeon with a single star. Frowning, the hero suggested that he might be wrong, but maybe the apostles were involved in all this dark magic. If so, it would be dangerous for Drago and the others to be here. He remembered Layla, hoping that they were okay. The monsters ran out into the hallway. Drago confidently clenched his fists, calling them his bonus points. He and the others defeated the enemies, gaining points. A foot crushed a skull. The students looked at the defeated monsters. The magic blade dissolved in his hand. Setsuna picked it up and seeing that he had 225 points, said that they had achieved their goal. Mifune pressed his bracelet and said that he was leaving. Drago glared at him, asking if he wanted to look for Yuzaha, since they were friends. The hero also frowned. The upperclassman kept his hand on the bracelet, answering that he had only met her yesterday, and she had acted as if they had known each other for a long time, and most likely the girl was crying out of fear outside right now. Turning to him, Setsuna was surprised by what he heard. He replied that they would see each other again. Turning away, the hero decided to look for her further. Removing his hand from the bracelet, Mifune did not understand why they could not simply teleport to the surface. The hero and his comrade went further down the corridor, offering to simply walk to the exit, but he said that this could not be and that something was wrong here. Staring intently ahead, Drago agreed with him, adding that something was wrong with the bracelets. Setsuna, turning around, again felt the ominous magic emanating from somewhere below. He looked at his comrades, saying that he would go look for Yuzaha and that they should not worry, because he could handle it himself. Mifune asked if he had fallen in love with her. Frowning, Drago replied that the upperclassman had done enough for them already, so he would go with him. Standing near the passage, the hero agreed and said that he felt strong magic from below, and asked them not to run forward if they felt danger. Mifune, frowning, called out to them. He pointed up, saying that first they should go outside and report this to the professor, not understanding why they were so sure that the girl was somewhere here. Looking at him, Setsuna replied that she might be weak, but he could feel her mana. The upperclassman should go and report this to Giovani himself, but he should be careful. Watching them leave, the upperclassman thought that something was wrong with them, since there was a much higher chance that she had escaped to the surface. Gritting his teeth, he was irritated by the thought, and went even deeper into the dungeon. Mifune covered his face with his hands, realizing that being alone was much more dangerous and that this should not have happened, not understanding how everything went wrong. Someone's hand fell on his shoulder. Drago looked him in the eyes, offering to find the girl and return to the surface together. Looking away, the guy agreed to look for her with them, in order to find her faster and leave here. The sounds of footsteps were heard in the dungeon. They were going down the stairs. The upperclassman said that they could feel her mana, wondering why the hero was able to do this. Looking ahead, Setsuna replied that it was thanks to training, to which the interlocutor said that it sounded quite simple. After exhaling a few words, Drago noticed that it had become unexpectedly cool. The torches on the walls were extinguished. The three of them went out into a round hall. The hero stopped the others with a gesture, and they noticed some sounds. Setsuna pointed with his hand to the turn, saying that they were from there. The sounds were getting louder. Drago ran out first, saying that there was something here. They saw Yuzaha in front of them, asking if she was okay. Drago was shocked by what he found. The girl's pupil was cloudy. Her hand looked withered. She reached out to her comrades, asking for help. Mifune gritted his teeth, not understanding what was happening. Drago reached out his hand to her and heard a warning not to approach her. The hero approached his comrade, saying that this was an ancient trap. There was only darkness around. Seeing the walls, the guy thought about how he did not see any trap activated. He remembered a small box in front of him, thinking that perhaps this was all about some kind of object imbued with dark magic, because in his past life, his friend bought something similar. Now he frowned, thinking that the girl did not do it of her own free will and that someone else was involved, saying that special magic was needed to nullify the effect, and only a magic weapon could destroy such magic. A magic blade appeared in his hand, and he said that he would do it himself. Setsuna held the weapon out in front of him. The sword touched the magic circle. A dark aura circled Yuzaha. She fell on the hero. Looking at her, the guy heard that she could not let him go further, and thought about what it meant. Noticing something on the earring, he assumed that the magic was coming from her. Mifune frowned and said that it happened because she was too reckless, and asked about what would happen to her now. Putting her on her back, Setsuna replied that he didn't know yet, but they could go to the others now and then tell the professors, thinking that this was all very unnatural and most likely the apostles did it. Drago, looking away, said that he had many questions, but he would ask them after they left here. The hero asked Mifune to use the bracelet to go back. He touched it. The bracelet gave no sign, and the guy replied that, as expected, he couldn't, surprised that the professor gave them broken items. Giovani touched the girl's bracelet, saying that she had the same thing. Only a weak signal came from the bracelet. Drago frowned and told the hero that they needed to hurry. Rocks started falling from the ceiling, and thinking it was another earthquake, he suggested that they leave quickly. Opening his mouth wide, the boy told everyone to run. The others followed him. Mifune was visibly nervous, wondering what was going on. Rocks fell in front of him. Drago smashed them with a punch, telling him to go faster. Setsuna turned around, telling him that they were trapped. The three of them looked at each other as the hero said that the road was blocked by rubble and that they shouldn't waste their energy and find another safe route. Layla put her hand on the map, asking if anyone was there. She pointed to the side, hearing a request for help. One of the students was trapped under the rubble, and she said that they would remove it. The rocks fell with a loud sound. The girl grabbed his hand. A green aura surrounded her, and she said that she would ease his pain a little with healing magic. The other one asked where the others were. The wounded one replied that one of them was behind this rubble. Frowning, Layla mentally prayed for the hero and his comrade to be alive. Some sounds were heard in the dark corridor. Mifune gritted his teeth, saying that this should not have happened. Drago sat on the ground, asking the hero if he could do something with his destructive bullet. He replied that he had already thought about it, but the risk was too great to provoke another earthquake. Without looking back, he heard his comrade say that everything would be fine as long as they were able to clear the rubble, and replied that it was already getting hard to breathe here, and everyone was tired. Drago looked up, asking if they had another way out, and heard that there was. Setsuna sighed and added that they would need to go even deeper to do that. Seeing the unconscious girl and the upperclassmen in despair, he noted their state. Mifune placed his hand on the rocks when the hero said that he couldn't take them all with him, so he would do it himself, and asked where he was so confident. Turning around, he added that he knew that he was strong, but noted that the lower they went, the stronger the monsters were, and if he wasn't sure, it would be better to stay here. Setsuna moved his hand away, saying that he wasn't sure, but most likely the reason for these earthquakes was because the dungeon boss had woken up, and the reason they couldn't teleport was because a stronger mana source was blocking them, and it wasn't a one-star dungeon anymore. He turned away when his comrade called him very smart, and thought that it was all because he had managed to go through many dungeons in his past life. Mifune raised his head, asking if Drago would stay here. He said that they would wait for good news and suggested that they mark the path they had taken just in case. Setsuna headed forward, saying that he would save everyone soon. There was darkness everywhere. The boy walked down the stairs, wondering how the boss could affect such a large dungeon so much, and wondered how strong melee magic was. He saw monsters ahead. In his mind, he thought that if only he had fire magic or purification magic. The swing left a bright trace, and he realized that it was easy to deal with the undead, because one of the weaknesses of melee magic is that it lacks elemental properties. The enemy's head fell to the ground, and he decided that most melee moves were mainly direct attacks. The boy continued on, but still noted that he somehow felt like something was burning inside him. Rocks continued to fall from the ceiling. A boulder flew to the side. The man took a deep breath. Drago was protecting the rubble, and when Mifune addressed him, looking up, he said that he thought winning the melee mage competition was just luck, But he was wrong and had been cheating all this time while they were honing their bodies. Looking at his hand, he wondered who among them had actually been fooled. They looked up in surprise, and when the student replied that since he was older, he shouldn't act so pathetic and that they would all return alive, they heard a question about whether there was anyone here. Drago said that there was, opening his mouth wide. The boy turned to Layla, telling her that there was someone here. The girl put her ear to the rubble, asking if it was Drago and how Setsuna was. The boy spread his arms, answering that everyone was here, and the hero went to look for another exit. Mifune said that he couldn't scream anymore. The girl asked for help in clearing the rubble. The torch glowed red. As he descended, the boy noticed that the air was getting heavier. Seeing a large room, he realized that this was the heart of this dungeon. Something caught his attention. He noticed spruce trees in the distance, deciding that this was the exit, but it was blocked by a barrier because the boss had woken up. Looking to the side, Setsuna thought that even though this place was filled with dark energy, there was nothing inside, but he still had to be careful. A pair of red eyes looked at him. A huge mouth opened above his head. The monster pounced on the hero. Clouds of dust rose from its attacks. Setsuna jumped, dodging it. The hero slid along the ground. He frowned, looking ahead. The monster's eyes were glowing brightly. So, in front of him stood a two-headed hydra. Gritting his teeth, the boy assumed that this monster was the source of all the anomalies in this dungeon. Seeing its sagging skin, he noticed that the body was damaged, which meant that someone had forcibly resurrected it. Remembering the great battle, he thought that the only one who could do this had the power of an evil god. Green smoke spread around the monster. Setsuna stepped back, realizing that it was poison, and decided that he could not delay this. Seeing the hydra through the poison, he thought that if he did not defeat it, the situation in the dungeon would only get worse. The hero took a deep breath. Pulling the weapon aside, he decided that he would finish this as quickly as possible. The boy pounced on the enemy. He struck. The swing left a bright mark. Setsuna moved behind the enemy. The enemy attacked him with his tail. The boy managed to dodge. He recalled his previous battle, thinking that he had fought a hydra once before, and the monster would not die as long as its heads were in place. Pushing off the ground, Setsuna knew that he had to chop them off one by one. He quickly climbed up the body, remembering that direct blows to the head would not cause significant damage due to the durable skull. The hero pulled the sword behind his back, deciding to aim for softer places. A blow to the neck cut off the head. A stream of poison burst out of the other. He was forced to go down to the ground. Looking at his clothes, Setsuna noted that it was a caustic attack, and if it had hit him, then everything would have ended there. A dark aura surrounded the severed part. The head began to regenerate. It quickly grew tissue. Frowning, Setsuna noted that the regeneration was like that of a zombie. The monster had two heads again. The hero thought that he couldn't win if he only chopped one at a time, so he had to chop off both at once. The guy took another deep breath, realizing that it wouldn't be a problem for him if he had ranged magic, and decided to try something. He remembered his training. Then the magic in his hand dissipated. Setsuna looked annoyed, not understanding why it didn't work, and heard the question about him trying to create two magic blades. Lionel stood at the door and said that it was impressive that the guy could go so far, suggesting that his body couldn't keep up with the image in his head. A glow surrounded the man's hand. He said that even the best melee mage takes 20 years to do this, but the body of an ordinary person, as a rule, is not yet formed enough, so he must first train control in his body. Setsuna's face was dripping with sweat, and he replied that he understood, thinking that compared to ranged mages, a melee mage needed to focus more on controlling the mana inside his body, and even after being in an adult's body, he still couldn't fully rely on that experience. A bright aura surrounded him, and he thought that during the recovery, his mana control had become much better. Now Setsuna rushed at the monster, realizing that he hadn't tried it since that day. Energy was gathering in his other hand when he decided that he needed to focus on one sword first. He clenched his fist, doing the same with the other. The swing left a bright mark. The hero struck. He had to jump back, and he realized that he needed more strength. A tail appeared behind him. This time, the enemy struck. Setsuna pushed off the wall. Landing on the ground, the boy decided to try again. Gritting his teeth, the hero realized that he had spent more mana than he had expected. When the poisonous spit was aimed at him, he assumed that it might be the effect of the poison. The boy found himself in front of the enemy again. Staring at him, he noted that his strength was running out. Imagining how the skeleton controlled him, he still decided that he could not die here. Setsuna rushed forward, realizing that he only had one chance. He took a deep breath, gathering all his concentration. The hydra rushed after him. The monster struck, but the hero ran up the wall. He had a weapon in each hand. He managed to land many blows. Setsuna landed on the ground. He took a deep breath. The monster broke into several pieces. Standing on its body, he said that it does not live if you cut off both heads at once, but it must be admitted that the monster had exceptional recovery. Looking at the trembling in his hands, he thought that his dual blades were still not perfect, and he needed to train more to make this ability more stable. Someone's applause was heard. Setsuna looked in their direction. The man came down to him, saying that the hero was able to defeat his brainchild using close combat magic, which means it was true that he killed Leo with one blow. The guy looked towards the interlocutor. The hooded man turned out to be Professor Giovani. The man smiled, saying that the hero was surprisingly calm, as if he expected to see him here. The boy looked at him seriously, and said that it wasn't the first time and there was always a chance that something unexpected would happen. Giovanni spread his hands and said that it was a smart approach to life and he wouldn't survive on the battlefield if he wasn't flexible, and also noted that the boy's intelligence and fighting ability were excellent. Clenching his fists, Setsuna said that he wanted to ask 2 questions. Frowning, he wondered if he was one of the apostles and why he decided to go so far. The professor smiled in response. Staring at him intently, the man said that after seeing his performance at the competition, he had an idea that it would be incredible to get his body and make him his puppet. Setsuna lowered his head, hearing that he did the same with Yuzaha. The hero remembered what the girl looked like. Slightly opening his mouth, he realized that this was all part of his plan. Putting his hand in his pocket, the professor said that she really wanted to become his ally, and therefore he only followed her lead, although he did not expect anything from her. Remembering Yuzaha's smile, he said that she approached him herself, and it was unpleasant, because she did not even have any suspicions when he gave her that earring. Giovanni looked away, saying that she should be happy that she was turned into an undead, even though she was completely different. Setsuna's hands trembled with anger, and he demanded that the interlocutor shut up. His eyes began to glow. He added that he would make him answer for all his sins. The student opened his mouth wide, using great force. The others helped to clear the rubble. One of them said that he was too tired. The hand moved another stone. Layla and Drago looked at each other happily. The guy was glad to be free. A small stone fell to the ground. The girl noted that they tried hard. Standing up, the boy thanked everyone for their help, happy to be back on the surface. The girl shared that she never imagined they would be trapped so deep. Looking up, she said that it looked like there would be no more earthquakes and the red color was starting to fade, to which her comrade suggested that Setsuna had defeated the boss. Mifune pointed to the bracelet, noticing that it was working again. Everyone raised their hands in joy, hearing that they could finally go back. Frowning, Drago told her that he would leave everyone to her, and he would go get the hero. Layla placed her hand on her chest, replying that he could trust them to her, and she would wait for him outside. Smiling slightly, he thanked her for that. Drago rushed deeper into the dungeon. Setsuna gritted his teeth, saying that, as he thought, it was all the professor. His hand was shaking with anger. Magic surrounded the blade, saying that it would make him pay for his sins. Giovanni adjusted his glasses, noting that he could try. Setsuna pounced on him. Looking up, the professor summoned an ice phantom. The hero shattered it with one blow. He frowned, surprised that it had turned into ice. Light appeared from below. A deep wound left a cut. Giovanni looked at him, saying that as he thought, this technique was very effective against melee mages who focused on direct strikes, and asked if the hero still thought he could defeat him. Setsuna gritted his teeth, thinking about how the enemy was able to leave traps and counterattack him equally effectively with his magic. Staring at him, he knew he needed to finish him off as quickly as possible, but he was almost out of mana after the boss fight. He rushed forward again, thinking that Giovanni was a formation mage, just like Mifune. Approaching the professor, he realized that before activating his magic, he needed to do something along with the teleport assignment. Setsuna pushed off the ground. He raised his hand to strike. Looking to the side, the guy looked for where he had moved to. A magic circle appeared behind him. The guy broke the ice again. Something knocked him off his feet. Frowning, the hero realized that the poison was already starting to work. An ice pillar pierced him. Setsuna dropped to one knee. Giovanni walked around him, calling him pathetic and offering to surrender, to which he replied that he would never forgive him and would definitely completely remove the curse from Yuzaha. The professor looked at him closely and was surprised that he knew how, although he did not understand why he was so worried about her, because making her a living dead was a reward for luring him here, adding that he could remove the curse from her, but only on one condition. The man grabbed the boy by the hair. Looking him in the eyes, he demanded that he swear allegiance. Setsuna pulled his hand behind his back, calling it ridiculous to swear allegiance to someone like him. Ice shards flew from the blow. The hero jumped to the side. He noticed a magic circle nearby. The professor was emerging from this circle. The boy was already approaching him. Giovanni looked at him in confusion, surprised that the student quickly figured out his magic. The hero's swing cut off his hands. Setsuna saw how the head flew off his shoulders, thinking about what he had done. The man smiled, saying that the boy was a quick learner. Setsuna was shocked. Giovanni was recovering, saying that he really wanted the guy for his collection, but he still needed him to learn everything. Frowning, the hero realized that the enemy was also a living dead. The professor smiled, answering that it was, and said that the Great One granted him immortality when he was on the verge of death, and called himself the Great Masterpiece of the Great One. Blood trickled down Setsuna's cheek, and he thought that perhaps the Great One was an evil god. Standing in front of him, he listened to how people were weak and fragile, growing old and dying, and that this was a miserable existence, and therefore the man wanted to share this with others, wanting to make worthy ones immortal. Giovanni spread his hands, clarifying that the guy had no strength left to fight, and again offered to surrender. Looking at him, The hero thought that he was starting to lose consciousness, and he urgently needed to find a way out of this situation. Suddenly he felt something and realized it was mana. A slight smile appeared on his face from the realization that his comrade was coming here. Setsuna knelt down. The professor noted that he had nothing to say, and perhaps he realized his situation, deciding to start the ritual. A dark aura surrounded him. Drago picked up a stone. His throw pierced the professor's head. The hero immediately struck. The eyes shattered into pieces. Gritting his teeth, the guy said that they almost succeeded. He managed to jump out of the magic circle. Drago ran up to him, asking how he was, to which the hero replied that he was in his debt. Setsuna covered his wound when his comrade noticed, and replied that everything was fine and he could still fight, and inquired about the condition of the others. Looking at him fearfully, the guy replied that they had left the dungeon and that Layla and the others had helped. He smiled hearing this, thinking that she was becoming more and more reliable. Giovanni lowered his head, saying that their ritual was rudely interrupted. His face was missing skin, and he was surprised to see Drago there. Both students looked at him. The hero told him that the professor was to blame for everything that happened here, and he needed to be dealt with as quickly as possible. Drago was noticeably angry, wondering how such a person got into their academy. Setsuna looked at his comrade, explaining that as soon as he was attacked, he would spin his body into ice and counterattack with shards, so they would need to dodge them as quickly as possible, and then the man would teleport to another location. But most likely he would not be able to do this without interruption, and that was his weakness. Giovanni stood in front of them, and he offered his comrade to begin, forcing him to teleport, and then he himself would strike the place where he appeared, and noted that his regeneration was getting slower. Drago rushed to attack, answering that he understood. Holding his head, the professor said that it irritated him. The boy broke the ice. Setsuna was already in another place, about to strike the enemy, who shouted that his magic was not so simple, and if you try to attack him, you can suffer from frostbite. But the hero struck. Pulling back his other hand, he decided that he would finish him here and now. The hero struck him many times. Another blow threw the professor back. Setsuna's hands were covered in blood. Giovanni was missing body parts. The hero realized that his body was at its limit. Setsuna fell to the floor. The professor took out something small, surprised that he still used the ability that the Great One gave him. He smashed the object on the ground, thinking about the Hydra merging with it. Only by raising his eyes, the hero mentally asked Drago not to let down his guard. A fireball was visible ahead. The guy opened his mouth in surprise, saying that it was impossible. Giovanni bowed his head and said that he would not forgive him for being forced to use the object that the Great One gave him. The professor looked like a monster. Lying on the ground, Setsuna thought that at this rate, they would both end, and he could not even get up. A flame appeared in the background of the horn. He thought that someone had come. The hero looked tiredly, not understanding what it was. He remembered the silhouette of a man and the words that spiritual power in its essence is the fusion of body and spirit. Danan was surrounded by light, saying that in order to reach this state, one must comprehend emptiness by clearing the mind, simply by feeling it. Seeing this light in front of him, the boy thought that perhaps this is what emptiness looks like, and he felt it. He tried to reach out to it with his hand, asking for strength so that he could save his friends, but suddenly he heard someone's words telling him to be quiet. Setsuna's eyes widened in surprise. The hero was standing among floating stones. Looking around, he did not understand what kind of place this was, and noted that it was different from the dungeon, suggesting that this was another dimension. A sound was heard behind him. The boy turned around. A huge fire monster was looking at him. Setsuna seemed small against it. He thought that this was what one of the spirits the director talked about looked like. The flames towered over the spirit, noting that with his body he looked more like a titan, and his mana was so aggressive that he felt a huge pressure just standing in front of him. Setsuna took a step forward. Frowning, he asked the spirit to listen to him about the evil god and his minions threatening everything on earth. The spirit looked at the man carefully, hearing that his friends were in danger and the request to lend his power. The spirit narrowed his eyes. Opening his mouth, he replied that the hero was too arrogant. The boy's feet left the ground. The flames grew even brighter. Setsuna covered his face with his hands, feeling its heat. Looking angry, the spirit said that he tried his best to listen to him, but he was tormented by the question of why he cared. The stones rushed forward. They pinned the boy. He looked up, asking what the interlocutor meant. The spirit opened its mouth wide and said that there was no point in listening to him. The stones holding the hero began to heat up. The fire grew larger and larger. Setsuna was engulfed in flames, feeling the enormous size of the mana. The monster approached him, saying that this place was supposed to be very cold, but for his sake, it would set everything on fire here so that it would be like hell, and then burn him. The fire became stronger, and the hero screamed. His whole body was burning, and he thought that if he fell here, then everything would end, so he needed to convince the spirit with all his might. Looking at the burning man, he was surprised that he was still conscious, because anyone else would have lost it by now. A certain symbol appeared on Setsuna's body. The spirit, frowning, said that he felt the presence of the spirit of time in him, asking what the reason was. The fire became even stronger, and the guy screamed. Burns were visible on him, but he again asked to listen to him. Looking at him, the monster replied that he was annoying since he was still resisting. His gaze became more attentive. He added that it was not only the hero who was resisting, but also the minions who were sent here. Introducing the apostles, he said that he was tired of them. The hero opened his mouth wide, thinking about the spirit knowing about the evil god, and shouted that he was here to destroy them. The spirit burned even more, asking what he could do. He looked angry, saying that no matter how long the man fought, it would last forever, so he would burn him in eternal flames. Feeling pain, Setsuna replied that he did not care and would not back down. The spirit looked at him silently. A slight smile appeared on his face, saying that the boy must prove himself. A pillar of fire struck the ground. Setsuna was burning in it. The skin on his face was evaporating. He opened his mouth wide. He could barely breathe, and his feelings were fading. He almost dissolved in the fire, but he thought about not giving up and thinking. Clinging to the stone, he worried about Drago in the real world. In the darkness, he could be heard thinking about what he was doing and why he was here. Even though he was a skeleton, Setsuna still decided that he could not die until he destroyed the evil god. His fingers dug into the stone. Gritting his teeth, the hero asked again to borrow his power, and then he would not lose anyone because of the evil god. The spirit looked at him intently, calling it amazing, because he had never seen anyone who could hold out here for a whole year. The stone stopped holding the guy. The spirit came closer, clarifying that he had come this far to save his friends. Something caught his attention. Seeing how the man spread his arms, he realized that he was unconscious. Standing in front of him, he repeated his words about the guy being unconscious. The spirit disappeared, telling the hero to leave here. Setsuna's hand was left with a symbol, and he heard a demand that he never tell anyone about it. Flames rushed upward. Drago received a serious blow. Gritting his teeth, he realized that he could not defend himself from the ice with his mana. Blood flowed to the floor. The professor was surprised that he was still on his feet, assuming that this was all due to the stubbornness of close combat mages. Giovanni looked at him intently, adding that his stubbornness was useless. He grabbed him by the clothes. The student thought about how after the previous attack his body completely stopped reacting to anything. The enemy said that the next attack would be fatal. Raising him above the ground, he added that after that he would kill the one who was closest to him on the ground. Giovanni threw him, saying that he would make friends with the rest of the dead. Drago flew to the side. Lowering his eyes, he understood that he could no longer defend himself. The monster opened his mouth wide. The student's eyes were almost closed, and his only thought was that he couldn't dodge. In the emptiness, he heard someone say that he was someone's pride. Drago clenched his fist, hearing the words that he should become a shield for his friends and show the full power of close combat magic. The boy, my son, asked his father for forgiveness for not being able to protect his friend. Giovanni struck. He raised his head, saying that he had also received damage, and decided that he had overdone it. Something caught his attention. Only a trace of the blow remained in the ground, and he did not understand where the student had gone. The monster looked to the side. He frowned, asking what it was. Drago tried with difficulty to open his eyes, feeling something warm. Setsuna stood surrounded by flames. The professor looked at the hero with displeasure. His hair turned red. His eyes glowed brightly. Flames surrounded him. Giovanni was surprised by such a change. Setsuna rushed forward. The monster looked to the side, thinking that he had disappeared. The hero pulled his hand back to strike. The flames pierced the monster through. He flew into a pile of stones. Raising his head, Giovanni did not understand what had just happened and why a melee mage was using elemental magic. A large wound remained in his body, and he noticed that his recovery was slowing down. Looking at the fire around Setsuna, the professor realized that this was an unusual flame. He noticed a sign on his hand. Frowning, Giovanni thought that it was impossible for him to use another path. The hero calmly approached him. Looking at the trembling limbs, the monster was surprised by its fear. It took a deep breath. Opening its mouth wide, the professor screamed that this was impossible. A dark aura surrounded his body. Having collected the dark sphere, Giovanni called himself a living dead and the one who defeated death. Setsuna put his hand in front of him when the enemy used a poisonous whirlwind. This whirlwind flowed around the hero. The monster said that no living creature could cope with it. The guy simply moved his hand to the side. The professor was crushed, thinking that the student had neutralized his poison with his mana. He quickly approached him. Seeing this, Giovanni did not understand where he got such strength from and only cursed. The guy dealt a powerful blow. Flames burst out of his body. The man turned around, not understanding what was happening. Going behind the hero, the professor said that it seemed that he was not able to use this power properly. He raised his paw to strike, saying that he lost consciousness during the fight. Setsuna dodged the blow. Giovanni saw the guy land nearby, not understanding how he dodged. He looked thoughtful, thinking that even though he was unconscious, he was moving purely on instinct. Attacking with ice, he decided that he could hold back his movement for now. Ice spears pierced the hero, and the monster said that he would not be able to move now. Raising an eyebrow, the professor noted that his strength was worthy of recognition, but added that he was just a man who had gone out on the battlefield against a dragon. Raising his claw to strike, he said that he would cut off his head and prove that the undead are superior to humans. The swing left a bright mark. The claw fell to the ground. Someone's footsteps were heard. Layla stood in front of the hero. Looking at the monster, the girl apologized for being late and said that she would not let him hurt her anymore. Giovanni restored the claw, saying that he was so focused on Setsuna that he did not even notice how another bug came here, and decided to finish quickly. The girl looked back, noticing that the guy was unconscious. She saw his red hair and fire around him, wondering what happened to him, and said that she would do everything to protect him. Setsuna was again among the floating stones. The spirit watched the girl, calling him pathetic for being engulfed in flames of such a level, to which he replied that he did not understand, because he thought he was used to it. Seeing the girl's face, he asked about Layla, but the spirit replied that he did not know. Setsuna ran up to him, asking him to tell him how to control this power and return to reality. To which he replied that he should not ask him and figure it out himself, because for the first time he trusted someone with his power. The hero gritted his teeth, worried about Layla. The student fought with the professor. He managed to leave a wound on her face. He raised his paw again to attack. The girl's magic blade broke. She was thrown back. The girl clutched her wound, remembering the words the hero told her last time. Layla bowed her head. She remembered Setsuna placing his hand on her chest and his words that as long as there was determination in his heart, even a person like her would become stronger. His eyes began to glow brightly. He remembered the girl placing her hand on his head, telling him not to think too much and that as long as there was determination in his heart, he would become stronger. The small fire flared up again. Layla received another blow. The fire stopped. The spirit smiled widely, demanding to entertain him even more, if he does not want to meet death here and now with this girl. The flame became brighter. The spirit flared up, saying that in this case he will be the one who will finish him. Setsuna surrounded a pillar of fire. Layla fell to the ground. Giovanni looked forward in surprise. The hero took a step. The student grabbed his face, and the monster only asked what happened. Setsuna directed him down, using the magic of the spirit of flame. The fire spread along with the blow. The main character, being with a different appearance, asks if it is true that being immortal is cool, while assuring that people are beautiful and that they have a limited time, do everything to become better. He has red eyes and red hair, says that he was able to comprehend the magic of the spirit of flame only when he was on the verge of death, incinerates the monster, who screams that there is no such magic. Setsuna confidently burns the opponent. Sparks fly around him. The monster is gone. The protagonist is amazed to hear his name. Layla with wounds on her face asks if he is real. The protagonist sadly says her name. Smiling, he claims that it is and now everything will be fine. He runs to her saying thank you for protecting him. She replies that everything is fine and is glad that everything is fine with him too. Drago with a grin says that he did not expect the girl to come here. Layla happily says that the elders returned with the help of teleportation magic, but she had a bad feeling so she hurried here. The pleasantly surprised guy hears that she asked him to tell everything to the professors who are waiting for them on the surface, so help will come soon. Suddenly his eyes begin to sparkle. The protagonist with blackened hair falls down, collapsed to the ground. The guys run up to him. People approach the battle site and say that 3 students from the Close Combat department are here. The blue-eyed teacher looks around asking if everyone is alive. One of the teachers lifts the wounded man and says that Mifune told them everything, so they hurry to come for them. Setsuna asks to take care of Layla and Drago first. The wounded girl smiles. The big guy is led by the arms. The protagonist smiles. He barely sees the room. Everything becomes more obvious. He recognizes this place. The protagonist lies and looks at the ceiling, realizing that this is the infirmary. Bandaged MC gets out of bed and says that he cleaned up here. He clutches his blanket. He remembers the moment of the battle and realizes that he still feels the heat in his body after that battle. He smirks. He lets go of the blanket. Lionel, looking out from behind the door, says that Setsuna has finally woken up. The professor moves a chair towards him. Hearing the question of how the others are, he notices that the protagonist always worries about his friends despite the fact that he spent 3 days unconscious. The guy hears with interest that Drago, Layla and his seniors from the Faculty of Formations are completely fine. He woke up last. Lionel sits down opposite and says that apparently they fought against a strong opponent. MC sits in bed hearing that the consequences of this incident were eliminated by order of the director. He understands that there are still many things that are hidden. Looking down, the professor states that it is too late, but still. A man with a serious face claims that he heard about the incident involving Leo from the school principal. The head of the school sits surrounded by professors. Lionel explains that there are other people who are also dangerous. They were ordered to conduct an internal investigation, but it was postponed due to the recent incident. The teacher says with a sad grin that they didn't even suspect Giovanni's intentions, and in the end they put their students in danger twice, so he apologizes again. The protagonist, sitting on the bed, hears that he doesn't want something like this to happen again. The student asks to raise his head. Suddenly he feels pain before he can say that he was there too. Lionel holds him by the shoulder and says that it's the recoil after he used his mana beyond the limit. The professor smiles and points to the door and says that his wounds were healed by magic so there's no need to worry. Probably also thanks to the guy who rushed in and helped. The protagonist seriously wonders who it was. The door opens, the teacher says that he's already here. The door creaks when opened. Zachary seriously brings a plate. The protagonist is simply shocked. The bald teacher gives him a plate with apples that he peeled. The big guy shoves him in the back and demands that he stop talking like that. Lionel looks at him and asks if he probably wanted to say something. Zachary awkwardly apologizes for his behavior during the test. In the memories he yelled at him. He explains that the protagonist chose the weakest faculty, and it irritated him to see someone like him. The student stands all alone. The man says that he was once an excellent student at this academy, but during the ceremony he could only choose close combat magic. Because of this, his friends and family turned away from him. On his clenched fist is visible a mark. He says that when he heard about him, a child who could choose any path, he wondered why such a person decided to go to close combat mages, so this caused anger. He puts his hand in his pocket. He holds a piece of paper and explains that his team scored more points during their joint training and also the guy showed the highest result in the history of the academy. Zachary smirks and says that due to the incident, the joint training with the Royal Battalion is cancelled, but the teacher is happy that he proved that melee mages are worth something. He extends his hand and thanks MC. The protagonist with a strained smile thinks that in front of him is a completely different person. Was his first impression of him wrong? The guy smiles. He extends his hand in response, saying that he should also ask for forgiveness in front of him. They shake hands. Setsuna thanks him for saving him. The teacher goes to the door and says that in that case they will meet in class. Lionel with a stern look remains silent. He holds an object in his hand, claiming that the director asked him to pass this on. In his hands are gloves, stating that the student will not be able to constantly wear bandages to hide this. The professor with a serious look states that this mark is due to spiritual magic that no one has ever heard of. Setsuna puts the apples on the table, asking if the teacher knows about this. The bearded man replies that it is called ancient magic. A clash of two armies is shown. It is said that it was this magic that caused the great magical war many hundreds of years ago, and therefore everything related to this magic is forbidden. Lionel calmly states that it cannot be used in front of everyone, otherwise the Holy Church will find out about it. The protagonist remembers the monster and thinks that he read that ancient magic was used during the Great War, but never suspected that it was spiritual magic. The student lying in bed asks how he knows this. Lionel, looking at him, replies that the school principal explained it to him in general terms. Footage is shown with the evil god Leo, the principal, Setsuna. It is said that MC returned here from the future to help. The professor sitting opposite assures that only he and the principal know this. The excited guy understood everything, while thinking that he is glad that he learned about it, but is this the right decision? The bully smilingly declares that he does not care what is in the future from which he came, because now he is a student of the faculty of close combat. The surprised protagonist thanks him. Sitting in bed, he asks where the director is now. He replies that the head has found some clues about the apostles and therefore will be absent for some time. Shocked MC asks again. The teacher in turn declares that he will ask him as soon as he returns, but now he needs to rest. Lionel leaves the room with a smile, declaring that he still has something to tell. The door slams shut. The guy wonders in surprise what to tell. He looks to the side. He sees bandages and thinks that if at that moment he did not have fortitude, then everything could have ended badly. The protagonist in rage radiated fire. Setsuna understands that he managed to cope with this power thanks to Layla, but there is no certainty whether he can do it again. He removes the bandages from his hands. The protagonist looks at the sign and feels the enormous power that was then. Suddenly, a strange voice asks not to even hope that a simple person like him can so easily control his power. The discouraged guy hears the voice of the spirit. Lying in the ward, he realizes that he is not here. Shocked MC hears that he is here. An orange snake wraps around his body. A small animal standing on his neck exclaims that the man should rejoice because he has proven himself. This ends the first season. The orange pet jumps down. Walking across the bed, he hears a question about whether he's the same spirit. The animal demands he stop speaking to him like that. The fluffy pet smiles and declares that his name is Blazer, and that the protagonist shouldn't forget him. The protagonist nervously recalls his previous self, and says he's not much like him. The spirit jumps from bed to bed. He sees something in front of him, and is surprised. He looks out the window and exclaims that this is what modern society looks like. The animal, shocked, declares that there are so many of them and they're huge, while MC thinks it's just him being so small. The protagonist, seeing him by the window, asks if this is unusual. He replies that humans aren't all that special, but it's new to him, as he's been in this world for the first time in this form. Sitting on the bed, Setsuna asks why this particular form. The animal replies that it usually doesn't answer such questions, but today it will make an exception. A seal is visible on the protagonist's hand, and the pet asks if he knows they're now connected. As an example, a huge monster appears before the boy. The creature explains that in order to properly manifest in this world, it requires a certain amount of mana, but if it were in its normal form, such a mortal's mana would run out in an instant. The impudent, furry creature walks across the bed, declaring that this is why it chose to appear this way. The protagonist, with a serious expression, considers this his chance to ask as much as possible about spirits. He turns to Blazer, asking for information. Frowning, he inquires about the great magical war being over 100 years old, which side the creature was on, and how it ended. The creature looks at him. It looks away and asks if it's surprising, but the protagonist doesn't understand. Blazer, with a smirk, says he doesn't remember all the details, as he simply raged as he pleased in his contractor's war. Standing on the bed, he claims he's not particularly interested in the past, but rather in the present. The creature bursts out of the room, screaming about the present. The protagonist steps out into the hallway and asks it to wait. The protagonist, pulling on his glove, realizes things are dire. If the church learns of his existence, the Inquisition will send them to trial. He runs down the hallway, realizing he must stop it before that happens. Blazer confidently moves forward. He passes students and realizes this is where mages train. It's huge, so he needs to investigate. The shocked students can't figure out if it's a dog or not. The girls, amazed, call him Cutie. Setsuna runs after him and demands he stop, and the pet asks why he's so weak. The cunning little creature asks if he's sure he can keep up. The protagonist, exhaling, realizes he's not in his best shape right now. The beast flees from him through the inner building. A surprised student in glasses wonders if it really is Setsuna. The bully, smirking, exclaims that he only became so confident after one successful victory. This time, the golems will fight back. MC runs past, yelling at the animal to stop. The boy is shocked to be ignored. The protagonist runs forward and sees a group of guys. A surprised blonde notices him. Setsuna runs past while he asks him to forget the rudeness in the past and tell him about Layla. He shouts that they will talk later. Cyrus stands nearby and watches the protagonist. He watches the boy with his arms crossed. Light is reflected in the windows. The tired protagonist opens the doors, realizing he has lost him. He sees Mifune in front of him, wondering what happened and why he is so out of breath. The girls stand nearby and discuss how this is the same Setsuna who was on the same team with him during their joint training. Another remarks that MC was only able to get points thanks to their friend. The boy addresses them in a calm voice. The blonde confidently declares that they should not mock his comrade. The girls suddenly fall silent. Standing next to the protagonist, he apologizes, claiming that the atmosphere has been like that since he broke all the records during that training session, without even trying to find out the real situation. The protagonist, smiling, declares he never thought he'd treat him like a friend. The blonde laughs and says anyone worthy of being used is a friend. A surprised Setsuna hears about the day Yuzaha fell into a trap. The girl sits across from another, and is told her life is no longer in danger, but the consequences will still remain. She's currently in custody and being interrogated by the professors. The boy sadly reflects that they were talking about Giovani, so it's unlikely he left his tales. He gestures with his hands and asks if a small red animal of a similar appearance has passed by, and the latter notes that it's heading toward the courtyard. The protagonist sees Blazer running through the window. He runs away, thanking Mifune as he does so. The animal jumps into the bushes and rejoices. The boys run up, claiming they've never seen anything like it and whose pet it is. Actor, seeing it, tries to figure out what kind of magical beast it is. The protagonist stands on the balcony and calls out to Blazer. The purple-haired fighter notices MC. Grimacing, he remembers Professor Lionel and thinks that even though he destroyed all the evidence, the sharp-eyed teacher still managed to notice something. He sees the beast in the distance and thinks it's his. The villain smirks. Forming a blue crystal in his hand, he says that since the protagonist brought such a magical beast here, he should. With a frantic expression, he prepares to attack, shouting that they must ensure the academy's safety, knowing the school will have nothing to blame him for. The beast turns around, sees the crystals, and becomes thoughtful. Setsuna fearfully thinks about the pet. The pet confidently repels his attack with fire. Actor, shocked, sees this. The beast, with a sly smile, asks if he really wanted to attack him. He unleashes a powerful stream of flame, shouting that he should know his place. The villain screams in pain as his clothes burn away. Actor runs away, crying. The protagonist is amazed that Blazer is okay. The students look at the little creature, realizing that if the pet can use its powers even in this form, the rest of the students are in danger. The students, shocked, discuss the fire, as it's a high-level spell. Blazer calmly looks at them and says there's nothing special about it, asking if they really are that idiot's friends. The frightened students leave, saying they'd better get out of here. Layla asks what it is. The girl stares at the pet. The protagonist, frightened, screams her name. Suddenly, he feels a crunch in his leg. The heroine, amazed, guesses who he is. Blazer stands nearby and asks again. The little creature confidently asks if she really wants to burn too. A frightened Setsuna screams out her friend's name. Seeing them nearby, she realizes the pet could easily burn her. The girl watches in surprise, her eyes wide. Blazer, standing on the grass, assumes she's already resigned to her fate. The girl sits down and asks why he helped the protagonist in the dungeon. The pet remains silent, disgruntled. She bows, thanking him for helping her friend. The flaming predator pauses. With a smirk, he says that finally someone is paying him the attention he deserves, and he should continue to be grateful for his sharing of his powers. A disconcerted MC notices that the disobedient pet has calmed down. The girl takes some fruit from the basket and says she was going to visit Setsuna, so she brought it with her. Blazer eats it with pleasure, saying it's a fine offering. A heart sign appears in his eyes. The pet eats an apple and says it's quite good, while MC is shocked that he was tamed so quickly. The boys are sitting in the cafeteria, And Drago, surprised, asks what kind of creature it is with such an appetite. The protagonist, with a nervous smile, mentions a magical beast, thinking that if others find out he's a spirit, the Inquisition will immediately notice and he shouldn't drag his friend into it. Blazer eats happily while sitting on Layla. The protagonist realizes he still needs to remain vigilant, but it seems he doesn't pose a danger to the other students yet. He thanks her with a smile, and she replies that she just thought he was a little scared by such a large crowd. The boys pass by, and the girl announces that it's the same guy who scored the most points during their joint training and that this is the first time he's seen such a beast. Blazer eats the treat, noting that he's attracting a lot of attention, but since they're just chatting, he'll forgive it. The protagonist sips his drink and thinks everyone thinks he's just a rare magical beast. The pet looks at Layla and says that if she keeps bringing him treats like this, he'll make her his subordinate. MC thinks it's great that only he understands him. The protagonist, sitting at the table, turns to Drago and Layla. Smiling, he thanks them for saving him in that dungeon. The red-haired girl happily asserts that saving a friend is a normal thing. The big guy turns around, saying he brought something. Holding an envelope, he explains that his parents received a notice that they scored the most points in their joint training. They were so happy they wrote him a letter, and now he's even proud to be a melee mage. The protagonist is happy to hear this. His friend, turning her head, turns to him. Sadly, she says she's worried about Professor Giovanni's true identity. The protagonist puts down his glass and says he doesn't know the details either, but perhaps they'll learn something after Yuzaha is interrogated. A ferocious monster with claws glows with purple fire. He realizes he initially thought it was one of the apostles, but the only thing it showed was fusing with a hydra, so could it be that they possess similar abilities? His friend says he also wanted to ask something. Drago, surprised, asks what kind of power it was that time. Lost in thought, he wonders if mana flames aren't a melee technique. Layla, smiling, sits nearby and says it's all about that little one. She laughs, holding him in her arms, while Blazer declares that this woman understood the origins of the beast with just one glance. She's very perceptive. Setsuna notices that the animal fascinates her. Cyrus appears behind them and calls out to the protagonist, who tells his friends that he was too focused and didn't know how to explain. The boy turns around and sees him in horror. The guys pass by and notice the ranged combat professor, thinking he's about to scold the student again. The teacher angrily waves his hands, ordering them to leave. The man frowns. He points at Blazer and asks what kind of beast it is. The pet remains disgruntled, while Cyrus declares that he's never seen anything like it and that it's probably a forbidden magical beast. The protagonist, without showing any signs of worry, realizes that things are bad, because if the teacher continues this thought, the teacher points his finger and furiously shouts that he should have registered his pet first. An enraged Blazer asks again if he's really a pet. The teacher asks reasonably if he has any reason not to do so, and to tell him right away, because if not, he'll have to get rid of him. The animal furiously asks how he dared to call him that. The protagonist looks on in fear. Zachary appears nearby and addresses them. Awkwardly, he explains that he already received the registration form for him but inadvertently forgot about it. The teacher bows, apologizing to Cyrus. MC thinks about being covered. The bearded professor laughs and notes that another teacher bowed his head for an ordinary student, especially him, once the best and most honored student of the melee department. Zachary excitedly says that everything is exactly as he said, but the other teacher considers this shameful. Drago slams the table in anger. The professor, gritting his teeth, asks the boy what is wrong. The big man's gaze is filled with hatred. Suddenly, he happily hugs the bald professor and says it's all thanks to him. The brute grabs him by the shoulder and says the reason the melee department managed to take first place is none other than Zachary himself. The protagonist sits across from Layla, and they understand each other. All the students happily shake his hand and say it's all thanks to him. Despite his methods, he did it all for them. The bald professor is touched. An angry Cyrus sees this and wonders what kind of circus they've staged, and who would believe it. The girl stands next to a classmate and declares that the melee department currently ranks higher than the range department, but Cyrus still maintains his arrogant glare. The teacher angrily clenches his fist and walks away, shouting for them to provide the necessary documents as quickly as possible. MC nervously realizes he's been saved. If he'd been any closer, Blazer would have definitely lost his temper. The protagonist looks at the professor and thanks him for his help, even though he didn't even know the full situation. He replies that he should have said that. Zachary smiles, explaining that he's the one talking about him, and that he's sure there's a reason he decided to get a magical beast. Drago considers him a role model, which Layla is very happy about. Blazer rests on her shoulder, displeased, calling it nonsense. The beast leaves with the protagonist. Suddenly, a bird appears in front of him with a scroll. He picks it up and notices the ghostly beast. He reads the text, stating that he's been briefed on the situation and that MC has apparently mastered spiritual magic. The protagonist is surprised to realize it's a letter from the principal. The headmaster is writing a letter stating that the protagonist won't be able to properly control this power until he recovers from his injuries. He would very much like to teach him how to properly use spiritual magic, but unfortunately, he had to leave on business. Setsuna is stunned to read that the director has decided to ask someone to look after him while he's away. The protagonist, enraged, transforms into another form, realizing there must be some way to control this power. He looks ahead, reading that the director has asked Lionel to introduce them, wishing him luck and silently thanking him. An old woman sits by the fireplace, dismissing the letter as absurd. The bucket begins to glow with blue energy, revealing that he even revealed her current location without his knowledge. Angrily, she declares that even despite his request, she will never forgive him. She throws the letter forward, declaring that if Setsuna proves incompetent, the water in the bucket rises in a whirlwind. It slices the letter in half. The woman angrily declares she will finish him off with her own hands. The director, surrounded by his colleagues, sits at an emergency meeting of the mages, declaring that he has told them everything he knows about the situation. One of them asks if he has anything else to share. They sit across from each other, and the mage inquires about the signs of the imminent arrival of an evil god and the secret activities of the apostles, noting that such words could shake the world. The woman, however, insists he doesn't even have proof. Danan, with an air of importance, says that their enemies are too clever to leave evidence, which is why he's asking for their help. One of the mages assures them they may disagree, while the other thinks he's gone mad. The mage, surrounded by colleagues, suggests that the school principal has memory problems. Lionel, standing in the hallway, greets the principal. The old man walks next to him and says no one wanted to listen. The principal sits down and says there's nothing surprising about that. The professor points out that they can't simply say he used forbidden spirit magic to return to the past. Danan, with a serious expression, remarks that forewarned is forearmed. Lionel nods and says they'll remember his words when the apostles make their presence known again. The principal, sitting in a chair, suggests he tell her how Setsuna is doing. The big man replies that he's feeling better now, but still exhausted, and a full recovery is still a long way off. The old man thinks about the woman and asks who they'll face in the future, realizing that the student will need all his strength for that. Carol sits next to a sleeping MC. He opens his eyes. In shock, he sees her standing before him. He jumps up and shouts what she's doing there, and the girl replies that she heard the boy was being treated there. The pink-haired heroine, smiling, announces that she decided to bring him something to eat, and MC thanks her. She places the basket on his bed and claims to have learned the recipe from a dragon. The protagonist, smiling, remarks that she looked after Blazer yesterday, so he owes her a favor. Carol and Layla happily showed him around the city and bought him some fruit. The animal ate enthusiastically, and the girl assures him that he has a very cute voice. The protagonist is shocked by this. The woman, folding her fingers, says that her red-haired friend is great. Blazer quickly warmed up to her. Layla happily pets him, saying it seemed easy for her, but in reality it's hard. Building a good relationship requires always remaining open. Carol, smiling, declares that she also works with animals, albeit not real ones, so she knows how pleasant it is to build a good relationship with someone. The protagonist happily takes the spoon and plate, saying that she always does a great job, realizing that he's in Layla's debt again. With a serious expression, he thinks he should also help her with something. As soon as he gets better, he's obligated to study spirit magic. The woman hands him a tray and says she has to go to class. She waves as she runs out the door, declaring that she'll see Blazer and then come back. The protagonist holds the empty plate. He leaves through the book, realizing that while the animal is being watched, he should learn at least a little more about spirit magic. The sorcerers stretch their hands toward the light, and it is said that a great war began 200 years ago. Followers of ancient magic decided to subjugate the remaining wizards by force. A divided map is shown, explaining that this led to a war between the two factions. Ancient magic was extremely powerful, but only a few knew how to use it. The protagonist reads the book, believing that the remaining sorcerers were able to achieve victory and restore peace. He ponders that if it becomes known that someone can use ancient magic, they will be immediately arrested and brought to trial. He understands that he must not tell anyone about his contract, as even knowing about it is dangerous. Setsuna lies down on the bed. The silhouettes of the transformed protagonist and Leo are shown. He realizes that before the regression, he didn't even know such magic existed, and if he can master it, he might be able to defeat the evil god. A ferocious monster glows with purple fire, and the protagonist reflects on how he never saw Leo and Giovani in such a state before the regression. A pendant is visible in his palm. If the past really has changed, was it for the better? Setsuna and Lionel stand in front of the boys. Carol, grimacing, says that he hasn't fully recovered yet. Does he really want to leave the academy for further training? The protagonist smiles and agrees, saying that school is closed on long weekends anyway. Drago grins and says he needs to work hard to keep up. Layla pets Blazer and says she'll miss him while he's gone, and Blazer orders him to prepare delicious fruit for his next return. The boy steps forward and says he wanted to say something. MC, smiling, thanks them for their help. The three boys smile sweetly. They say goodbye, and the protagonist says they'll see him again and wish him luck. Lionel puts a hand on his shoulder and remarks that he has good friends. They walk through the forest. The protagonist realizes Blazer remains a problem. It's unclear whether he can hold him alone, but Layla can't go with them either. The professor and the boy stand by the pens. The man says the destination is still a long way off, so transport is ready for them. Setsuna notices the lizards. The teacher stands next to the worker and the lizard, saying they're skittish and difficult to mount, but they're great for long-distance travel. They'll definitely get you there, as long as you hold on tight. The old man hugs the animal, saying they're very fast but also particularly stubborn. If they throw you off, it's your own fault. MC watches one of them being let out and says he doesn't mind. The protagonist holds on to it and realizes their nature reflects caution, so if he opens his heart, he'll be fine. He climbs into the saddle. Setsuna, riding the lizard, looks at the old man and says he wasn't even thrown off. Leonel stands nearby and hears that the worker underestimated him, as things usually don't go so smoothly the first time. They gallop forward, and the protagonist thinks about how he's done this many times before his regression. A joyful blazer remarks that it's very refreshing. The joyful protagonist sees the professor, who's not feeling well. He insists he's shaking too much. Someone stands ahead. Setsuna looks ahead, surprised. People are visible in front of them, and the protagonist doesn't understand what they're doing there. Leonel and MC stop abruptly. 3 girls with weapons stand in front of him. He says they don't look like ordinary bandits. The professor calmly guesses who they are. One of the girls declares that everything is correct. They are servants of Lady Morgana. The surprised protagonist realizes that she possesses spirit magic, as mentioned in the headmaster's letter. The teacher stands next to the lizard and declares that they are on their way to meet their mistress, asking if they have come to meet them. The servants are surprised and silent. One of them quietly asks them not to make fun of him, as they are melee mages. The protagonist is shocked to notice that her voice sounds completely different. Leonel scowls and asks about Morgana. A girl with a scythe stands before her. The boy frowns and turns to the professor, who replies that these are not people. The menacing women with weapons stare at them, and the protagonist realizes they are dolls created through alchemy. One of them holds out a magical palm and declares that the spirits have chosen Setsuna. The disconcerted boys listen silently. They unleash a powerful beam of energy, shouting that if he is so powerful, the dolls will not be an obstacle. The rival points her staff. The protagonist forms a sword of mana in his hand and deftly fends off the attacks. The professor sees the projectiles heading his way, just as the lizards flee. Leonel concentrates, parrying the blows. Setsuna, with a serious expression, realizes the professor is parrying the attacks, but at the same time, he unleashes powerful attacks of his own, something a normal mage would be unable to do. One of the dolls conveys that this is all they can do. Now it is clear that melee mages do not deserve to study spirit magic. Leonel frowns and forms a stream of mana in his hand, declaring that they have been underestimated. The astonished protagonist turns around. A large man with a huge energy sword over his shoulder declares that they are proceeding with Plan B. The professor stands with his sword at the ready and understands that for Morgana to consider them worthy, they must defeat these dolls. He prepares to attack, shouting for an offensive, and the student understands the order. One of the opponents releases a powerful energy stream. Together, they form a huge ball. Leonel runs alongside the student, shouting that they don't have to dodge it. The man angrily orders them to move forward. He cuts through the enemy's mana wave with his blade. The shocked student sees this and realizes that his blade is very powerful. 3 dolls with weapons stand opposite. Morgana conveys through them that, judging by their appearance, they are not completely helpless. The teacher leads MC in an attack. The opponents advance towards them. The scythe charges with powerful energy. The protagonist frowns, noticing that their weapon is charged with the power of lightning. She waves it in front of Setsuna's face. A girl with a staff forms several magical spheres. The fighters recoil from these blows. A third, with a sword, goes on the attack. She jumps up, swinging her blade. The professor excitedly shouts to be careful, as if their attacks touch, they'll be electrocuted. A doll plunges her sword into the ground, causing an explosion. Lightning swirls in the air near a surprised Leonel. The boys dodge the bright flashes. Leonel stands next to the protagonist. One of the dolls declares that they are vulnerable to elemental attacks, as expected from an outdated school of magic. The protagonist imagines their training and realizes that close-range combatants are vulnerable to this because if they fail to dodge an attack, damage will be dealt to their entire body. The mages unleash fire and a golem. It is explained that other schools of magic do not approach enemies and control their magical energy from afar. One of the dolls swings her scythe. Morgana explains that in an era where golems and familiars are at the forefront, close combat magic is a relic of the past. They can't even defeat dolls. Setsuna, with a serious expression, declares that she won't deny the current state of the world. Her opponent swings her scythe, but the boy dodges. He smirks and says the word, "But!" He prepares to run forward, his boots shining. He delivers a powerful blow to her face, claiming that close combat magic still has a long way to go. Another doll watches in surprise. Leonel, meanwhile, strikes her. The girl flies away from his fists. The professor, enraged, swings his powerful hand. He hits her with all his might. One doll remains, claiming they're fine, just need some sleep. The girl holds a staff, glowing with blue energy. She fires beams of mana at the teacher, who runs toward her. Another doll swings her scythe, but MC dodges. She deftly dodges the enemy's attacks. His hand glows with fire, mentally conjuring up the best weapon for this fight. His opponent desperately lunges at him. She slams the ground, but he jumps back. She looks up in amazement. a tree branch breaks. She turns back. Suddenly, the protagonist kicks her, sending her flying. The surprised doll says this magic reminded her of a mana blade, realizing the fighter directed magic at the terrain. Suddenly, she begins to run away from him. Lionel strikes another opponent hard. She charges forward, and MC thinks of a body hardened by long training. Setsuna loudly shouts to the instructor that one of them wants to attack. The girl with the scythe swings behind him, and MC thinks about the synergy of skills, the ability to control one's magic. A skilled melee mage will find a place for themselves on the battlefield. An explosion occurs, which the protagonist sees, and he calls for his teacher. Lionel flies away from the scene of the collision. The three sisters stand with weapons in hand. They hold each other's hands. They glow with energy, declaring that surprise attacks against them are useless. The dolls form a giant sphere, saying that if they are not resistant to this type of magic, how will they cope with the spell? Lionel stands next to the protagonist, grimacing. The guys are near the dome. The guy thinks that if they don't attack the charged shot, it will continue to gather energy and turn into an even stronger stream of water. Blazer approaches MC and calls this a low trick. The little animal confidently declares that this is nothing to him, asking if the protagonist understands that he could blow up this entire forest if he wanted. A symbol on MC's hand lights up. Suddenly, he begins to glow with fire, transforming into another form. He stands in front of the water sphere. The beast with fire on its body asks if it can hear him. As it grants him its power of fire, the protagonist suddenly turns red. His body is burning, and he asks Blazer to stop. He clenches his fist with a glowing symbol. Blazer stands nearby and asks if he doesn't want to win. The protagonist, looking tired, explains that this is a test of his strength. The beast sighs, calling it far-fetched. Suddenly, the sphere ceases its effect. One of the dolls demands to be sent to her, and they obey their master. Lionel, standing next to the student, wonders why they are doing this. Three girls, standing opposite, apologize for the inconvenience. They can now follow them. The evening sky with stars is visible. An old woman stands next to the girl and greets Setsuna. The protagonist walks with the teacher and greets them. The old woman asks why he didn't use spiritual energy back then, but he thinks it was she who spoke to them in the forest. The protagonist stands silently, and Morgana declares that he wouldn't have been able to deliver the finishing blow against the water shield with his melee magic. The boy, with a serious expression, notes that she's right, but spirit magic needs to be kept secret. He couldn't bring himself to use it in front of an opponent he knows next to nothing about. Morgana watches silently. The protagonist, head down, begins to explain. With a serious expression, he says that if he had used it, he could have accidentally burned down the entire forest. Its plants and animals didn't deserve such a fate. The girl standing next to him is surprised. An old woman, with a displeased expression, calls this kind-hearted. Smiling, the woman says she can commend him for not using spirit magic, knowing he might have lost control of it. Otherwise, she wouldn't have invited him. Morgana points a finger and declares that the melee mage will be her apprentice from today. The protagonist bows and thanks her. Blazer, with a smirk, asks him to obey her, an insignificant human, and not to make fun of her. The lady, smiling, calls him a formidable little one, asking if it really is his pet. He is furious at being interrupted. Blazing with fire, forcing MC to transform into another form, he shouts that he will show her his true form. The protagonist realizes the beast has forcibly taken control of his mana. Blazer, looking crazed, assures her he will beat respect for his power into her. Setsuna, shape-shifting and blazing with fire, realizes she can't hold him back. It seems nothing can stop him. Morgana, raising her hand, says that there are so few people in this forest that she actually likes living here and would prefer it if no one burned it. The protagonist, looking serious, ponders. Suddenly, a blue creature in the form of a girl appears above her. The guy thinks it's her spirit, but she claims she will show her how to control her spirit. Blazer fires a fireball at the enemies. Morgana's spirit notices this. Fire flies into her body. In her place, only a blue phantom is visible. The woman has a human head, but the rest of her body is water. The woman, smiling, announces the finishing touches. A wave rises near the cliff. A stream of water approaches the battlefield. Lionel is surprised to notice that she summoned water from the lake. The old woman deftly wields water magic. The fire spirit is shocked. A powerful stream slams into him. The protagonist is extremely surprised. Blazer flounders in the water, asking how she dares. The lady, standing in front of the boys, declares that the spirit doesn't recognize him and isn't as strong as he thinks. In her eyes, he's just a wild beast. Holding the beast in a sphere of water, she says that if he creates a strong bond with the spirit, controlling it will become second nature. The protagonist, smiling, muses that he, too, can learn to master his spirit so skillfully. Morgana, standing in front of the defeated beast, explains that spiritual magic has 3 stages of study. A man sits in the lotus position, explaining that first, one must become one with nature. The fighter stands in front of floating rocks, thanks to which he will be able to visit the spirit world at will. He touches his pet and tells him that there he must meet his spirit face to face and gain its recognition. In a flashback, Setsuna lost to the evil god. She claims he skipped this step and that his contract was forged with power, which is why he can barely use spirit magic. The evil mistress claims it's because the boy Danan doesn't know how to train his students. He's shocked, thinks she just called the headmaster that. The mistress, with a kindly expression, explains that the forest is inhabited by many spirits, and that this is the ideal place to begin immersing himself in their world. The woman, smiling, says that his training will begin tomorrow. He will need to show why the spirit chose him. MC exclaims that he won't disappoint her. The protagonist sits in the lotus position in the middle of the forest. The protagonist cleans up after his spirit. He sits near a cliff. He trains with Lionel. Morgana, smiling, chops carrots with water magic. Setsuna and Blazer eat at the table, but their moods differ. An old woman watches as the protagonist meditates by the waterfalls. The boy assumes a fighting stance. He stares ahead intently. He looks up in surprise. Dozens of different comets of varying colors are above him. Amazed, he approaches the lake, a stunning display of lights in the sky. Suddenly, he notices a glow from a stone. He sees glowing plants nearby. Setsuna, smiling, asks if he's always been here, part of nature. He sees a house nearby, realizing he can handle even Blazer now. The heroes stand inside the mistress's house, who claims that MC has learned to sense spirits, a significant achievement in only his second week of training. Morgana, with a slight smile, says that she will then grant him permission to travel to the spirit world and meet his own. Introducing him, the woman explains that in their world, magical power is irrelevant, only strength of spirit. She sees Blazer before her, and says he's already learned to sense them, but he's about to meet a being who has lived for over 1,000 years, so he might not be able to handle him, so she will go with him. The beast confidently declares that she's still capable of something in this world, but she has no chance in the spirit world. She angrily turns to Setsuna and claims this applies to him too, but he replies that he only wants recognition. The older woman looks at the professor and says that the journey will leave them completely defenseless in this world, asking if they can rely on him. The man smiles and claims he will protect them. Morgana, smirking slightly, says they're moving on. The protagonist sits on the floor and hears that he must first forget everything around him, and then all doors will open. Blue flames fall. The protagonist awakens. He and Morgana stand before a giant monster. The woman smiles and says that his spirit clings tightly to its pride, and the protagonist understands that it's because he learned to sense spirits. The giant Blazer blazes, and Setsuna thinks about how she understands the spirit's strength even better. The fire monster notices that it's no longer so weak. The woman forms a water barrier around them. They stand before him, and she explains that it's a barrier that protects his willpower, and that if he confronts the spirit face to face, it will be able to subjugate him. Blazer extends a flaming paw, asking if they truly think it will work. The protagonist's hair has changed again, as have his eyes. His legs are burning. Blazer confidently asserts that he can control mana like no one else, and that spirit power works just as well, so it's no obstacle for him now. The protagonist smirks and assumes a fighting stance, declaring that there's only one way to gain his confession. The monster, smiling with sharp fangs, says there's no point in regretting it when only ashes remain. Lionel watches them, and seeing smoke rising from the bodies says it's already begun. He happily assures Setsuna that he can handle it. Suddenly, he opens his eyes in surprise. He looks around, trying to understand the ominous magical energy. Dark enemies approach the house, and the professor thinks someone is aiming at them. Lionel maintains a fighting stance, knowing he won't let anyone interfere. He stands directly in front of the door. A mysterious stranger approaches the house, where the head of the mistress's assistant lies on the ground. He opens the door and greets them. Leo, glowing with purple energy, asks if Granny is home. The rivals meet, and the professor recognizes him, as does the boy. The villain looks around the room in surprise and exclaims that the protagonist is also here. The teacher, grinning, says that they've been looking for him with the entire faculty, and suddenly he himself appeared before him. A powerful fighter with a beast head bursts into the house, breaking down the wall. The dolls fly off. Lionel watches in fear. The large monster addresses Leo as small. The 10th apostle, Zagan, advises leaving Morgana and Setsuna to him and the rest to Leo. The blonde man, smiling, says that they were once best friends and that perhaps the old woman and the puppets will be enough for him. Lionel stands in front of them, feeling like he, too, is an apostle. The professor smiles and says that they're in bad time, and if he weren't a teacher, he would have already run away. Leo points and declares that he can do it now, since they didn't come for him. An energy sword forms in Lionel's hand, and he remarks that the enemy doesn't understand jokes. He charges furiously, shouting that there isn't a single professor at the academy who would abandon his students. The enormous Blazer says the boy wants recognition, but he'll have to achieve it not only with words but also with actions. The protagonist, blazing, understands that there's no need to give in to fear. In this world, willpower is everything. Morgana stares ahead in shock. The red-haired protagonist asks what's wrong, and she replies that something has happened in their world. Setsuna, looking serious, hears that she senses an ominous presence in the forest, and it seems it's even affected their dolls. The protagonist, blazing, walks forward and asks her to return. The lady, with a stern expression, says that if this space disappears, the spirit will immediately consume his entire will, and he will no longer be able to return to his world. The protagonist, turning around, says he understands, but he must handle this himself, the professor and the dolls will need her help. The old woman closes her eyes and exhales. Raising waves, he asks him not to linger, because if he dies, all his instructions were in vain. Setsuna, smiling, assures him that he will definitely return. Standing before Blazer, he apologizes for the wait. The giant orange monster asks why the boy craves his power, whether he understands what he's asking for, and whether he really wants to incinerate the entire world. The protagonist watches silently. Closing his eyes against the backdrop of ruins, he claims he's lost everything. The astonished monster wonders if he sees everything the boy feels. Monsters are killing people, and it's said that the apostles led the mage army astray and brought it to ruin. Friends are cut to pieces. A woman, smiling, extends her hand, and he says that all his professors and loved ones were killed. In the past, the protagonist tried to cope with the energy, saying that all his pain summoned the spirit of time, and it sent him here. The protagonist desperately declares that he swore to himself that he would never again allow what was dear to him to be taken away. Blazer, sitting across from him, asks if he wants to take revenge on those who destroyed his world or challenge him, which is typical of humans. Grinning, the beast says that the boy has tasted despair, but knows no fear, like a madman, and this is curious. The protagonist turns to him with a smile. The giant spirit stands up and declares that he has finally earned the right to engage him in battle. Blazer shrinks in size and declares that now the protagonist desires not a portion of his power, but all of it, so he does not expect a test of endurance. He clenches his mighty fist. The horned monster declares that there will be a real battle. The protagonist stands across from him and asks if he wants to compare their willpower. Setsuna's gaze is serious. The fiery monster glares furiously. The boy swings his fist, shouting that he is going on the attack. Blazer moves forward. Their fists clash. The professor desperately fights the apostle. In his hands is a powerful energy sword. With a deft movement, he cuts off part of the cloak. The monster, opening its mouth, declares that this is not bad for a human. The protagonist looks on in surprise. The doll moves forward. Lionel sees it block an attack in front of him. The girl looks ahead. The apostle, with burning paws, declares that he senses alchemical magic. He grins with long fangs. In a rage, he releases energy, shouting for them to get out of his way. He delivers a series of blows to the puppet. The professor watches in amazement. He sees the doll fly back at him. Zagan forms a new stream of energy. A powerful beam pierces the house. The professor sits on the ground, thinking that he sends out attacks one after another as if he doesn't get tired at all. His mana seems to only get stronger. The apostle turns to Leo and demands that he stop standing around. He holds out his hand and begins casting a spell, seeing the mistress. A purple beam approaches Morgana. A bright flash appears in front of them. Leo looks on in amazement. The mistress, standing next to her spirit, asks if this is the proper behavior for guests. The blonde man, with a mischievous smile, remarks that she's awake and might even feel sorry for him. Aiming her attacks, Morgana replies that she wouldn't. The 10th apostle appears before her. Lionel deftly punches him in the face. Several beams of light focus on Leo, who blocks them. The woman is astonished that he dispelled her attack. The villain asks with a smile what that spiritual magic is. He forms streams of energy with both hands, saying it won't do anything against him. He turns around in amazement, noticing something nearby. Lionel, enraged, strikes, but he jumps back. Leo, shocked, asks Zagan how the professor escaped him. The apostle behind him raises his hand, shouting for him to shut up. The professor deftly dodges the powerful blow. Leo flies out of the house and through the wall. The old woman, with a serious expression, notices that he dodged, but why bother if he can simply dispel any magical energy? Perhaps certain conditions are required. Fragments of battle emerge, and she realizes that during a melee attack, he might not have enough time to dispel the magic, and if a clash of magical energy occurs, Morgana, with a stern expression, wonders if he's deliberately using melee magic to gain an advantage. The professor dodges powerful attacks. He grips the hilt. He deflects the beast's attacks with his shield. The apostle swings his paw again. Leo, surprised, says they wanted to attack him from underground. With a smile, he exclaims that it's useless. Powerful blue energy appears around him. Morgana casts a spell, thinking that even if this doesn't work, she'll have to pull out her trump cards. A giant stream of water emerges from the lake. The water ball moves toward the house. Leo sees this and declares it would be cruel to drown him. The old woman frowned, saying he was indeed dangerous, but only if they were surrounded by so much water. She raised her hand, shouting that they would have no choice but to swallow it. A stream of water fell. Leo, astonished, said that was too much. With a sly smile, he began conjuring purple energy, saying he was sorry. He directed dark streams toward the water. Smiling, he fought it. The water instantly evaporated, and the villain claimed he had learned something. Morgana, amazed, noted that he had used ranged magic to dispel the spell. Rain fell on the villain, and he asked how she managed to keep such a souvenir from the world of the dead. A purple sphere appeared in his palm. Lionel sat opposite Zagan. Suddenly, the protagonist dealt a powerful blow to the enemy's face, and before he could say that his mission was accomplished, Leo was sent flying tens of meters away from the attack. The old woman, smiling, said that he had finally defeated his spirit. Setsuna, Her red hair ablaze, confidently maintains a fighting stance. Zagan turns to face the protagonist. The battered professor realizes he's covered in flames, but he keeps them under control so as not to set any trees on fire. An apostle standing in front of Lionel asks if he really is Setsuna, as the boy is too weak. Blazer, with a smirk, asks if they are apostles, hinting that they would be an excellent use for his flames. The protagonist stands before him and says they are strong and should be careful. The protagonist, ablaze, maintains a fighting stance. The pet suggests not to play poor, as he defeated him in battle. A few minutes ago, MC stood in front of him in the spirit world. Furious, he swings his fist, screaming loudly. The monster attacks in response. They deliver simultaneous punches to each other's faces. They fly off. Blazer turns around. Blood drips from the protagonist's face. The spirit wipes his face with a smirk and says the opponent's strength is impressive. He looks at him questioningly. The protagonist's battered hands tremble, and the spirit notices this. Setsuna maintains a fighting stance, and Blazer asks why he's smiling in such a situation. His face is swollen with bruises, and he confidently declares he will defeat him. The monster strikes again. The protagonist sees a fiery trail behind him. The monster, enraged, shouts that the boy is overconfident for a human. The protagonist, smiling, declares that this isn't simple overconfidence. He simply knows he will win. Their fists meet, and a fiery explosion occurs. MC stands in front of his opponent. The surprised spirit says it's impossible, because the boy is an ordinary human, yet he was able to parry the attack. The fighter confidently swings his fist, saying that the pet is strong and that's probably why he's never lost, but that's also his weakness. The protagonist holds his paw, hearing him ask what he means. He replies that in his past, he was defeated time and again, experiencing despair. A flashback shows dead and wounded people, and he says that falling to his knees taught him how to rise again. The boy confidently shouts, no matter what happens, that he will never give up again. Flames erupt, declaring that his will lead to victory. The spirit watches in shock. The fighter raises his fist and, with a crazed expression, shouts that this will be Blazer's first defeat. The fire spirit, preparing a blow, declares that this will be the boy's last defeat. Their flaming fists fly at each other. A bright flash occurs. A powerful explosion reverberates throughout the space. The boy stands on the ground. The spirit, smirking, calls it magnificent. The protagonist's clothes are scorched. Blazer declares that he has exceeded all his expectations and acknowledges his victory. A nearby fire monster asks why he believed so much in his victory, and how he became so strong. The protagonist, smiling, replies that he felt his willpower strengthen during the battle, that it became a part of him. The monster, laughing, claims that he had already unknowingly acknowledged his victory. Closing his eyes, the spirit says that deep down he knew the fighter was an ally to whom he could entrust his strength. The giant extends a paw and asks for his hand. The protagonist, smiling, calls out the spirit's name. They clasp fists. The protagonist, his body ablaze, thanks him for entrusting him with his strength, and the spirit tells him that he must go. Zagan, looking menacing, advances. Lionel, his face bloodied, warns him to be careful with his claws. The protagonist, observing, notices that the apostle is stealing the magical energy of those he touches. The diagram depicts a beast striking a man. It states that the protagonist fought it in their future. This ability, called Hunt All Living Things, cannot dispel combat magic, but it can absorb the mana of those it injures. Zagan emits a purple aura, absorbing other people's magical energy. The monster single-handedly defeated the army of the Northern Kingdom, which had the most powerful alchemical training in the world. The apostle, opening his mouth, says he has no idea how he knows him, but that won't save MC. Leo, climbing out of the pit, claims that the previous attack managed to injure him, and he began moving much faster. Surprised, the protagonist notices that he still has the strength to stand and dispels the attack to partially mitigate the damage. Zagan, standing opposite Leo, shouts at him not to interfere, as this is his prey. In the future, Setsuna stood opposite the defeated apostle. Before the regression, he was able to win by keeping his distance, as he is strong in close combat. The giant beast lunges, and the protagonist realizes that if he's wounded, it's the end. The protagonist swings his fist, realizing he's no longer the same. He delivers a powerful blow to the opponent's head. Zagan draws closer. The boy lunges forward, striking the body. He sharply dodges the apostle's lunge. The beast, perplexed, says it's impossible. Setsuna blazes with fire. His legs glow, realizing he's added a physical ability boost to Blazer's power. He immediately goes on the attack. Lionel smiles, noticing that the student is already combining his new skills with melee magic. Zagan blazes fiercely. The protagonist's blows land on him. The protagonist strikes him with high speed from all sides. Morgana watches, smiling, realizing Setsuna has mastered the range of his fire attacks. The giant beast begins to roar loudly. The boys cover their ears from the sound. The fighter jumps away from the monster. He stares ahead. The apostle smirks and declares that if the boy so desires to walk around covered in fire, he'll gladly absorb it. His magic now belongs to Zagan. Fire spreads through the beast's body, and it shouts that it senses its power, that it is a hunter of all living things, and the protagonist is its prey. The protagonist smiles, holding his fists in front of him and asking if the beast is sure of this. The apostle lunges at it. It deftly jumps away from its powerful attack. Even after blocking the blow, MC still flies into a tree. The beast swings and cuts it down. Heat radiates from the beast's body. It doesn't understand what's happening. Zagan runs at Morgana, shouting for her to hand over her water magic. He blazes as he stands before her. His gaze is wild, noticing that he can't move. The protagonist smiles and says that spirit magic is pure prey. Even if he could absorb it, he still doesn't know how to use it, and besides, it consumes you from the inside. The enraged monster hears that the spirit's power won't yield to any animal, and he screams that he deliberately fed it to him. The beast burns, and he orders Leo to dispel it immediately. The blonde, covering his face with his hand, asks Leo, "Didn't he just say not to interfere?" He hasn't changed his mind. Leo smirks, holding out his hand as he hears him ask for action faster. A powerful beam of purple energy pierces the apostle's body. His eyes glow, trying to understand what he's doing. The powerful beam reaches Morgana. The heroes are shocked. Her body is half incinerated. The protagonist, frightened, calls out for his mistress. Zagan, enraged, screams that Leo has betrayed him, but Leo replies that the goal comes first, and that their goal values their grandmother's death over his life. The villain, with a sly smile, says that the apostle's sense of smell helped track her down, but he reeks of dog, so thank you for your service. The monster angrily screams that he'll regret it, saying that even if he dies, there won't be any survivors left. A powerful explosion occurs, and he assures Setsuna that he will destroy everyone in the name of the master. Morgana, in pain, screams at Setsuna that they must act now. The protagonist forms a fiery sword in his hand. He deftly slashes the monster with an inferno strike. The apostle's head is split in half, and he calls them worthless. A stone falls and shatters. The protagonist sees black smoke emitting from the fragments. As they smoke, the protagonist notices the black stones. Setsuna furiously calls out for Leo. Seeing that he's gone, she realizes she can't sense his mana. MC angrily declares that wherever the villain is, he will be found. Next time, victory will be his. Birds fly over the forest. A woman kneels, bleeding. She falls to the ground, and the protagonist runs to her. Leano approaches nearby, and the protagonist begs her to hold on. A wounded woman lying on the ground claims that the apostle used decay magic. She smiles through her pain and assures him that nothing can save her. The professor frowns and remains silent. The protagonist nervously denies this. Leano holds his shoulder and pronounces his name. The lady lying next to him asks him not to be sad, for he has been recognized by the spirit of fire, and she has a request. She hands him an object. The protagonist holds it in his palm and hears that the power of his spirit has been gathered in this artifact. The lady, her face bloodied, smiles, saying that the spirit of water can be useful to him, and that she is counting on him. The man, looking sad, asks him not to speak as if this is the end. His eyes are saddened, promising that they will definitely think of something. The woman, her eyes open, stares into space. Setsuna kneels before the deceased and addresses the professor. Sadly, she asks what the point of strength is if it still cannot protect those dear to him. Lionel, frowning, remains silent. With a serious expression, he says that in life, you can't predict what will happen next. A person, no matter how strong, can't be prepared for everything. The most important thing is to keep going no matter what. Setsuna stands silently, hearing that he should know this better than anyone. The puppet watches silently. She approaches them, slaps the sad boy on the head, and shouts that they're caught. The protagonist, shocked, clutches his head, not understanding what's happening. The girl standing opposite declares that he shouldn't tell her anything about the ending, or she'll jinx him, because he's actually perfectly fine. Morgana, smiling, assures him that she's real. A clot of energy is visible in the man's body. It's said that the old woman is just another alchemical doll, special because a soul was implanted in her, which is why her feelings were there. The girl happily declares that they even deceived that apostle. Lionel, shocked, asks if this wasn't the real Morgana. The girl, smiling, says that she was the pinnacle of her alchemical art, clarifying whether they were truly surprised. Setsuna, perplexed, declares he's never seen such realistic dolls, saying he saw his grandmother in the spirit world too. She replies that it all depends on how you see it. The professor, with a serious expression, says she's too young to be Morgana. The protagonist, shocked, notices her ears. The girl, with a sweet smile, declares that she's an elf and lives longer than ordinary people, asking him to guess her age. Lionel turns to the student and promises he'll succeed, but he replies that there's no right answer to such questions. Morgana, smiling, declares she's over 300 years old. A surprised Setsuna asks if that means she participated in the Great War. The girl, with a sly smile, declares she can tell, but not for free. They stand among the ruins of a house, and the protagonist replies that he has some money. The girl exclaims that it's a joke and shouldn't be taken seriously, but that it's better to go to the lake because it's calmer there. Morgana, smiling, says that she'll tell him about the lost history there. The boys stand in front of a gorgeous lake nestled among the mountains. The girl picks up a stone and looks up. She throws it into the water. Disappointed, she declares she wanted to break her 90-year-old record. The boys stand there with disgruntled expressions. Setsuna asks the professor if she seems strange, and he suggests it's stress. Turning around, the heroine declares that there are several peoples in their world. Various races are shown, including humans, dwarves, and animals, including elves who, one might say, live forever. The elf stands in front of a beam of light, and it is said that thanks to their love of nature, they were able to establish contact with spirits, which is how they mastered magic. Morgana explains with a serious face that over time, humans began to worship elves and spirits, but some lost their way. An evil elf controls the human king. He wields blue energy, taught his people spirit magic, and waged a war to gain control of the world. At the ruler's command, mages attack, but the true king is an elf. The protagonist, looking at the girl, asks how the Great War began. Lionel notes that blind faith and power are a dangerous combination. The elves flee from the enraged humans. Both sides suffered heavy losses, and the worshippers of elves and spirits lost the war. Afterward, they became despised, accused of always seeking to seduce people from the true path. The man, with a serious face, declares that spirit magic has also come to be called simply ancient magic to hide its use, and she agrees. The professor, adjusting her shirt, asks if she hates humans for what they did to her people. The girl standing in front declares that there was such a time, and the man clarifies what about now. The elf, turning her head slightly, says she's keeping her distance. Imagining her grandmother, she says that many still hunt them and, even after 200 years, she feels remnants of hatred for humans, which is why she hid her true nature. Setsuna frowns and asks why she admitted to them that she is an elf. The girl remains silent. Turning, she declares that Donan trusts them, and they have proven themselves worthy of his trust. The protagonist smiles. The elf, smirking, says that he burst into tears, so after something like that, it's impossible not to show up. Setsuna rages as they laugh, thinking about the Great War, elves, and spirit magic. He remembers how he cut down Zagan and thinks he managed to slay one apostle. He looks at his hand and understands that with great power comes great responsibility. There's a seal on his hand, and he realizes that in his hands is forbidden magic that has produced many victims. The elf uses her magic. The protagonist used magic to carry trees. He shakes his hands. Morgana, standing across from him, says that this is where they part ways and thanks him for helping clean up the forest, and the protagonist thanks him back. They look at her happily. The guy is happy he got to meet her. The girl smiles silently. Lionel, smiling, asks what she'll do next. The elf spreads her arms, saying that the apostles have discovered her location, so they need to find a new one. They'll likely never see each other again. The protagonist interrupts her and addresses her by name. With a serious expression, he declares that if humanity is in danger, they will need her help. The protagonist bows, asking for help. The elf smiles, noting his persistence. She waves her finger and says that if needed, he should contact the director, as they exchange letters. Suddenly, the Setsuna sign lights up. Blazer jumps out. With a serious expression, he says she shouldn't think she beat him fair and square, and if she gets in his way again, she'll be burned to ashes. The elf, smiling, suggests they get caught in the rain again. The boys bow to her, wave their hands, and head off to the lizards. MC jumps onto one. Rain falls. His mother stands next to little Setsuna and declares that even if he has power, he doesn't know he's become a strong man. He asks again. The protagonist and the professor set off ahead. His mother told him that sometimes power can drive you crazy, and you can't let it control you. You need to use your mind. Control is most important. Raising his head, the protagonist realizes he's understood the true meaning of her words and will definitely find the right use for his fortitude. A joyful protagonist rides a lizard. Inside the room, a man stands. The mysterious stranger with red eyes. After all, everything is in place. A multicolored character asks Leo if he really couldn't kill that boy, and even abandoned his ally to certain death. Leo balks. Smiling, he explains that his mission was to kill the witch Morgana, and he succeeded. The long-haired villain asks if he's sure she's dead. The blonde man, standing behind him, claims he was checking her body. The stranger turns away, hearing that no one could survive such an attack. The villain, with a menacing glare, attacks him, declaring that he ordered her death. The boy grits his teeth, feeling pain. Another villain stands nearby and asks what they should do with him. Couldn't he at least bring Zagan's body? The stone emits purple energy, and it's said that if he had brought it, he could at least create undead with his abilities. Leo, smirking, declares that no one said Setsuna knew how the beast's ability works. The red-eyed villain claims this doesn't explain his mistake, but agrees that they shouldn't underestimate MC. A clown stands on the ceiling, claiming to have heard someone's evil spirits being torn to pieces. A girl in a dress stands nearby, calling Giovanni's name. A long-haired villain asks Tsukuyami if he can count on her. A cleavage-bearing villain declares that nothing can be done. She stands near a purple object, saying that it will soon be over. The eighth apostle with magical eyes asserts that their time will come. The boys raced quickly on dinosaurs. Turning his head, the man told Setsuna that it would take them about half a day to get to the academy. Lionel raised his head with a smile, wondering how Drago was doing and whether he trained around the clock. Looking at the sky, the protagonist said that he hadn't even noticed how worried he had become about everyone. Sitting on a dinosaur, Setsuna told his partner that previously he only thought about becoming stronger. Looking thoughtfully to the side, The hero told himself that long-range magic had always been rightfully considered the most powerful. Thinking back, the hero recalled how this magic had brought him victory in all his battles. In the company of others, Setsuna was always alone and never asked for anyone's help. With a smile, the boy realized that now everything had changed. Thinking about each of his friends, Setsuna decided that everything had changed only for the better, because he now had allies he trusted. Looking at his fist, the boy happily realized that other schools of magic also had their strengths, and he was glad that his magical energy control skills, acquired before his regression, had come in handy. Lionel, recalling the hero's failed attempts, understood that magical energy control is not just a talent, but something that can only be learned through extensive training. Lionel turned his head and smiled, replying that it would take 10 years to reach the level of a hero. Looking into the distance, the protagonist realized his partner had devoted much time to honing his skills, and now it became clear why he was the strongest in the world. His past could conceal a rich history, the night sky. Stopping near the forest, the heroes decided to take a break. Blazer's hands held amulets. He looked at them with interest, not understanding what they were. His hand held an unknown ball. Setsuna carefully studied a letter on paper. Smiling, the hero decided to put it off until the right moment. Studying the amulet, Blazer began to talk about sensing the energy of the water spirit within it. His hands raised the amulet to the night sky, realizing the water spirit could be useful to him. The hero's eyes were closed. Setsuna clutched the amulet to his chest, asking the water spirit if it could hear him. The glowing thing began to speak. The hero's eyes widened in surprise as he heard the amulet tell him not to be afraid. Opening his mouth, Setsuna heard the magical object tell him that it had seen him through Morgana's eyes and that if the hero could pass his test, the amulet would gladly share its power. Looking thoughtfully to the side, the boy decided he shouldn't rejoice, as a difficult battle would likely await him. Continuing to glow, the amulet begged him not to be afraid, as the test required the hero to simply make the amulet experience strong emotions. Setsuna stared ahead confused, but didn't understand what was being said. Continuing to glow, the amulet began to say that he had already exhausted his senses in the spirit world and now wanted to experience something new. Pointing his paw at the magical object, Blazer responded with disbelief that he didn't like it, despite the amulet harboring no negative emotions toward the little creature. Closing his eyes, Setsuna realized the amulet was friendly toward them. Someone's hand touched the boy's shoulder. Pointing at himself, Lionel happily replied that he had a suitable story, one that could bring anyone to tears. Waving his arms, the man replied that several decades ago, this country was saved by heroes named Ordino Iron Blade and Aura's Iron Armor, the night sky. After a while, morning arrived. Lionel, unlike his sleeping friends, looked up at the sky with tears in his eyes. Setsuna's surprised eyes widened. Looking at the hero, the boy couldn't believe he wasn't finished with his story yet. The amulet lay silently on the ground. Raising his head, Setsuna decided to simply consult with the others when he returned to the academy. Sitting on a bench, Layla thought about how to make someone experience a strong emotion. Drago looked seriously at Setsuna, asking him if something was wrong. Layla smiled at the protagonist, suggesting he go to the museum, as there would surely be someone there who could help him. Setsuna thanked her for the offer. Drago and Carol smiled, saying they would also help. Layla smiled, introducing the new girl. The heroine pointed at a statue, explaining something about it. Setsuna carefully examined his pendant. A satisfied Drago stood next to him. The puzzled protagonist looked incomprehensibly at his friend bragging about his figure. The magical object said nothing. Carol, manipulating the power of her animal, demonstrated her abilities. A few seconds later, a beautiful ice statue stood in the vast square. Blazer playfully looked at the ice. Suddenly, the little animal leaped onto the statue, shattering it. Setsuna examined the pendant. His eyes were sadly cast down. Light filtered through the trees. The sun was shining brightly outside. Setsuna was training in the forest with Blazer's magic. The boy's gaze began to wander. His foot quickly kicked to the side. The protagonist, with deft movements, demonstrated all he could do. The contented little animal sat on the grass, telling its master that he had masterfully used its power, and that now Setsuna would have to shed his human guise and reveal a new form. Turning to Blazer with a smile, the boy replied that he would soon master the new technique. Setsuna raised his head and looked in surprise at the falling snow. Glancing at his palms, the boy realized that winter had arrived. Looking away, the protagonist thought that what he had seen in the past would soon happen. Packing all his things into his backpack, Setsuna told the little animal to put off training, as he already had important business. Standing by the enormous tree, the hero realized he couldn't gain any more power from the sacred tree. He knew he'd already expended a great deal of mana during his training and would need to replenish it over the next few years. Walking forward, Setsuna realized that thanks to this power, he had mastered Blazer's power. Raising his head, the hero decided that his pre-New Year's holidays would soon begin, giving him more time to rest. Playfully turning toward the boy, the little animal understood that a great battle lay ahead. Confidently picturing Vindrake in his mind, the hero realized that before the regression, there had been 4 events that led to the collapse of humanity, and one of them would happen in exactly 7 days. Blazer, looking intently at the boy, pondered the incident. Looking away, Setsuna realized that the evil god's invasion had been made possible by 4 circumstances. Imagining the wounded dragon, it was clear that the other misfortune was an epidemic of disease among the dragons. After some time, a war emerged in his memories. These misfortunes included the destruction of the mage army and the disappearance of the capital. A bloody battle erupted in Setsuna's mind, a week from now, afflicting an army of the undead, resulting in the deaths of many mages and ordinary people. With a smirk, Blazer couldn't believe the undead could pose such a threat. Imagining the 3 undead, Setsuna explained to the little beast that they were the resurrected great heroes of the past. Imagining the monsters in his mind, he realized that because of their ability to summon special undead, they had all chosen to be apostles, and no one knew if they would have the strength to command an army of the undead. Imagining the empty city, Setsuna concluded that tomb robbers had desecrated the graves of heroes in his hometown. Walking through the forest, the protagonist told the little beast that he thought the criminals were hunting for treasure. Looking away, Setsuna realized he'd been at the royal cemetery that evening and now he'd have to prevent their kidnapping. School. Sitting at the table, Layla asked Drago if he was going home. He happily closed his eyes, replying that his father would pass on the secrets of ranged magic, passed down in their family for generations. A smiling Carol gestured toward Blazer, asking him if he'd go play on the icy fields. Layla, looking at the girl in surprise, realized that as an innkeeper's daughter, she couldn't understand. The girl, looking at the pensive Setsuna, asked him what he'd do. His eyes widened in concern. He asked the girl what she told him earlier. Layla, looking at the boy pityingly, realized he was lost and thought again. After all, he'd returned from the last vacation injured, and now she could suspect him of hiding something. Carol looked at her friend with displeasure. The heroine sarcastically raised her hand to her ear, suggesting that Setsuna was very popular with the girls, so she should hurry. Layla, glaring angrily at Carol, was perplexed by her friend's words. Frightened, she asked the boy where he lived, to which Setsuna replied that he was from the orphanage in Erdian. Layla realized with surprise that this place was very close to his house. Suddenly, one of the boys curiously asked the girl if she lived at the tavern. Carl, glaring angrily at Setsuna, told him his name. Smiling, the boy extended his hand to Layla, saying that if she became part of his circle, she would never have to return to the rotten tavern again, because he wouldn't skimp on treats. Her foot stepped on a twig. Her hand snapped. A few seconds later, Layla watched in surprise as Carl flew up the tree. Setsuna stared in amazement at the magic. Sitting atop the tree, the hero angrily shouted for Layla to take his filthy hands off him. A girl was staring at the heroine. Layla stared at the heroine in surprise. The red-haired heroine, smiling, rushed into the girl's arms. Setsuna wondered who she was. Layla smiled, pointing at the girl, saying she was her relative, who would take the heroine home for the holidays. The boy looked at the girl with a puzzled expression. Setsuna smiled, looking at the girls, thinking of the annual festival in Erdian. Imagining the cemetery, Roberta told everyone that they prayed over the heroes' graves at the royal cemetery on this festival. But tomb robbers had arrived for the festival and the heroes' bodies were stolen during the festival, when there were a large crowd and the city's defenses were weakened. Setsuna called out to the girl with a smile. Touching Layla, Roberta playfully told the boys they weren't being mean. The protagonist, smiling, pointed to himself and Drago, introducing himself. Somewhere in the distance, Carol waved shyly. Leaning on the protagonist's shoulder, Roberta replied that Layla had called him a talented guy. A girl standing nearby admired the fact that Setsuna was also from Erdian. Smiling, the protagonist asked the boys if they wouldn't mind if he went too. It was getting dark. The carriage was traveling along the road. It was winter break. Sitting in the carriage, Roberta told the boys that they would first take Layla home and only then go with Setsuna to the city. Sadly, the girl lowered her head, thinking about Roberta being alone with the protagonist. Carol's words immediately appeared in her mind. Staggering in the carriage, the heroine immediately shouted that she wanted to go to the party too. Looking out from the carriage, Roberta said that they were stuck. A pack of evil magical dogs gathered around the boys. Roberta, looking at the animals with displeasure, replied that there had been a proliferation of demonic creatures lately. Looking at the girl, Setsuna immediately realized she was using plant magic. With a wave of her hand, the girl instantly scattered all the magical stones in different directions. All the trees rose into the sky. With swift force, they fell upon the wolves. One of the animals screamed loudly, lying under a tree. Looking at Roberta with admiration, the protagonist praised her mastery of healing magic. Smiling, Setsuna realized that healing magic was used in the later stages of the war with the evil deity. As she left for the wolves, Roberta asked no one to approach, as a magical dog's bite could be fatal and melee magic was now useless. Aiming his fist, Setsuna asked them not to worry about him. A few seconds later, the hero's power immediately tore the wolves into tiny pieces. Roberta watched in amazement. Turning to face the girl, the hero asked if she was injured. Roberta, her mouth hanging open, couldn't believe Setsuna was a student, as he was a very powerful melee mage. Examining her hands, she told him that to use such magic, one must control the flow of mana, and then began asking a litany of questions. Looking at Setsuna's hand, Roberta asked him what kind of artifact it was. His gaze was fixed ahead. Waving his hand, the hero suggested they return to the carriage. Layla watched him closely, unsure what kind of glove it was. Approaching the house, the heroes decided to spend the night there. Roberta, curious, asked the hero if he wanted to tell her anything. Night fell. Getting out of bed, Layla said she couldn't sleep. Touching her face, the heroine realized she, too, wanted to go to the festival. Standing by the door, Layla overheard someone talking and decided to listen in. As she started to leave, the heroine stopped immediately, hearing Roberta talking about Setsuna. Her feet paused. The heroine, holding a magical communication device, was telling her to send 20 knights to cleanse Setsuna. Layla, knocking back a glass of water, heard Roberta's suggestion that she would execute the protagonist on the spot. The woman glanced sharply away. She flung open the door and scanned the hallway. There was a stain on the floor. Roberta stared at it intently, silent. Wooden mugs were stacked in a shelf. Roberta smoothed her hair with a smile, greeting Layla. The girl looked worried and wondered if she was acting casual. Had she dreamed yesterday's conversation? She remembered the woman's smile and thought that, if she thought about it that way, Roberta had bombarded Setsuna with questions yesterday. She had heard tales of ancient magic before, and the mages of that time had used their powers for evil. Layla slammed her fist on the table, thinking, Setsuna possesses their power. If so, what should she do? Setsuna entered the room and greeted the girls. He looked down silently. Roberta smiled and asked if he'd been training since early morning, well done, and if he wanted breakfast. The guy thanked her with a smile and said he was going to take a shower. The woman waved and suggested they go to the sauna. It was very nice. The red-haired beast turned and asked what a sauna was. Setsuna waved, thinking Blazer seemed to want to go, and said thanks for the advice, he'd try it. Roberta watched him go. A handle stuck out of a wooden bucket. The guy was sitting on a bench in the sauna. Blazer was sprawled out in the heat nearby, declaring he wouldn't give up, and the guy said he could control flames but suffered in the sauna. Roberta entered the sauna wearing only a towel and greeted her sweetly. Setsuna stared at her in amazement, and asked what she was doing there. The woman sat down next to him, saying it was a public sauna and that he wouldn't mind if she joined. She smiled as she looked at the hero's hand, thinking that he hadn't taken off his glove even in the sauna, so it must be more than just a glove. There was a sign by the door saying it was being cleaned, but she thought no one would come in. She'd find out soon enough. Pointing at the glove, Roberta asked if it wouldn't get wet, maybe she should take it off. The blue-eyed boy replied no, it was very important to him. Raising a finger coquettishly, the red-haired woman asked if it was a gift. She moved closer, touching his hand, and asked what he was hiding. His fingers tugged at the fabric of the glove. Suddenly, Layla burst into the room and shouted for them to stop. Pushing the woman out of the bathhouse, she shouted that there was a sign outside that they were cleaning, and to tell her to come out. Setsuna was helping. The hero looked at the girl in surprise, realizing she'd been spying on them for a reason. Looking ahead, the redhead reflected that she didn't think Setsuna was up to anything bad. She wouldn't let him execute her. A bright house. Roberta stood by the cart, and suggested they meet at Layla's house. With a wave of her hand, the redhead asked if she couldn't go with them to Elena, and heard him ask why she changed her mind. Touching her chest decisively, the girl replied that she wanted to see how Setsuna lived, maybe she could help at the orphanage. Folding her hands in a prayer gesture, she asked if she could come with them, and the brunette replied that he wouldn't mind. Layla smiled happily, and Roberta wondered if she had fallen in love with him, maybe he was a threat after all. The guy turned to the woman and asked what she would say. She agreed, and Roberta was delighted. Walking ahead, the woman thought that if she was nearby, he would behave himself. The hero stood before the gates. Setsuna said this was his home, Elena's orphanage. He entered and waved to the people who greeted him, asking what kind of animal that was. With a slight smile, Setsuna said he was back. The children surrounded him, hugging him. The boy thought he had been away for a long time. Layla watched with a smile. A man approached, saying they had missed him, saying it had been a while since they had seen him. The man touched his chest and said he was Thomas, working at the orphanage, and thanked him for looking after their Setsuna. Touching his friend's shoulder, Setsuna said he was like a brother to him, saying it was thanks to his efforts that the orphanage was still standing. Thomas added that he had grown up here himself, and wanted to repay the kindness shown. Thomas ruffled the boy's hair, saying he had grown a lot, and she thought she had never seen him so happy. The brown-haired man frowned slightly, saying he still couldn't believe he'd decided to become a melee mage. Hadn't he intended to pursue ranged magecraft and build a career, since melee was incredibly difficult? Smiling, Setsuna asked them not to worry and said he'd gotten into the right place. Clenching her fist, Layla resolutely exclaimed that Setsuna was an excellent mage. Thomas smiled, saying that since he had such a noble lady by his side, he wasn't worried. The girl smiled sweetly. Setsuna sat down by the gravestone, and announced that he had returned. Looking at the Holy Father, the girl asked whose grave it was and was told it belonged to the orphanage's founder, Sister Deborah. Standing next to the grave, the hero explained that Sister Deborah was his savior. Without her, he would have died. He saw no hope in this world. Roberta touched her chest, hearing the girl's words that he was very dear to her, and offered to tell them if he wanted. Setsuna pointed and said he still had business. They would talk later. On the wall, the boy sat near the entrance to the royal cemetery. Blazer said it was worth exploring. The man yawned, covering his mouth with his hand. The hero thought he'd known everyone had relaxed in the run-up to the holidays. Setsuna had his hood up, musing that it seemed the number of guards had been reduced. It would be difficult to defend against a criminal attack. He imagined the ruins and thought that the graveyard held the most powerful mages. If they turned undead, they would destroy the entire country. Frowning slightly, the hooded boy said that if they didn't stop the tomb robbers, they'd have to fight the risen heroes. The beast sitting next to him told him not to be afraid, that with him, he was safe, and he heard him say he was his support. Turning to his pet, the boy asked if he'd seen Roberta use magic. Looking at him, Blazer replied that he sensed something was wrong with her. Standing on the dais before the cemetery, Setsuna mused that the decisive battle would take place the day after tomorrow evening. He would fulfill his promise to his sister. The girls followed Thomas. Roberta asked him to tell them about Setsuna's childhood. Turning slightly toward them, he replied that he thought he would be against it. He had no right to talk about it. The red-haired woman narrowed her eyes. Taking out a token, she said it wasn't a request, but an order. The man asked if she was from the Inquisition. Frowning, he exclaimed that Setsuna was innocent when he heard her trying to find out whether Setsuna posed a threat to society. She turned to Layla and noticed that she wasn't surprised. She had been eavesdropping yesterday. The girl replied that it was an accident. Standing opposite, she asked the man to answer a few questions. Roberta added that she wouldn't tell anyone. Thomas closed his eyes and said that Setsuna had appeared at the orphanage on a rainy night. The heroes heard a knock on the door. The man said it was impossible to forget. A woman, her back riddled with arrows, sat on the threshold. Young Thomas's eyes widened in shock. The woman was kneeling by the threshold. She looked exhausted. She held a baby in her arms, and she begged him to save it. Remembering the wounded woman, he said that Setsuna's mother was Emma, and he would tell them about her. The girl held a basket of vegetables. Hearing the request for help, she was born into a family of farmers and was a dreamy girl. Smiling, holding Monhei, the girl said that it was Moin again. Was she destined to meet her soulmate? People watched the carriage pass. One day, an influential nobleman from a neighboring fief passed through the village. The girl in the hat looked at him with admiration. The aristocrat looked out the carriage window. He held a shining object in his hand. An expensive brooch glowed red, and he said he had never seen such a bright glow. The young man and his butler exchanged glances. Their hands reached out to each other, and the man said he fell in love with her. Holding Emma's hand, the brunette asked if she would go with him. The delighted girl agreed and thought that this was her destiny. She joyfully twirled around the expensive room, saying that the chambers were like a princess's, and so she began living at the Schneider estate. Then she stood alone in the empty hall. The nobleman had many concubines besides herself, and he rarely visited her. Emma sat, clutching her stomach, thinking that if she gave birth to a child, he would love her. The baby cried in swaddling clothes, and time passed. The aristocrat held the child with a smile. Turning to the girl, he praised her. Emma smiled sweetly and thanked him, thinking that now he was sure. The butler showed the gentleman the brooch. The stone on it didn't glow. The aristocrat shifted his gaze. Then he left the room. Visualizing a silhouette surrounded by energy, Thomas explained that the brooch indicated hidden magical potential. The aristocracy always pursued the best heredity. The child lay behind the men. The aristocrat was disappointed in Setsuna's abilities. Emma stared ahead, shocked. He had never been interested in her. He needed her body with greater magical potential. The astonished girl held the child. She sat on a simple bed and said she didn't believe it. Emma clenched her teeth. Grabbing the knife, she said that if he were more capable, she would be happy. The hand holding the knife trembled. Young Setsuna smiled joyfully. The girl's eyes filled with tears. The knife fell to the floor. The mother held the child, screaming. There was a knock at the door. The butler bowed, addressing his mistress. The brunette asked in surprise what he needed late at night. Closing his eyes, the servant replied that he had come to collect the child. The illegitimate children of aristocrats brought nothing but trouble, and bringing the child in meant getting rid of it. Standing at the threshold, the man said she couldn't raise him alone, to entrust all the chores to them, and she would definitely give birth to a beautiful child. The brunette's eyebrows arched. Smiling, touching the door, she asked him to wait a moment. After a while, Emma still hadn't emerged. The man stood in the empty room. The servant decided to investigate, but she was gone. The girl had fled the estate. Pointing his finger, the nobleman ordered the archers to capture her and bring them back alive. The woman saw her on her porch, and so the mother and child found themselves on the orphanage's threshold. Emma, bandaged, lay on the bed with the baby. Deborah thought she was seriously injured and would most likely die. Looking at her son, the girl said that because of him, he was born into a family that didn't love him, and that they had doomed him to misfortune. Imagining a happy family, she said that if he had been born to peasants, if she hadn't desired more, it would have been better for him to grow up in poverty but surrounded by love. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she said that if she hadn't believed the lies, she would soon die. Words couldn't express how much she loved her son. Looking at the girl, she asked Setsuna to protect her. Setsuna took her hand. With a determined expression, Deborah promised that the orphanage would take care of him. They would never give him up. Thomas stood nearby, worried, having heard that his son wasn't doomed because of his lineage. Their well-being depended on them. Emma cried, hearing that her son would find happiness. She swore to protect him. The brunette's eyes closed with gratitude. The child looked forward. The woman and the boy prayed. 7 years later, the boy sat by the grave. He turned around, and Thomas, surprised, asked where he'd gotten hurt. Setsuna remembered the fight, and said they'd been playing when Slain had hit Raka. The blonde pushed him to the ground, and the boy said he'd wanted to hit him back, but he'd easily brushed him off. Setsuna was surprised by the strength of a boy who'd only just begun learning magic. Angrily waving his hands, he said that he'd said later that commoners would never be a match for aristocrats. He'd never be able to defeat him. The angry child's cheek was swollen. He asked if it was true that he would never be able to protect his friends. Deborah smiled and suggested he pray. The sky was painted with the colors of the sunset. The boy asked if he could pray and God would help. The woman laughed. Intertwining her fingers, she said that prayer would surely reach God. The boy with the wounded cheek heard that his mother was a strong woman, so he shouldn't rush. Smiling, stroking his head, Deborah said that in time, he too would become strong. Setsuna smiled at her. Later, she handed him a book, saying that if magic didn't work out, he would find another way. The hero held the book. Emma had taken it from the library during her escape. She believed it would help her son. The hero opened the book. His black eye looked down. Then, Setsuna delightedly read that it was a book about magic control. Deborah held a sheet of paper and, hearing the child's confusion, suggested he try it. Fire appeared in the woman's palm, and she summoned a fireball. A vortex formed in the center of her palm. A beam of fire pierced the sheet. Setsuna looked at it in admiration, saying that the spell released a huge ball. How had she managed to compress it? Holding the paper, the mentor explained that by learning to control the flow of mana, spells could be used in various ways. The book explained this. He had only just begun his training, and the book contained many useful lessons. Setsuna smiled and said he would continue. Opening the pages, he complained that he didn't understand what the book said. Sitting down next to him, Deborah explained that the book was intended for experienced mages. They read it together. Since then, Setsuna had been constantly learning to control magic. He diligently reached out to the stone, without stopping. A magical wind ruffled the hanging sheets. Setsuna trained with a candle instead of playing with the children. 5 years later, he stood before a tree. The wind blew the leaves. His palms glowed. Setsuna was 12 years old. Thomas approached him and said it was impressive. Sooner or later, he would become a powerful mage. Setsuna scratched his head with a smile and heard the question. Have you already chosen a specialty? Raising a finger, the hero presented a figure and said that ranged mages were known for their precise control of mana. If he learned to completely control it, he would have more room to maneuver. He closed his eyes and rattled off that he wanted to try his hand at different approaches, but to do so, he needed to master the spellcasting of each school. After entering a particular path of magic, other areas became inaccessible. The best he could come up with was to train in magic related to each school. By the age of 17, he would choose the path that suited him best. Thomas asked where he had put cute little Setsuna. The boy quickly ran forward. The heroes looked at him, and Setsuna asked what had happened. Alarmed, his comrade exclaimed that something was wrong. Slain had taken Raka with him. The boy and the elder were shocked to hear that he had mocked the girl and then dragged her into the forest. Setsuna quickly ran forward and did not hear any attempts to stop him. The crowd stood in front of Raka. She looked at them fearfully and begged him to stop. Slain licked his lips. Approaching insidiously, he ordered the commoner not to resist. She was lucky he, a nobleman, had noticed her. He reached out to the girl, whose eyes were closed. The blonde turned, waving, and asked what was wrong and to have them guard. The monster swung its club at the screaming boy. The children, frightened, saw goblins. Slain frowned, saying he didn't know they lived here, and his frightened friend asked them to do something. The blonde man cast his magic on the goblin. It fell to the ground, and he joyfully told the others that this was what he was capable of. Glancing sideways at the frightened Raka, he said he was a talented wizard. His henchman, standing nearby, said he was the best. He would definitely be a battle mage. The children looked at the goblin in surprise. Slain's hands glowed. Striking with a stream of magic, he told the pathetic monsters to know their place. The monsters held clubs. The blonde man's expression turned fearful. He grabbed the girl by the hair, shoving her forward and ordering her to restrain them. Raka sat trembling before the goblins. Fear was etched on her face. Then it gave way to surprise, and he heard Slain say he was wasting his magic by not converting it into a spell. The blonde man tensely recognized the hero who had said he wouldn't harm the goblins. Setsuna shielded the girl with his body. Glancing at Raka, he asked if she was hurt. She replied that she wasn't, thanking him for coming to his aid. Slain chuckled, thinking he'd drawn the goblins onto himself. He and his comrades took off running, saying the commoners could handle the monsters themselves. Setsuna looked at the screaming goblins. Holding their clubs, they ran after the nobles. The boy turned to his surprised friend and said the goblins were angry because of his blows, then sent her to Thomas and the boys. The monsters were catching up with the aristocrats. The boys ran to save themselves, and the blonde asked where they were going. He waved his hand and shouted that he didn't give them permission. Slain ran to the cliff. He stopped at the very edge. Turning fearfully to the goblins, he shouted at them not to come any closer. They ran up with clubs, and the boy screamed. Setsuna held a magic ball in his palm, saying that he looked pathetic without his friends. The boy threw the ball at the goblin. Turning enthusiastically, Slane asked if he would help him, and if he saved him, he would make him his servant. The hero grinned and asked him not to talk nonsense. He wasn't going to save him. The blonde frowned. With his back to him, Setsuna said he knew what he wanted to do to Raka. Turning angrily, he declared he would drag him out of here to make him pay for his actions. The goblins approached. Setsuna cast a beam of magic at them. The surprised nobleman watched. The monster swung its club. The boy's magic threw it back. Smiling contentedly, Slane asked if he had learned to control magic. He pointed a finger at Setsuna, saying he'd been surprised at first that he could do anything, but his mana was so low that he couldn't cast even the simplest spell. Frowning, the nobleman said he might think he was strong, but he shouldn't be too proud. In this world, everything depends on mana. Standing in front of the monsters, Setsuna said he was right. His mana was limited. Even goblins were difficult for him to handle. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. Recalling the images from his training, he thought he was honing his magic control. The edges of the paper caught fire. Holding it up with a determined expression, Setsuna declared he would show him what he'd learned. The blonde, clutching his head in fear, asked why he knew magic and enchantments. He hadn't learned them yet. Holding the burning paper, Setsuna replied that it wasn't enchantment magic. He controlled his core and used raw magic. He imagined the core in a baby's chest, thinking of the mana core, the vessel containing the source of magic. Each person is born with a specific vessel, taking shape through training. A bright spark glowed in the man's chest. It served as a repository for magic and allowed the use of any form. Lightning erupted from the boy's wrist. A spark also glowed in Setsuna's chest. Since childhood, he had been able to change the shape of the core through magical control. Throwing the burning paper forward, the boy ordered not to inhale it. The paper fell to the ground. The goblins, seeing the flames, screamed. Covering his nose, Setsuna said they wouldn't have defeated them as long as they had left them alone. Slane stared ahead in amazement, thinking that he hadn't been able to deal with the goblins, yet he had gotten rid of them so easily. The blonde's body glowed with a flick of his palm. The hero explained that it was a blessing of light, created by the use of life magic. With it, they could withstand the blow. Turning to him, Slane said it looked like restoration magic, only to be told it was just raw magic. He frowned, thinking that his magic was similar to restoration and enchantment anyway. How many directions were available to him? Setsuna grabbed the nobleman's hand. Pulling him forward, he said they would jump off the cliff and escape. Was he scared? The boys jumped down, Slane thought, thinking he'd chicken out. The heroes plummeted. Water splashed up. A fire was burning in the cave. Slane lay on the ground. He glanced to the side, hearing the question. "Are you awake yet?" The boy cried out in fear, hearing Setsuna say he'd lost consciousness when they jumped off the cliff. Was he scared? He saw the circle of stones and thought it was a protective circle, a shaping magic. Gritting his teeth angrily, he thought Setsuna knew that too. Approaching from behind, he asked disapprovingly. "A commoner, what, a genius at magic?" Turning to him, Setsuna replied. "No, he trains every day, that's all he knows." Standing in front, he said that since he'd woken up, it was time to leave. He hadn't yet answered for what he did to Raka. Thomas stood with the others at the shelter and scolded Setsuna, asking what he was thinking. Setsuna apologized and said he'd saved Raka. He nudged the blonde from behind, saying that he was the culprit. The girl glared at him. Slane looked frightened. Pushing the blonde toward his friend, Setsuna said that they hadn't met any of his family along the way, so he could do whatever he wanted with him. The blonde turned tensely and heard that one word would send him back to the goblins. Raka glared at the boy, who had begged him not to do it, and said she wouldn't. The girl sharply kneed him in the groin. The aristocrat's eyes rolled back in pain. Thomas looked surprised. Setsuna was impressed. Squeezing her eyes shut, the girl screamed at him to stay away. The elder smiled and told her they hadn't expected this, and the hero added that he deserved it. Despite their poverty, they lived happily, but this happiness wasn't destined to last forever. Deborah lay coughing in bed. The children gathered around her. 15-year-old Setsuna placed his hand on Thomas's shoulder and offered to call a restoration mage, but he refused. Holding the woman's hand, he promised to become a holy father at the temple and take care of the orphanage. Deborah smiled and said he could do it. She touched the cheek of Setsuna, who had told her he had decided to enroll in a magic academy, and praised him. Pressing the woman's hand to his cheek, the boy said that without her, none of this would have been possible. Looking at the boys, Deborah said they were great. Her lips curled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Wiping her eye with her palm, she said she would die soon, but for now she wanted to repent to them for becoming orphans because of her. The children were surprised, asking what she was talking about. The woman explained that she had once served as a mage in the army. Setsuna stared intently at her scar. There was a magical seal on the woman's palm, and she said she had always fought for peace. The girl stood amid the burning rubble and recalled that night they were attacked by a huge army of demons. Blood streamed down Deborah's face as she cried, saying she had failed to protect her village. Setsuna tensely exclaimed that it was not her fault. The orphanage residents were surprised to hear that their parents were among those killed that day. She recalled sitting, clutching her stomach, and explained that demons had cursed her, eating away at her body from the inside, preventing her from having children. She recalled handing the fruit to the children and said that she had left the army, seeking hope in this village, seeking forgiveness. The woman looked from one child to the other, explaining that by caring for them at the orphanage, she had tried to atone for her guilt, but in reality, she had wanted to help herself. Still crying, Deborah said it sounded pathetic, but they were her treasures. She recalled how they had woven wreaths together. The girl placed a wreath on her head, and the woman thanked her for being there. She looked tenderly ahead. She remembered the joyful students, saying that her happiness was seeing their sincere smiles. Setsuna held the eldest's hand, saying that they were happy because of her, that it was thanks to her efforts that they were still alive. Tears streamed down his cheeks, and the boy thanked her. He remembered how the woman had consoled him and said that she had been a beacon of light in his life, just like her. He wanted to protect the children, and he swore to become the strongest ranged mage. With a determined expression, the boy declared that he would graduate from the academy with honors, become a mage, and receive many awards. They would all watch over the orphanage and not disgrace her name. Remembering the crying baby, the woman said that he had become stronger. She closed her eyes and thanked him, saying that now she could rest easy. The hand fell from the boy's grasp. The children gathered around the bed cried out, calling her sister and mother. Soon after, Setsuna entered the magic academy. Layla wiped away tears, explaining that Setsuna had been through so much. Roberta stared ahead tensely, wondering if this was how he developed control over magic. His knowledge was beyond his years. Frowning slightly, she wondered why he'd chosen melee magic, when ranged magic was the shortest route to success. She turned away thoughtfully, wondering if something had made him change his mind. She didn't want to overdo it, but it was worth checking anyway. Night. Roberta hid behind a tree, thinking that mages who wield ancient magic were said to have a special mark on their hand. She tossed the branch forward, thinking she'd find out everything here. Setsuna looked away. He blocked the flying branch with his hand. The fabric of his glove tore.